Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching what if Naruto sacrificed himself during 4th Shinobi War. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no more time. Let's start the story.
Saru, Uma, Tori, Tatsu, Habi, Hitsuji, Nezumi, Inu, Tora, Saru, and so on. After much effort, Naruto completed the last of his hand seals, and a drop of sweat trickled down his brow. Now he understood why Jiraiya had categorized this jutsu as forbidden. Even by his crazy standards, the chakra drain was concerning. He would have most likely passed out from chakra exhaustion as soon as he formed the first 5 seals if it weren't for the Kyuubi. However, the person who had tried the jutsu most likely had a death wish in the first place. It was more important to stay alive long enough for the jutsu to work than to pass away before doing anything. Naruto barely managed to hang on. His life chakra was already being attacked by the jutsu. Because of his host's foolishness, the fox was yelling at him, but Naruto ignored it. Rather, he concentrated on the adversary before him. A set of mismatched eyes glared back at him with hatred, but they were also filled with shock. Uchiha Madara yelled, You fool! Do you have any idea what that jutsu is going to do to you as well?" There was a hint of panic in his voice, which Naruto found somewhat satisfying. The Sharingan was frantically attempting to come up with a jutsu move to rescue its master from their current situation while spinning wildly in his right eye socket. It won't do anything. Madara was trapped and had nowhere to go because of the powerful barrier Naruto had previously put up around them and the Kinjutsu's broad blast range. He was so weak that he was unable to warp himself away with his remaining chakra. Despite the fact that he was already running on more than empty, Naruto calmly responded, "I'll probably die as well, yeah, but at least I'll take you down with me. And what will be in it for you? You won't gain anything from this, you foolish boy." That's correct, Naruto thought. For one thing, at least this'll reduce the number of casualties we will have on our side. For the past year and a half, this dreadful war has been dragging on. This has led to the downfall of many shinobis and samurais alike. I will end my own suffering. Madara. Today will be an end to everything. If it means my friends and my comrades can live in a peaceful future, I won't mind sacrificing my life for it, Naruto shouted. Naruto gave Madara a wild smile as he met her gaze. This will be your final farewell. Goodbye. The other's fear and terror only made Naruto's smile bigger. Who do you think you are? Ending me? Uchiha Madara? This is blasphemy. Unthinkable. Natsu said. Well, they used to call me the #1 knuckleheaded, hyperactive ninja. I can't disappoint them during my last few moments now, can I? Ushi. Tengoku Kikomu no Jutsu. As promised by the jutsu, a dazzling white light surrounded them both. At the back of Naruto's mind was the distant roar of an angry fox, and he could feel the last of his chakra reserves dwindling. Madara's cruel cry of rage was the last thing Naruto heard before he collapsed, grinning in triumph. Naruto. There were other voices in the area that could be heard in addition to Sasuke's. Horror cries from the other 12 rookies, who were no longer rookies, as well as the Jonin senseis joined his own. As bright light filled their vision, the many fighting people who were dispersed throughout the area slowed to a stop. After a short while, it subsided, and many people blinked as their vision returned. Sasuke didn't even hold off until his eyesight returned to normal. He hurried on, determined to track down his best friend Kakashi, who he had regained seconds earlier, without its caster providing energy to keep it going. The enraged barrier that Sasuke and Kakashi had been attempting to breach for the previous 10 minutes vanished. When his vision finally cleared and Sasuke saw his blonde teammate bruised and still on the ground, his stomach dropped. Sasuke dropped to his knees and gave his teammate's pale body a rough shake, saying, "Dobi. Hey, Dobi. Wake up. What happened? Wake the hell up, Usura Tonkachi." The words, S. Sasuke. Teme. K. Kashi, Sensei, caused Naruto's eyes to open, but his pupils were lifeless, drab, and staring into nothingness. A grin twitched up the corner of his lips, but it was a great effort on the part of the blondes. His chest was heaving greatly from the effort to breathe, and his entire body was in ruins from spasms. Kakashi swooped down next to Sasuke and examined his other pupil, saying, "Naruto, stop talking. Sakura should be here in a moment." "I don't have long," Kakashi wheezed in agony, but Naruto didn't seem to hear him. "That jutsu used up the last of my chakra. But I did it. I defeated Madara." Sasuke shouted, forcing himself to remain composed and not panic. "Naruto, shut up. That's enough. Stop talking. Why isn't he being healed by the Kyuubi's chakra?" Despite the fact that every breath seemed to hurt him a lot, Naruto persisted. "I'm glad that you're all safe. You guys, don't feel sad after I'm gone. I didn't regret my actions even for a single moment. Sasuke suppressed the tears that threatened to spill out of his eyes. What are you saying? You moron. Stop talking right now. The medics are arriving soon. You won't die. I won't let you die. Naruto grinned ruefully and turned to face Sasuke's general direction, but his eyes remained blurry and unfocused. I guess, my only regret was not being able to become a Hokage, he said. So take care of the village for me. Kakashi interrupted Sasuke, head bowed and eyes sad, before he could object and scream at the blonde. Don't worry, Naruto, we will. Naruto closed his eyes and mumbled, I'm leaving then, and I don't want any of you to follow me for at least another 50 years. Why don't you hear me? Then, we'll watch the fireworks again, all of us, together. It's a promise. Itekamatsu. Atarashai. Naruto. After yet another unsuccessful journey from Rukongai, Naruto let out a dejected sigh. He took his Zanpakuto, Shinshihiko, out of his obi, threw it to one corner of his room, and sighed deeply as he sat on the porch and looked up at the clear blue sky. It's likely that Shinko would later berate him for his lack of respect and other things, but Naruto wouldn't care. They would insult one another, Naruto would roll his eyes, and he would snore, and somehow everything would be fine when he was sent on another pointless extermination mission. What happened to the mutual trust and understanding that Shinigamis must have with their Zanpakuto? Many of his fellow Shinigami comrades thought their relationship was strange. They had come to the conclusion that Naruto had never succeeded in becoming anything more than a Shikai because of this. Naruto gave a snort. If only they were aware. In retrospect, Naruto had thought it was hilarious that Seireii had thought he was a prodigy. They claimed that he had a large Ryotsu reserve and was a naturally skilled fighter. His incapacity to commit Kido chants to memory and his lack of drive to surpass his current level of success were the only things holding him back. He was only able to perform a few Kido in the first, and he had been stuck in 4th place for the previous 20 or so years in the second. To the dismay of Kion and Sentaro, Yukitake. Taiko has been pressuring him lately to assume the position of lieutenant. Naturally, he firmly declined all the repeated offers. A true prodigy, he was fortunate to have kept all of his instincts, fighting abilities, and intelligence from his previous life. When Neji and Sasuke arrived, Uzumaki Naruto, the dead, last and dropout of his year, pondered what Seireii would call him if he were to be crowned a prodigy. Perhaps Kami. He laughed aloud at the idea of these black-clad individuals worshipping Sasuke. Hold on. That would exacerbate Sasuke's already swollen head, wouldn't it? At the terrifying thought, Naruto halted his laughter and shuddered. Perhaps Sasuke shouldn't become a Shinigami after all. Over 67 years have passed since he found himself lost and bewildered in Seireii. He joined the Shinigami Academy and entered Seireii 60.1 years ago. He has had his Shikai mastered for 58 years. He left the Kido Corps and joined the 13th Division 49 years ago. Since then, he has been lying motionless here. It was becoming dull and gloomy and making him nervous. Naruto screamed in exasperation, damn. I told them not to follow me, but seriously, this is too much. Since he had joined the 13th Division and had plenty of free time, he had been going down to Rukongai on a number of occasions, but he had never once seen anyone he knew. A normal shinobi on service is unlikely to live past 50, and missions still need to be completed even though it was likely peacetime now that Madara was gone. Mentally calculating, Kakashi would need to be at least 90 years old to be alive, something Naruto seriously questioned. However, in both Seireii and the countless streets of Rukongai, Naruto never once seen his shock of silvery white hair. There was not even a hint of Jiraiya, so forget about Kakashi. Naruto could have easily walked to District 80 in West Rukongai and back with his eyes closed after skulking through the streets of Rukongai for more than 50 years. Additionally, note how many bathhouses there are in each of the 320 districts. Well, that was a bit over the top, but still. Furthermore, Seireii ought to draw the shinobis who enjoy fighting, right? For this reason, Naruto also chose to enlist, but regrettably, no familiar faces showed up. Naruto came to the conclusion that there must be another afterlife somewhere, reserved exclusively for shinobi, and that it was simply his good fortune to end up in one that was distinct from the others. Ultimately, this real world was nothing like the elemental nations at all. Perhaps a parallel plane. His heart ached at the idea of never being able to see his friends again. Uzumaki-san. You look dejected. Another failed trip? Naruto turned to see Kuchiki Rukia, an unranked Shinigami, approaching him while her Zanpakuto swung lightly beside her. Because of her slightly overly protective older brother, Byakuya, she stayed in the lower ranks of the division even though she had mastered her Shikai eons ago. What do you think? Naruto asked, grinning ruefully at her. Really, there are times when Byakuya can be worse than Neji when he's dealing with Hinata. With a frustrated sigh, Rukia paused and leaned against the wall before sitting elegantly across from him. Both of her remarks were likely more statements than questions, so Naruto didn't bother to respond. You never give up, don't you? I guess it would be futile of me to ask you yet again on what you've been so desperately searching for the past 50 years. Where's Shinshihiko-san? Carelessly, Naruto answered, I dumped him at the back of my room. He turned to her and said, but really, Rukia, you should stop calling him that and stop adding honorific suffixes to the end of his name. The old fox doesn't deserve those. Rukia responded, and that's probably the reason why your Bankai training didn't do well. Naruto gave her a suspicious look while shrugging a little. I'm not intending to take up captain position anyway, so it wouldn't matter if I can do Bankai or not. And how would you know anyway, huh? Have the little missy been spying on my training? I didn't, Rukia said, looking horrified. She was really very easy to make fun of at times. Naruto suppressed a laugh. I just thought your Ryotsu hasn't been improving lately, and you know, a Shinigami's Ryotsu changes after achieving Bankai. Before Naruto could say anything more, another voice cut them off. Yukitake Jushiro, the captain of the 13th Division, sighed in frustration as he sat down next to his fourth seat on the porch. That's enough, Naruto. Stop teasing Kuchiki so much. She's going to hate you one day. Then his blonde subordinate caught his attention. Anyways, Naruto, about your current position. Nah. But I haven't even. No, come on, Uzumaki. Naruto crossed his arms and sighed, I don't need it, and I don't want it. Appreciate your concern, Taiko, but I'm quite comfortable with my current position, thank you. In a desperate attempt to persuade him to agree, Yukitake. Taiko smiled at him and said, don't be so cold. You'll get a higher wages and several more benefits. Help your sickly Taiko out once in a while. Unfortunately, Naruto remained steadfast and said, and more paperwork. He said darkly, besides, I don't want that post. He's the only one that deserved it, so I won't take it from him. At his words, the three of them fell silent. Kaien. When he first joined the 13th Division, he and Rukia had been pretty close to that man. Naruto held the man in high regard and regarded him as if he were an older brother. They had a close relationship and frequently trained together. However, Kaien had passed away while Naruto and his cherished wife were on a real-world mission. He left without even saying goodbye, and Naruto wasn't entirely forgiving of it. Rukia broke the somber tension by clearing her throat. So, Taiko, what brings you here? You didn't come just to join us in our idle chat, did you? They clapped hands with their Taiko. Oh, I forgot. Kuchiki, you've been assigned to a long-term mission in the real world at a place called Karakura Town or something. Apparently, they've regular fluctuations of high Ryotsu, so be careful. Taiko, Rukia interrupted, her eyes narrowed, and she didn't even bother to listen to the others as a wave of fear swept over her. When must I leave? For a moment, her captain's brows were furrowed in contemplation. Let's see, you have to collect the mission debrief and paperwork at 12. With a slight curse, Rukia leapt to her feet and ran away, her heavy, hurried footsteps reverberating through the corridors. Wouldn't that make me super late by now? She asked. Naruto and Yukitake exchanged amused glances. Yukitake. Taiko turned to his other subordinate after Rukia left. Now, Naruto-kun, about your... Naruto cried out in exasperation, covering his ears with his hands in a moment. Naruto also got up and hurried into his room, slamming his door shut with a loud snap. I'm not gonna listen to any more of your whining. It's not working. No, it's not working one bit. I'll be excusing myself now, Taiko, and don't follow me, he said. Yukitake muttered to himself, a little shocked, to think they were so cute and polite when they first joined the squad. Hey, Fox. What's wrong with me? In his mind. Scape, Shinshihiko opened one eye to see his stupid mortal pacing up and down next to his cage. With its drab, oily walls and soggy floors, the mind. Scape was as dull as usual. The sewer's numerous chambers were strewn about haphazardly, ready to trap and imprison any intruders within its mind. Boggling labyrinths, and it still radiated an unsettling light. What do you mean what's wrong? Are you referring to your stupidity that got us killed? Give that a rest, will you? It's been more than 60 years already and you're still yapping away about that? Naruto sighed. Well, too bad for you, Fox, but I've never once regretted my actions on that day. Shinko screamed, his red fur brimming with rage. Obviously I would be sore about it. Look at me. I'm small, I'm cute, I'm fluffy. Am I the only one who is seeing something devastatingly wrong about this? To the fox's dismay and complete embarrassment, That specific fact was the only thing that had changed in the previous few years. Naruto smiled. Why yes, of course you are. Shinko complained angrily. Naruto persisted in his provocations. But to think that the almighty Kyuubi, most fearsome of the Bijus, would be reduced to such a pitiful state. Oh, the shame. If you continue on with your foolish blabbering, I'll stop loaning you my powers from here henceforth, and you shall be doomed to remain with only a Shikai for the rest of your puny life here. Ah, but it's not like the times when we were still alive, Kyuubi. Naruto laughed. Naruto sobered up and looked at the fox gravely. Right now, you are my Zanpakuto. If your master ordered you to, you'll have no choice but to comply, true? He asked. So what's the deal, fox? Why haven't I seen Kakashi, Sensei and the rest of them yet? Like you said, maybe they ended up in a different plane. I'm not too sure about that myself, idiot. It's my first time dying too, you know. Then, why only me? Why am I the only one who ended up in this world? Probably, 'cause you died along with me. After giving it some thought, Naruto asked, you mean my Jinchuriki status? But Gaara and B. That Gaara kid had his Biju taken out of him forcibly, and then he was revived. That means when he dies the next time, he'll die as a normal shinobi. B. I don't know, maybe like the fourth Mizukage, he'd found a way to extract the Biju before dying, so as to create another Jinchuriki for the cloud? Shinko breathed a sigh of relief when Besides, as far as I know, you're the only Jinchuriki I know stupid enough to take your Biju along with your death. The rest either had their Biju extracted by the Akatsuki, or a seal master, to leave the Biju around for a new host. Naruto sighed, well, sorry for being stupid, and I'm sure Konoha really loves Jinchurikis very, very much. Shinko flicked his now bushy tails and said, ooh, the sarcasm is thick. Don't worry about it too much. Right now, just concentrate on remaining close to the higher dot-ups for more information, but don't drag yourself too deep into their politics. I sense a storm brewing. That's what I've been doing for the past 50 years, you stupid fox. Naruto murmured. Why don't you tell me something I don't know? Steer clear from that Aizen guy. He reeks of bad blood. Aizen? That noob of a captain with the heavy set of glasses? Naruto sighed. Don't you mean Jin? Looks can be deceiving, and I don't like the feeling I get when I'm near that guy. The same goes for that captain. General Yamamoto. Whatnot as well. Jin is alright. Naruto put his hands behind his head and got ready to exit his mind. Scape. Aizen, and the old man. I got it. Thanks, Shinko. It's alright to obtain captain position, you know. It would be something close to becoming a Hokage anyway. Shinko said casually as he inspected his sharp claws. The paperwork is just an excuse. You're more than qualified for the job, and the paperwork that comes with it. Naruto stopped walking and tilted his head in the direction of the fox. It's not the same. I only want to be Hokage to protect my precious people. And right now, there are only a select handful of them. Besides, Yukitaki. Taiko is already the captain of this division and all captain positions are filled. I'm not after the seat for the power, Shinko, it's for the people. Shinko grinned and said, so basically, you don't see those Shinigamis as something worth protecting. I didn't know that you were that kind of person. Naruto nodded absently, something like that, yeah. I didn't say I was benevolent in the first place. With a casual wave of one arm, Naruto vanished from sight. I can protect the ones I care for well on my own from my current standing, so there really isn't a need to advance further. And like I told you before, my loyalty lies with Konoha alone. I'll be seeing you again soon, Fox. Yane. Shinsuhiko muttered to himself, his chest rumbling with laughter, foolish kid. Ain't he a sentimentalist? For one Shinigami, Kuchiki Rukia, the day began rather routinely. She had accompanied Ichigo to school to pass the time after helping him with his hollows hunt the night before and frightening him to no end the following morning by abruptly and violently leaping out of his closet. She had to lie low to keep Soul Society from noticing her until she regained her powers because she had nothing better to do after giving Ichigo her Shinigami powers. The stunt she had performed that evening was definitely against the law by Shinigami standards. Fortunately, they most likely haven't discovered anything because she was still, in one way or another, carrying out her duty of eliminating the hollows. Rukia was aware that she would soon run out of luck and would have to endure one of the worst punishments a Kuchiki could ever inflict on her home as a result of her crime. She would greatly annoy Byakuya. Sama, who would likely disown her before she had a chance to enter his home. Among the many things Rukia had feared facing was his anger. Another would be Naruto, Renji, and Yukitaki. Taiko's dejected expressions. Well, from Sentaro and Kion too, she reluctantly acknowledged. Now that it was lunchtime, Rukia's thoughts were interrupted when Inoue erupted in ecstatic cries about her favorite foods, which included raw beef, peanut butter, sashimi, garlic spread, and other items Rukia didn't bother to notice. Chad and Ichigo were both wincing at the thought of the final product of Inoue's creations. Rukia closed her eyes contentedly and thought, I guess it'll be alright to stay like this, for now. However, she heard Inoue calling her name as she opened them. Ah, I'm sorry. What were you saying again, Inoue-san? She looked up. Orihime Inoue smiled excitedly and said, I said, Kuchiki-san, what do you think of sandwiches with mustard, persimmons, mashed garlic, yogurt, and pickled chilies for topping? There was already a hint of green in the faces of the two boys in the background. Chad appeared hesitant to finish his bento after his mind was filled with unsettling visions of an inedible menu, and Ichigo in particular appeared to be trying to choke back his vomit. Rukia wished she had misheard at least half of the list of ingredients. The understatement of the century was probably, well, I think it's rather mismatched, but at least Rukia tried to be kind to the girl. Sorry to interrupt, but is Kuchiki Rukia in this class? When Rukia heard the two familiar for comfort recognizable voice, her eyes widened almost comically, and all thoughts of leaving a long, undetected, peaceful life in Karakura flew out of her head. Turning her head in the direction whereby the voice came from, she was met with a stalk of bright yellow hair and deeply tanned skin. The figure was resting idly against the door frame, looking around the room with his head poking in curiously. As his eyes met hers and recognition sank into his cerulean blue eyes, Rukia felt her stomach sink. The figure's face brightened and he began to walk toward her, waving enthusiastically. Now that her suspicions were validated, Rukia moaned. Naruto Uzumaki had located her. His classmates began to murmur as the blonde foreigner approached them. The majority came from the women, who were laughing wildly at the unexpected stranger. Ichigo could distinctly pick out words like blonde, good, looking, and striking. Reluctantly, he understood why. The man wore a black hooded jacket with sleeves pushed up to his elbows that partially covered his horribly orange shirt, which he wore casually. He was dressed in black sneakers and faded jeans, with a small backpack casually slung over one shoulder. Although he had a slender build, many people wouldn't consider him tall. Overall, his vivid yellow hair, which could compete with Ichigo's own orange hair, would be regarded as the most striking feature. It rose on its ends, sloppy, framing his face, which was now a big, silly smile. He appeared youthful. Ichigo calculated that the foreigner was only 2 years older than him, at about 18. As soon as the foreigner was within earshot, Rukia jerked out of her chair. You idiot! What are you doing here? She yelled, face looking slightly shocked and apprehensive. Ichigo made the decision to closely monitor the man, assuming he could even elicit such a response from Rukia, who is typically cool and collected. In any case, how does this guy know Rukia? Perhaps he met her during one of her missions and possessed a high level of spiritual power and the ability to see ghosts like him? Ichigo said, no, the story was too fantastical to be true. He was probably thinking too much about it. The blonde man pretended to be distressed and wiped away imaginary tears from his eyes. I'm hurt, Rukia. We haven't met for such a long time and that's how you choose to greet me, he said. Oh, the tragedy. Rukia gave an eye roll. Her eyes narrowed as she said, cut it with the melodrama. We both know you're not here for that. Why the sudden visit? Did something happen back there? I'm certain that my term in Karakura won't end for another 8 months. Nope, I just came to check up on you. Is that so wrong? The man said with a warm, radiant smile that made a number of girls blush in different ways. Ichigo made the vague observation that, despite the fact that the man clearly looked foreign, likely from America, his command of the Japanese language was flawless. He gave her a cheeky wink and said, I know you missed me too. It's alright to admit things like this once in a while. 2 or 3 girls swooned into oblivion at that action. Rukia let out a deep sigh, as if she had expected his response. She took the foreigner by the wrist with one hand, rubbed her temples with the other, and dragged him back to the door. Let's take this up to the roof. You're attracting too much attention here. The American blinked in confusion, but followed her obediently, nonetheless. Am I? Hey. What was that about attracting attention? Rukia gave a small exasperated sigh as Naruto rounded up on her the moment they entered the roof. I'd already toned down with the orange and got rid of the whisker marks on my gigai. You look foreign. End of story. And will you please don't do such reckless things anymore? You might jeopardize the mission. Coming into contact with me for no apparent reason. I can't believe you. Naruto tried to appease her by holding out his hands and saying, alright little missy, chill. The mission will turn out fine. I'll just go down and tell everyone that I'm your childhood friend from America or something. Besides, that's where I'm heading to anyways. I just got some time to spare and decided to drop by. Okay. We'll go with that story of yours. I don't want to risk using the memory modifier anyway. Rukia became more composed. It appeared that Naruto was still unaware of the true nature of her ordeal. That was excellent. He will be leaving soon. She'd only have to keep up with this facade for a short while. But I'm quite doubtful that the entire class will buy it. Rubbing his chin at the thought, Naruto grinned sinisterly and said, "Then, that's where I'll put my looks to good use. Hey. These foolish mortals will never be able to resist my charms." Rukia turned and hurried to tell Ichigo about her current situation, but Naruto caught her before she could go more than 10 steps. "Ichigo won't buy that, but I'll somehow manage to get him to play along until I explain the full situation." Naruto called, his suspicious gaze fixed on her. "Rukia, is it just me, or is your Ryotsu extremely low? Even if you're in a Gigai, this level is a bit too exaggerated, don't you think?" Rukia sighed, maintaining a cool exterior. "You caught me." Her mind raced, trying to come up with a plausible story to keep from being discovered and receiving a terrible punishment. She had no doubt that Naruto would not support her. He was her superior and devoted to Yukatake. Taiko, even though they were practically siblings. Although Yukatake. Taiko had a good heart, he couldn't allow a crime of this size to be tolerated so readily. "Actually, I've had a slight problem with this mission." "Problem? Yeah, well, there's this kid, Kurosaki Ichigo, and he's been able to see ghosts. Embarrassingly enough, he spotted me while I was on patrol. I had no choice. I explained to the gist of the duties of a Shinigami." Rukia started to explain in a hurry. She hurriedly added, "I didn't tell him exact details of our soul society. I swear," as Naruto's brows began to furrow. Naruto nodded for her to continue, humming a little, more to himself than to anyone else. "It was then that I realized that his Ryotsu was so strong, people near him are starting to get induced by it and are starting to become spiritually aware as well. I couldn't allow it to spread further, so I decided to come to this school to keep an eye on him and his friends. Inoue Orihime and Yasutora Sato." Rukia took a breath. "I had thus requested this specially modified Gigai from Urahara Kazuki to be made for the sole purpose of hiding my Ryotsu from Ichigo's friends, so that I can observe them more closely. It wouldn't do to be found suspicious by the ones you're monitoring. This is going to be a little problematic." Naruto closed his eyes and chewed his lower lip, his expression contemplative. "I see, a human. Huh, Kurosaki, Urahara, TCH. As she anxiously awaited Naruto's decision, Rukia held her breath. Would Naruto be able to spot her deception? Did she plan her story too quickly? Naruto opened his eyes again and said, "This mission is probably beyond the capability of an unranked officer to handle." His eyes now had a shrewd, sharp look. Presumably to retrieve his phone, he reached one hand into his pocket. "I'll request for backups from the Taiko." Rukia bowed her head, concealing her grimace. "No need, I'll deal with this setback myself. I already have everything under control. Please let me prove myself capable, Uzumaki-san," she said. "I apologize for misleading you, Uzumaki-san, but I can't afford to make things worse than they are already. But really, thank God he's not smart, I'm safe. At least for the time being." After a moment of hesitation, as if he were going to argue back, Naruto burst out laughing at her submissive demeanor. Rukia quickly complied and lifted her head, only to meet his piercing gaze. "Geez, I can't believe I'm actually doing this. Alright Rukia. I won't tell anyone about this, so stop bowing down to me. It makes me feel uncomfortable. You have a Shikai, so you should be able to handle a mission of this level. But if anything crops out that are too big for you to chew, then I want you to call me up immediately, okay? I'll be there in a jiffy. You got my number, right?" As their eyes met, Rukia's voice became stuck in her throat, and she was only able to respond with a rigid nod. She felt shivers down her spine and was unable to move because she was staring into his eyes. Naruto's eyes crinkled up as he shot her a grin, and he ruffled her hair slightly before walking towards the exit door. "Well, let's get this mess sorted out as quickly as possible, shall we? After all, I have a plane to America to catch at 5. Rukia's hair was unkempt and a little shaken, and she narrowed her eyes at her superior's vanishing back. What was that?" Rukia shook her head at the absurd idea, forced her face into her typical expression of indifference, and rushed after the Uzumaki. "I felt like he'd seen through all my lies with a single glance. Like he knew that I was guilty." She was now aware of the reason Naruto had ascended to the 4th seat. Many did not anticipate that he would possess his leadership abilities, quick wits, and sharp mind. He had guts and a very thick skin to match, which didn't hurt either. For many regular Shinigami, achieving such a ranking would be difficult because it required both gaining the captain's trust and possessing the necessary abilities. But within the first few years of joining this division, Naruto had figured it out. Many Shinigamis in the 13th division were troubled by this. Their captain and lieutenant had been kind-hearted in the first place, and many believed that the Uzumaki had charmed his way to the top. But disobeying him would mean that they are indirectly rebutting the orders of their captain, so they buried down their protests for the most part. That did not, however, stop ominous rumors and gossip from circulating throughout Seireiti. Rukia didn't know if Naruto had heard of the buzz surrounding him, but if he did, he didn't show any indication of wanting to retaliate against them. Soon after, the rumors started to fade, particularly since he stopped moving up past the 4th position, which surprised many. Rukia, on the other hand, chose not to categorize the teenager in line with the rumors. Together with Kaien, they became friends after she struck up a brief conversation with him one day. The few times they had trained together were likely some of the most memorable experiences of her life. She no longer saw the boy she had once perceived as distant and aloof. He was laid back but rude, occasionally making sarcastic remarks and cracking jokes. After Kaien's death, everything was lost, and Naruto threw himself into intense training while withdrawing from everyone else except Yukitake, Taiko. Rukia believed that if anyone should be held accountable, it should be herself because she was at the scene and yet she was unable to save Kaien. He had likely regretted not being there to even give him a proper send-off. 2 or 3 years later, Naruto had come out on top, but he had maintained a small gap between himself and everyone, including Yukitake, Taiko. Before, Rukia wouldn't have been so conceited as to describe their relationship as close, but it wasn't anything like it is now. The blonde and everyone else had always seemed to be separated by a strain. He never attended group gatherings or events unless they were part of a mission, and he acted as if he was keeping something from them. Rukia had frequently seen the blonde staring into the sky while absorbed in his thoughts, with a longing, faraway expression in his eyes. She pondered whether his frequent, lengthy walks down Rukongai had anything to do with this. Rukia, however, was aware that Naruto had shown himself to be a silly, useless wimp who was incapable of learning Kido chants to save his life. However, beneath his silly exterior, he was trustworthy, independent, sincere, and resolute. That is, once he made up his mind. Many were unable to see that about him, or perhaps they did not want to. Others may make fun of him inwardly, but he had resisted their misgivings until they had to accept him, whether they liked it or not. Rukia knew that Yukitake, Taiko had also noticed that feature of the blonde, and that was something to be proud of. Perhaps she ought to accompany Yukitake, Taiko in convincing the blonde to assume the role of lieutenant upon her return. Ichigo snapped his fingers at the Shinigami's face, causing her glazed eyes to refocus at the disturbance. Rukia! Oi, Rukia! Rukia! Ichigo finally snapped out of her thoughts. In response to his voice, Ichigo walked around her with a hint of impatience. Just who is that guy? Do Shinigamis even have humans as their childhood friends in the first place? You've been keeping mum about this since lunch break, but now that school is finally over, I want to hear a full explanation about that guy. Rukia sighed deeply in agony. Don't be so childish, Ichigo. Besides, what's wrong with keeping human childhood friends? She reasoned that since Ichigo had been shielded from the truth by her forced lie, there was no pressing need for him to be aware that there were more Shinigamis in the world. After all, he was still a human, so it was best to keep Soul Society's secrets to a minimum around him. Rukia assumed she would be alright as long as Ichigo did not transform into his soul form. Ichigo stared at her blankly. No, I can list numerous reasons as to why it's so wrong. Why don't you mind your own business for once? It doesn't concern you, she gasped. Rukia shot him a glare and shifted her school bag across her back to a more comfortable position. You should be thinking more practical thoughts, like the next few methods you could use to find and dispatch hollows. Besides, you'll probably not meet him again, since he'll be flying back to America anytime soon. Oh, I see. But you know, Rukia, doesn't the figure by the gate look o.so familiar? The same foreigner who had visited their classroom during lunch had already left Rukia's side and was hurrying forward with her hands outstretched, preparing to choke him. The foreigner's legs were slightly bent and he had a nervous smile on his face, as if he wasn't sure if he should embrace the angry, his blood Rukia or start running to protect himself. Unfortunately for him, he hesitated too long to make a decision, and Rukia got his neck tightly between her hands and started to choke him to death. With a voice an octave higher than usual, Rukia screamed angrily, "What are you still doing here, you big imbecile? Don't you have a plane to catch? Don't go wasting mission funds away like that. We hard?" working people paid for them by deducting a portion of our monthly wages. The poor guy choked out, "Jarif me," as Ichigo rushed right over. "I need air," he gasped pitifully, his arms thrashing wildly to break the tight hold around his neck. Ichigo gave an eye roll. It was going to be a long time. Ichigo twitched his eyes and wondered impatiently how he had gotten himself into this predicament, because Rukia and the foreigner were sitting in front of him and were still arguing loudly. On his bed, in his room, in his home. Some people really don't care about their environment. The smallest semblance of decency. Ichigo crossed his arms in frustration and sighed, and, "Can you start explaining to me now how you managed to get yourself a childhood friend, now? Now that his tranquility has been disrupted and his homework has been forgotten, he might as well make the most of his time." In addition, since 4 hours ago, he had been left feeling inquisitive and desperate for clarification. "Very well," the foreigner said, his voice sounding wise, "since Ichigo-chan has kindly offered his generous hospitality to us, I'm afraid it's only right that I should impart this information on the young one as my gift of gratitude." The abrupt shift in behavior caused Ichigo to perspire. Is that man making fun of me? Nevertheless, he was unable to control his feelings of anticipation and excitement. He was going to get some answers at last. "Rukia." "Yes, sir." When Rukia produced a drawing sketchpad that was remarkably familiar, Ichigo's positive attitude was somewhat dampened. "When I opened the cover, I saw 2 dreadfully rendered bunny-like figures that resembled the foreigner and Rukia, respectively. One was orange and yellow, while the other was black and blue. Can we please proceed on with the story without your godforsaken crayon scribbles for once?" Ichigo sighed. "I'm begging you here." "Hey, did you just diss Chappie?" Rukia asked with a menacing flash of her eyes. "Screw Chappie!" exclaimed the foreigner, who appeared to be as muted as the former. "Did you just diss the orange?" Ichigo thought grimly, what would I give to have normal people entering into my life? He raised his hands in surrender and said, "Don't diss the orange and Chappie." Okay, I got it." The foreigner cleared his throat and returned to his sage-like geezer tone, looking satisfied. "You see, little Ichigo-chan, a long time ago, when I was still a young, fickle-minded lad like what you are today." Even though Ichigo's forehead vein throbbed violently from the jabs aimed at him, he remained silent because they had at last started the story. The foreigner paused to blow his nose on a piece of tissue that Rukia kindly offered him. "I was very sad. I was often bullied and knocked around because I could see the wandering spirits of the dead. Before long, I found myself in an orphanage, cold, alone, and lonely without friends and family, who had all abandoned me out of fear. Then, one fine majestic day, I met Rukia, who had dropped by into town to carry out her Shinigami duties. We talked, and soon, we became fast friends. From then onwards, we would always catch up with each other whenever she's in town." The end. The outsider grinned knowingly. "And that's that, Ichigo-chan." Ichigo mumbled incredulously, "Seriously? No, I mean, seriously? Was he correct in his prediction?" His thoughts were interrupted by the sounds of multiple moist sneezes. Ichigo turned his head and saw that Rukia was the source of the noise, using multiple pieces of tissue paper to dry her nose. The Shinigami cried unabashedly, saying, "That story was really touching." She loudly blew her nose once more. "I couldn't help myself. My tears just keep on falling," she said. "Why the hell are you crying? Aren't you supposed to have heard his sob story before?" Ichigo screamed. He poked the smiling blonde with his index finger. "Oi! I'm staring to doubt your story now. Is it the truth or was everything you told me all a hoax?" With a fox-like smile, the blonde said, "Who knows? Have patience, young one. And all shall be revealed in due time." The blonde had once again taken on his geezer voice, much to Ichigo's chagrin. "Seeing as I have to bid thee farewell so as to catch my flight soon, I shall impart to you, young foolish one, a final piece of advice. Look underneath, and the truth shall be revealed to thee," the blonde said, as he headed toward the door. "Stop sounding like my gramps already. What's with that, young one, crap? You're only a year or two older than me," Ichigo screamed. The only response he got was a wink. To Ichigo's dismay, the foreigner straightened his jacket and teased him with a flying kiss. "I only have one more thing to say before I take my leave. If you ever hurt Rukia and get her into trouble, I'll be sure to hunt you down, and burn down every part of your body until you resemble a pile of black goo." He stopped and then added, "Except for your hair, though. Lucky for your hair, I have a great affection for that particular color. To-dos, kiddo. May we never meet again." Ichigo twitched and wished fervently that the other would simply leave his house, but before the foreigner had gone entirely, He had an epiphany. Hey, wait, you didn't tell me your name yet. The foreigner looked thoughtful for a moment, raising one eyebrow in consideration, probably considering whether or not to reveal his name to Ichigo. Finally, he exchanged a meaningful look with Rukia and reluctantly revealed his name. I'm Momochi Zabuza. I'm half Japanese, so I got that name from my father. Ichigo did recognize Momochi Zabuza's name a little. Are you related to the Momochi down 4th Street or something? Cuz I swear there was another Momochi Zabuza guy living there too. Ichigo's remark caused Zabuza's eyes to narrow. Ichigo-chan, was what you just said true? Fixing one eye on the blonde who was once again pacing in front of him, Shinko growled, Hey kid. Was it really alright to let that Rukia girl go? Soul Society won't let her go off so easily once they've found out what she had done. Her end is unavoidable. Naruto rolled his eyes and muttered a series of sinister curses under his breath, saying, I know that. Baka Kitsune. Naruto ruffled his hair in exasperation at the current circumstance, saying, Even so, I find it hard to believe she was so stupid to give up her powers to a mortal boy. A stupid one at that. Forget me. Not even Yukitaki. Taiko will be able to save her now. I took my eyes off her for 1 minute and look at what she'd got herself into, said Naruto. Not reporting now will only prolong the inevitable. The higher-ups are bound to realize what she had done sooner or later. With tail swishing wildly behind him, Shinko uttered, and then another one of your precious people will be taken away from you. In a furious reply, Naruto said, Not if I can help it. I'll think of something when the time comes. I'm just never one who plans things thoroughly before executing them in the first place. That'll be Shikamaru, not me. That's because your brain doesn't come with the capability of doing so, Shinko grumbled. Shinko, if you don't have anything nice or useful to say, then I'd suggest you'd be better off keeping your yap shut. Naruto intoned dryly. Shinko let out a roar. You insolent brat. How dare you tell me, the greatest of all foxes, the mightiest of the Biju, to shut up? Naruto added absently, you forgot, the cutest and fluffiest of all cute and fluffy things known to mankind. Shinko hesitated and said, yeah, that as well. No, wait, that's wrong. I take that back, I'm not fluffy. Naruto concurred, saying, no, you're just hairy. Shinko released a growl of annoyance. Naruto went on, sobering up, but Zabuza would be another problem. Shinko closed his eyes in boredom and said, he's now leading a new, carefree life. Well, good for him. He got reincarnated without you knowing it. Big deal. To think that he'd ended up with the exact same name. At least he looks much happier in his new life, in any case. Naruto thought about it. But we're missing the point. Kyuubi, what if you had missed your friends and they'd reincarnated themselves without you? Shinko suspected. In response, Naruto nodded anxiously, confirming the Kyuubi's inference. Then that's too bad, I guess. Naruto gulped. That'll be horrible. They wouldn't do that. How am I going to fulfill my promise to them then? You can't expect everything in life to go smoothly as you like it to, foolish boy. Shinko grumbled. That wouldn't occur unless miracles happen. Maybe you should reincarnate as well. You've been waiting for a very long time already. That old geezer, Yamamoto, is over 2,000. Naruto defended himself, saying, 7 years isn't that long. And even if it is, I'm not gonna give up on them now. I don't know what drives you on, kid. But you'd better just face reality. We have absolutely no news on them, even after so many years of investigation. They might have ended up in a different afterlife, sent down to hell, or they could have been reincarnated for a long time already. What you're running on now is just false hope. Then false hope it may be. But you know, Kyuubi, Naruto said, grinning roguishly at the red fox, his eyes gleaming with determination. If miracles don't happen, then I'll only have to create them myself. Shocked, Shinko said, you're planning on going illegal. Without bothering to respond, Naruto left his mind, scape and vanished from view. Shinko laughed with laughter and said, I'll be looking forward in seeing what you're devising up, Uzumaki Naruto. From his early years, that brat had always been full of surprises. The following week, Rukia returned to Seirei too quickly for Naruto to even come up with a suitable plan. Central 46 Chambers, Chuyuji Orokashitsu, decided to punish her by putting her behind heavily locked bars and forcing her down with Ryotsu. Absorbing seals. Rukia's punishment was inevitable, just as Shinko had foreseen, and it had finally come down quickly. Only the 6th Division's captain, Kuchiki Byakuya, and his lieutenant, Abarai Renji, had professionally marched her into captivity, and Naruto had been there, observing her from the top of one of the many rooftops covered in gold tiles. Rukia, dressed simply in a white yukata, appeared unusually frail in comparison to Byakuya and Renji, who were both very big and powerful. Her small frame and pale complexion did her no favors. Thoughtful, Naruto furrowed his brows. For a straightforward retrieval mission, was it really necessary to send a captain and his lieutenant into the real world? Particularly the two who were closest to her. Naruto concluded that Seireiti's operations can occasionally be extremely cruel. That or there's nefarious activity going on behind the scenes. The sudden thought caused him to hum thoughtfully. It was accurate to say that the technique employed to apprehend and hold her was only used for extremely risky escapees. However, Naruto could not even fathom who would have the ability to quickly and easily affect the choices and operations of the Tsuyuuji or Okashitsu. Naruto had known since the Shinigami Academy that Central 46 Chambers existed, that the Shinigami's judicial system was usually very biased and unjust to the prisoners, who were powerless to resist their punishment. However, Naruto had remained silent about his thoughts on the matter. After all, he had considered himself merely an observer of the Shinigami's politics and affairs. However, the circumstances would no longer permit him to act as a mere bystander. He was aware that there was no benefit to making fun of Rukia. Although she was associated with the nobles, she was not even the Kuchiki clan's heir or successor. She was from Rukongai. Rukia was unranked in terms of strength and had not even come close to mastering her Shinkai, let alone achieving Bankai. Last but not least, Rukia's missions typically involve patrol work and conducting soul burials. They are not risky enough for hollows or Shinigamis to try to exact revenge on her. In other words, no fool would pursue Rukia for advantages unless doing so would mean letting Byakuya's eternal wrath fall on them. Naruto was uncomfortable with the state of affairs, but he was unable to pinpoint the exact cause of his discomfort. At that moment, Rukia looked up and met his gaze. Naruto instantly turned around and left the scene using swift, sequentially performed shunpo after breaking eye contact. He didn't go back even a single step because his mind had been racing with ideas for days about how he could get her out of this mess without stopping. He had thought of kidnapping and breakout, mass murder, complete brainwashing, threatening the general, captain, and other such tactics, but they were all blatantly obvious and would undoubtedly point the finger at him. In addition, they were absurd and would take a lot of work on his part to carry out. Furthermore, he couldn't yet risk losing his job. This was one of the many occasions when he wished his friends would support him. Naruto had always been a deal with it when the situation arises person, so Shikamaru's intelligence will be useful in such circumstances. Which was precisely what he intended to do at this point. Follow the current until he saw a chance to seize it. He would report to Yukataki Taiko for the time being. The Taiko might be willing to assist. Rukia, I'll find a way to save you. Just persevere for the time being. As the figure appeared behind her with a sudden flare of his Ryotsu, Rukia laughed and said, "Hey. I was wondering when you'd pay me a visit." She scowled disapprovingly and said, "You were there, watching me on the day I was brought back. And you really shouldn't be sneaking into other people's divisions. Byakuya.ni. Sama wouldn't be pleased." As he waved away her nagging, Naruto leaned casually against the wall with his arms crossed and said, "You know, Rukia. I thought that you'll be bright enough to not get yourselves caught up with human affairs. Apparently, your training wasn't that thorough. Didn't you ever regret it? Giving that boy your power?" His piercing gaze was fixed on the other, and his eyes were hard. "I can't say I didn't at first, but now?" Rukia shook her head and smiled regretfully. "No, Uzumaki-san. I don't regret, nor resent the actions I took on that day. I will accept my punishment without complaint." Naruto's tone softened a little as he asked, "Was he really that worth it, Rukia? That you would even leave me and Yukataki Taiko behind?" Rukia answered without hesitation, "Yes. I'm sorry. I've been thinking about it since that day. You're all precious to me as well. You, Yukataki Taiko, Renji, even Byakuya.ni. Sama. But Kurosaki Ichigo, he's one of a kind, after all." To Rukia's astonishment, a smile appeared on Naruto's face. Naruto got up and walked to the door after saying, "Okay, I'll accept that resolve of yours. You know, they say good things will happen to those with determination. I'll be seeing you later. Things are going to get hectic soon, with all the preparations that have to be done." When Rukia heard those words, her stomach fell. "Wait, you don't mean to say that?" Rukia's line of thought was confirmed by Naruto's grin, which only got wilder with excitement. Rukia could see the resolve in his eyes and knew that any attempt to convince him to stop thinking such absurd things would be met with silence. Perhaps that was why Yukataki Taiko had concurred with the blonde. She still made an effort in spite of that. "Stop it, that's too risky, not to mention foolish. Even with Yukataki Taiko's help." Naruto abruptly interrupted, saying, I was unable to do anything when Kaien died, so I sure hell won't stand back and watch them take you away from me as well. B. But that's just... With a broad smile and a thumbs up, Naruto interrupted, saying, our cute subordinate has dug herself into deep trouble. It's only the job of her higher dot-ups to pull her out from the mess she had made, right? The Taiko and I will see you though this predicament, Rukia, so don't worry too much about it. Keep this quiet from Byakuya and everyone else, got that? I heard Rukia whisper, you knew. You knew right from the start about what I had done when you saw me on that day you dropped by in the human world, but you didn't report it to anyone. Why? With his peculiar grin still intact, Naruto asked, do I need a reason for helping my friend out? Then, before Rukia could say another word, he was out of sight. Please don't overstrain yourselves. Uzumaki-san, Yukataki. Taiko, Rukia bit her bottom lip in fear as she muttered into her now empty cell. Naruto was currently on one of his regular walks down Rukongai, as he always does, his eyes keenly observing the people who wander the streets around him, his heart clenched with hope and a hint of desperation at seeing a familiar face. Despite the fact that the walks had become a daily ritual and a habit, each visit always left him feeling anxious and anticipatory, which ultimately resulted in disappointment and despair. As usual, he wore a faded blue yukata with white trimmings around the edges, a dark blue stripped obi to keep it in place, and straw sandals instead of tabi socks. With each step Naruto took, Shinsuhiko's obi, which he was wearing loosely, wobbled a little. Shinigamis are generally disliked in Rukongai, which is why they wear disguises. Naruto scowled as he looked over his clothing again for any clues. None existed. Tragically, the necklace he wore from Tsunade.ba Chan did not accompany him to the afterlife, even though it would have been clearly visible hanging from his neck with its gemstone gleaming in the morning light. Right now, he was in Junrinen's West Rukongai on the 1st Street, if the large craters in the ground and the dried puddles of blood caking the once polished floor were any indication, there had appeared to have been a disturbance earlier, most likely a brawl. Naruto's eyes narrowed at the damage, saying, wait a minute. He didn't like how close it was to the Hikutumon, or the White Road Gate, and he didn't think a regular person could cause such massive destruction. Naruto called to the local street vendor, who was just setting up shop to await the morning crowd. Hey, Osan. What happened here? Did the townsfolk decide to riot against the Shinigamis last night? The vendor shook his head and gave Naruto a doubtful look, but he did not stop talking. You wish, kid. Well, I suppose most of them have been considering it, but they've neither the guts nor the means to carry through with that. But I'm surprised you don't know, kid. Some Shinigami punk kid and with his friends tried to forcefully enter Seirei. Jidenbu stopped him, of course, but you know what happened. With his mind racing over the news, Naruto questioned, what? A Shinigami? Assaulting the gatekeeper? Seemingly eager to share his gossip, the vendor leaned in. Jidenbu was defeated by that Shinigami. All of us were surprised big time, I tell y'all. But before he got into Seirei though, another Shinigami, a captain, judging from his Haori, intercepted them and pushed them back out. Things got uglier than before, and damn well rowdy too. Jidenbu's arm was severed in the process, and Kami. It was bloody. But thank goodness the girl was able to patch him up really quickly. They're staying with the village chief now. Uncomfortably, Naruto felt a weight of dread. Osan. Those kids, can you describe them for me? Hey, isn't that Zabuza? When he saw Kurosaki Ichigo's all too familiar face, Naruto wanted to give himself a face palm, but he forced himself to stop himself. Despite wearing a typical Shinigami outfit, the latter's orange hair and foolish sounding voice were too obvious. In addition, only that moron would recognize him as Zabuza. More like, he still thinks that nonsense I told him is true. Naruto pondered incredulously. As he approached, Naruto heard Ichigo's voice clearly. It seems that he was attempting to make his friends recognize Naruto as well. Zabuza, you know, the foreign guy from America who came in during lunch break a few weeks back. Rukia's friend, don't you guys remember him? Well, Naruto thought icily, things simply couldn't have gotten worse. Sentaro and Kion had just thrown yet another mountain of paperwork on him yesterday, and he still had trainings and missions to attend to, so he was already very busy trying to come up with workable solutions for Rukia's predicament. He now had to contend with human invaders. As a Shinigami, he was unable to allow these Ryoka to enter Seirei, no matter how much they wanted to. Stupid people interfering in our affairs. What, you don't think Yukataki, Taiko and I are capable of saving Rukia on our own? Naruto had a nasty thought. Even though Ichigo and his friends had come because they truly wanted to help Rukia, he was aware that he was being unfair, and it was still quite offensive of him. I'm sorry, but I won't need your assistance, you weaklings. He paused. Yeah, I was owed something by that guy. When Naruto eventually arrived at the group, Ichigo greeted them. Yo, Zabuza. What are you doing here? Oof. Naruto swung his arm back and struck Ichigo squarely in the cheek with a fist, sending the other flying backwards before Ichigo could finish his sentence. A number of his group members cried out in surprise and alarm. Ichigo quickly picked himself back up in a matter of seconds, rubbing his now bruised face and grimacing at the pain. You bastard, why'd you hit me for? With his eyes flashing in rage and his fists clenched and unclenched in an attempt to contain his growing rage, Naruto calmly responded, I told you, didn't I? That if you'd ever let anything horrible befall on Rukia, I'd burn you to a crisp. Naruto snarled and grabbed Ichigo by the collar of his robes, pulling him to his feet. Now look at what you did. Rukia's in jail, and sentenced for execution in a few more days. No thanks to you. Be thankful that I'm letting you off with just a punch today, I said. When Naruto's stern words hit him hard, the other person had the grace to recoil. Reluctantly, Ichigo acknowledged, I know that. That's why I'm here today. I'm not planning on making Rukia suffer my punishment. I'll pay for my own wrongdoings, Zabuza, so I swear, I'll definitely save Rukia. Despite his accusing gaze, Naruto released the other. Don't kid yourself. Even captains can't pull off such a feat. What can you, a mere Shinigami representative, hope to accomplish? He interrupted. So you defeated Jidenbu. Big deal. That Taiko defeated the both of you without even batting an eyelid, didn't he? Ichigo narrowed his eyes in response to Naruto's accusatory tone. I don't know how strong these captains of yours are, but that doesn't matter. I'll just have to beat up anyone who stands in my way. Naruto snorted, nice speech, but that ain't gonna get you anywhere. Unless you have the bark to back your bite up, I'd suggest that you leave Soul Society and return to living your normal mundane human lives this instant. You think I came here without any skills whatsoever? I trained under that insane twit Urahara for 10 long grueling days. Ichigo snapped back. Besides, I came here even after knowing that there would be people stronger than me, and I'm prepared to beat the snot out of them nonetheless. His eyes, which were strikingly similar to Naruto's, gleamed with resolve. Naruto was startled into a realization. That's correct. He smirked abruptly. This boy, and his friends, I might not need their help, but I can use them. Alright, I'll be holding you true to your word then. I'll be expecting a lot more from you in the future, Strawberry Boy. The abrupt shift in demeanor and the nickname caused Ichigo's eyes to twitch even more. He appeared grateful as the other appeared to regain his normal poise and the tension that had been building before it subsided, but he had finally seemed to remember that he had detested the other's attitude. Goddammit, what's wrong with you people? How many times do I have to tell you that the Ichis from 1 and go from Guardian? Ichigo made a little noise of frustration, but Naruto ignored it and reprimanded, language, Strawberry. And while you're at it, why not introduce me to your buddies? Ichigo retorted, apparently annoyed at being dictated to and the lack of knowledge about Naruto. Why don't you tell me what you're doing here first? I thought you were human. And what's with those weird markings on your cheeks? How'd? Ichigo's barrage of inquiries was interrupted by Naruto sticking up one finger. Once more, it was time to throw the other off. First off, you were wrong from the start. Did I ever say that I was a human in the first place? Ichigo spluttered. But you lived in an orphanage, you played with kids. True, but that was from the time when I was still living. I died somewhere along the way though, and I ended up as a plus soul, because I refused to go to Soul Society. Actually, one of the main reasons why Rukia kept visiting me was because she was trying to perform Kansu on me. Naruto laughed. Well, then I found out about your recent failure and had a passing Shinigami send me here. I was about to save Rukia myself, if I hadn't chanced upon you here. Ichigo muttered, but my entire class could see you, and that doesn't explain the markings. Snorting, Naruto said, foolish boy. Obviously, I was in a Gigai at that time. Rukia had loaned me one. It hid the markings. I always had these whisker marks since the day I was born. It must have been a birth defect, I can't seem to remember. Ichigo's eyes were glassy from the sudden barrage of information, and he appeared dazed. I see, well, you could join our group if you like. Sorry, but I already have my own plans with regards to saving Rukia, replied Naruto. He gave the group standing just behind him a thumbs up. They were keeping a close eye on him and paying close attention to the conversation, but they remained silent because he had apparently won Ichigo's grudging trust. Who are these guys, anyway? Okay, I'll go from the left. That's Orihime Inoue, Ishida Yuru, and Yasutora Sato. Introduced by Ichigo. As an afterthought, he added, and the cat's Yoruichi. With his brows knitted, Naruto muttered, Yoruichi, I think I heard that name somewhere before, as he attempted to remember. He gave up after a minute because it was pointless and decided to file in the name for additional research when he returned. Hey, you said that the captains are really tough, right? Then how are you going to defeat them by yourself? Asked Ichigo. I mean, you only have that. He stopped and examined the thin, basic black sword that Naruto was holding. It had an undecorated square tsuba and an equally black, very straight sheath. It had the appearance of sleek practicality because it was devoid of any decorations, save for a few faded white linen bandages that were wrapped across the hilt. It was too short to be categorized as a katana, but too long to be called a kodachi. Ichigo asked silently, and Naruto smiled, that's a shinobi katana. To answer your other questions, no, I don't plan on directly engaging the captains. I have my own ways in going about doing things, but we'll carry out each of our plans separately. You guys do your stuff, and I'll handle my own. Ichigo mumbled, you sure are confident. I don't particularly mind, but wouldn't your chances of success be higher if you're in a group? You're just a soul, not even a Shinigami. Naruto chuckled at those remarks as he turned to leave. Oh yeah, that reminds me. I ain't gonna help you enter Seirei, nor assist you once you're inside. You'll be on your own from here henceforth, so don't go depending on me. Ichigo yelled in frustration, I wasn't asking for your help in the first place. What's with that holier-than-thou attitude of yours? It really pisses me off. We'll manage fine on our own, no need for your concern. Naruto smirked mischievously and teased, I'm not too sure about that. You did seem desperate in wanting me to join your group. I wasn't, Ichigo infuriated. You wait, I'll be seeing you in Seirei in a few days. Naruto retorted, ooh, how are you going to get there? By flying. Ichigo said thoughtfully, missing Naruto's sarcasm completely. I'm not too sure myself, but we're on our way to visit some guy named Shiba Kukaku right now, but I guess flying wouldn't seem like a bad idea. Naruto gave an eye roll. It is, of course, you moron. You know, sekiseki is used to make Seirei's waltz. He paused. Oh, hold on. Naruto had to suppress his laughter when he said, if they're going to visit the Shiba family, then. Ichigo-chan, I suppose you will be flying after all. Ichigo asked, what about you, huh? How are you gonna get in? We could let you join us for the ride if you want it so badly. He smiled when he implied that. Once more, Naruto lied haltingly, saying, me? Meh, I guess I'll be digging from under. I'm not gonna meet with a Shiba guy. We probably wouldn't hit off. Well, I'd best be off now. Gotta dig that ginormous tunnel and all that. Ichigo believed him like a fool. With earnestness, he said, good luck with it. The next time we meet will be in Seirei then. See you, Zabuza. Naruto halted and said, that's right. Naruto grinned viciously and said, I still haven't forgotten my pledge about burning you into a crisp. So the next time we meet, he waved his hand casually as he vanished from view, saying, I won't go easy on you. So you'd better hope that you won't be meeting me ever again. Better yet, don't even put one foot into Seirei and you'll be free from my wrath. Adios, strawberry.boy. Enough with the strawberry crap already, it's not funny. Ichigo was furious. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief as he rushed to the scene of the disturbance after hearing a loud scuffle of voices break out 2 corridors down. I've located them at last. That took me ages, Kami. Sama. Naruto had to bite his lip to keep from grinning when he turned the corner and saw the face of a smoldering Hitsugaya Toshiro. With Ryotsu flaring wildly and veins bursting out of his forehead in anger, the white-haired captain of the 10th Division yelled, how many times do I have to tell you that I don't like candy? Icicles formed at the corners of the room. Yukatake Jushiro was attempting to appease the younger captain by saying, you don't have to be so shy, Shiro-kun. Calm yourself down, have a gummy bear. Toshiro appeared to be on the verge of exploding. It appeared that the normally composed captain had been in this state for a number of minutes due to this one-sided argument. Given that Toshiro was on the verge of rupturing a significant blood vessel due to his frustration, Naruto made the hasty decision to speak up, rushing into the room and slamming the door behind him. He paused when he saw his captain getting up and said, sorry to interrupt, but I have something that needs to be discussed about, Taiko. Are you alright enough to be walking around? Yukatake. Taiko responded to both inquiries with a soft smile, but he appeared somewhat bewildered by Naruto's unexpected interruption. It's fine, Naruto. He saw the other captain's eyes suddenly sharpen. What about? Naruto interrupted, saying, it's okay if Toshiro wants to listen in. It's Hitsugaya. Taiko. The young captain grumbled, but he knew Naruto would ignore his corrections anyhow. Why is Yukatake? Taiko the only one who receives special treatment? Toshiro pondered grimly. In keeping with the other's ideas, Naruto just rolled his eyes and continued speaking. I sense something fishy with this situation here. Regarding Rukia's execution, I mean. Firstly being, Rukia's crimes, though serious, doesn't necessarily warrant her death by usage of the Tsukyoku. Secondly, don't you find that her grace period being cut short seemed too suspicious? After he finished speaking, there was silence while the two captains considered these ideas. Toshiro finally made the decision to speak. That's exactly what Aizen said as well. I don't know the details, but Renji told me that Aizen thinks someone has been pulling the strings on Chuyuji or Okashitsu from behind. Most probably Jin. Naruto whispered, I wouldn't be too sure about that, it's Aizen after all. Naruto, said Yukitake firmly, I'm sure everyone has their own prejudices, but... Naruto stated obstinately, I don't like the feeling I get when I'm near that guy. You wait, Taiko. That guy puts up a good guy facade in front of everybody, but I'll get that infuriating mask off his face one day and prove you wrong. His Taiko gave him a benign smile and said, of course you will. Don't you even find it the slightest bit strange that a wimp and nerd like Aizen can obtain captain level position in the first place? Said Naruto. Yukitake. Taiko calmly took a sip of green tea and said, yes, I do. He didn't go into further detail. At his captain's mistrust, Naruto twitched with rage, got to his feet, and strode away. Either way, that only gives us an even better reason to stop Rukia's sentence. Toshiro muttered incredulously, are you two seriously going to carry out those plans of yours? Although he had heard the rumors from a number of the 13th Division's unranked Shinigamis and had not given a damn, hearing Naruto's voice only confirmed what he had already heard. What plans? Naruto asked, halting his pace as his rage subsided. Toshiro deadpanned, about stopping the execution, what else can I mean? Laughing, Naruto said, oh, that. Sorry to tell you, but we have no plans. Toshiro spluttered incredulously at that statement, did I just hear that wrongly? Once more, Naruto said, no plans. He chose to go into further detail at Toshiro's goggling. Like. 0, zilch, nil, nada, null, zippo, void, non-existent. With wide eyes, Toshiro regarded the other captain incredulously and said, Yukitake. Taiko, you're okay with this? Ah, yes. I have decided to place my full support and trust Naruto. He will be doing the bulk of the rescue work though. Yukitake nodded. He'll pull through somehow, he always does. You don't have to worry at all. Toshiro gaped and asked, Then, how do you plan on rescuing Kuchiki? You're giving Naruto complete control? How am I supposed to be worried? Free? Toshiro screamed in his head. What a fool that blonde was. He was on a different squad, so it wouldn't worry him, but Toshiro didn't want to see the two of them get into serious trouble. In frustration, Naruto waved a hand. TCH. Isn't that simple? We break in, get her out, open a Sekaiman and send her in a Gigai back down to the real world to live her entire life out there peacefully. Or she could choose to live in Rukongai. Her choice. The other details like traps and whatnot, well, I guess I'll deal with it when it comes. It was a unique occasion for Toshiro, who was speechless at the absurdity of the concept. According to Naruto, there would be less than 10% chance that the rescue mission would be successful. As he slid the door open, Naruto hesitated. Oh yeah, I spotted a few interesting characters at Junranen, Rukongai today. I know Shinigamis don't usually meddle with the citizens over there, but it would do you good to check them out. And quickly too, before they wander off. If Ichigo and his gang got themselves caught, that would mean he's only that capable. Toshiro finally sighed, don't tell me the Ryoka Jin failed to get rid of. I'll get my men to check it out later. It sucks to be cleaning up someone else's mess though. Deep in his own thoughts, Naruto answered absently, I don't know whether they're Ryoka or not. I think that's everything I wanted to say. Naruto, said Yukitake. You know, since you're already doing so much for our division, why not try for? Naruto sighed in frustration. Ah geez, Taiko. Why won't you give it a rest already? He waved a casual hand up in good-bye and slid the door shut. Ya, Mada Ishida, Yukitake, Taiko, and Toshiro. The door closed with a snap. After a while, there was silence. It's Hitsugaya. Taiko, goddammit. Did I see deja vu, or was it just me? Naruto scowled. Many Shinigami in the Seireiti area were startled by the sudden and loud alarms, which sent them into a state of panic and mayhem. Perched on a rooftop, Naruto watched with a sense of amusement as men in black robes thrashed about, hurrying to their designated spots in accordance with protocol. Naruto thought apathetically, Shinigamis are really pathetic. Being a shinobi village and all, emergency evacuations were frequent in Konoha, However, none of them ended up as disorderly and disorganized as what he was seeing at the moment. Yamamoto. Gigi ought to practice drills more frequently, he thought as a buffoon stumbled over his own big feet, setting off a chain reaction that saw multiple others fall and pile up on top of him. A bright light flashed up, briefly blinding him, but Naruto's vision returned in time to see the light split into 4 directions, one of which landed too near the headquarters of the 13th Division for comfort with a loud crash. If he had to pay for the property damage, Yukitake Taiko would not like it. The cost of repairs was increasing these days. Naruto's heart began to race when he heard a round of wild laughter resonating in the distance. Zaraki was out to get his fair share of kicking Ryoka's ass out of Seirei, and the captain's meeting was most likely adjourned. Additionally, it meant that Yukitake Taiko would be returning to the main quarters of his division to either learn about the ongoing disturbances or receive news about Kyoraku's meeting with the captain. It wasn't good. Naruto leapt from his perch, turned to face the closest crash, the one close to his division, and hurried over by executing shunpo one after the other. The Taiko himself could not afford to catch him slacking off the job that he had been assigned. His Taiko would be dissatisfied with the lack of progress because he was only halfway done. That wouldn't work, sorry. When he finally arrived, he saw a group of Shinigami standing over a medium-sized crater on the tiled floor with their katanas drawn. Naruto shouted at them as he landed softly on the roof of a nearby building. "Oi, you bunch of stooges down there." As the men fumbled around for a while, trying to find the source of the call, shoulders tense and prepared to lash out if it was from an enemy, Naruto rolled his eyes. At first, it had been amusing to watch them gaze around naively, but now it was becoming monotonous. But when they realized it was Naruto who had called out, they relaxed. A little embarrassed that he hadn't recognized Naruto's voice, one of the men said, "You. Uzumaki. Dono, how may we be of assistance?" Behind him, some of them still appeared irritated by Naruto's call. They were most likely the new hires from the Shinigami Academy, Shinoreijutsuin, this year. Naruto's tendency toward disrespect was well known to the other members of the division. The Ryoka would have probably long fled away already, so don't bother hunting them down. More importantly, try to find a way to patch up that hole down there before the captain returns. I don't want him piling me down with a stack of repaired bills. Naruto said. Then, before any of the men below could recognize his orders, he flashed off towards his office. Naruto had never interacted with his subordinates during his tenure in the 13th Division. In actuality, he rarely interacted with anyone outside of Rukia and Yukitake, preferring to isolate himself in his room or the library, or he just did not interact with anyone in his division. No, it wasn't because he was heartless or cold. He didn't have enough time, that was all. Other than getting lost in his thoughts and training, he had spent all of his remaining free time researching and looking for his missing shinobi friends. So when he spoke to his men, they responded slowly and naively, and it didn't come as a huge surprise to him. They acted that way even when he gave them orders, so forget about casual conversation. Suddenly, Naruto was the untouchable of the division. Oh, the irony. From whatever hell he is in right now, Sasuke was most likely laughing at him. As Naruto turned the corner, he struck the person he hoped to avoid the most in the chest. Wincing in agony and muttering curses about his misfortune, Naruto quickly straightened himself by grabbing onto the closest wall for support. "Huh, I wasn't expecting to see you here, Taiko. Are you fit enough to be moving out of Yugendo quarters?" Yukitake grinned down at him and flexed an arm to demonstrate his apparent good health, saying, "I feel fine, Naruto." His sides were flanked by his third seats. Besides, I have Kion and Sentaro here with me today. Yukitake's previous remarks were completely ruined when he broke down into long coughs and hacks, preventing him from finishing his sentence. Naruto gave his captain's bluff a frustrated snort. "Apparently, you're not fine enough. Alright, Kion, Sentaro. Looks like it's time to drag him back to Yugendo. Geez, I can't believe you guys actually let him persuade you to allow him to go out." Sentaro responded sheepishly, "Yeah, well, he was rather insistent on coming here to check out that bright light." But he interrupted as Yukitake's coughs became more severe. Despite his weak attempts to wave him away, he quickly slung his captain's arm over his shoulder. Not to be outdone by her partner, Kion grabbed Yukitake's other arm and patted her captain's back to try to calm his coughing. "Taiko, hang in there," she said. Despite the owner's objections, the three began to march back to Yukitake's quarters. Sentaro yelled, "Ah, buzz off Kion," across from his captain. "I believe that I'm able to take care of the captain by myself. You can join Naruto in finishing the paperwork." Eyes blazing, Kion retorted, "Well, Naruto can handle the paperwork just fine. I'm not gonna leave the captain alone in the hands of a dunderhead like you." Sentaro raged. What did you say, you little twerp? If Taiko is gonna die under anyone's care, it'll be under yours. You don't even know how to feed him his medicine. Kion shot back, well, you don't even know how to check his temperature, or something similar. Sentaro nearly yelled, you don't know how to change his bandages. Naruto chose to feel sorry for his captain before his third seat squabbling caused the poor man to go deaf. He injected rapidly, saying, you know, if you're both so useless, why not let me take over? You two should start doing the paperwork once in a while. At the same moment, both of his superiors yelled at him, no, their eyes widened at the thought. Sentaro practically screamed into Naruto's face, spit flying everywhere, and said, are you crazy? If someone as clumsy as you were to look after Taiko, he won't even be able to live to see next week. You shouldn't even be allowed to go near the Taiko after that incident. Naruto let out a moan. Ah, come off it, it was just that one time. Kion shivered when she thought back to Naruto's most recent visit to the Yujendo quarters. It was such a catastrophe. She gave Yukitake a tighter hug before she and Sentaro hurried forward, dragging Yukitake with them. A destroyed room, soggy bedsheets, broken vases, wrecked furniture, koi fish flipping all over the floors, and Yukitake. Taiko drenched. Shivering from head to toe when he was supposed to be resting peacefully, she screamed the final sentence. Naruto winced at the recollection and pouted, I apologized, didn't I? And you know Hana. Taiko hit me so hard afterwards, I thought I was about to reincarnate. Sentaro shouted, don't come near us, and moved his captain out of Naruto's line of sight. You're like, the Yukitake. Taiko jinx. Naruto started to say, hey, say that one more time and I'll stop doing all of your repulsive paperwork. But Yukitake interrupted with a rather violent hack. As a result, his superiors escorted the captain away at a pace so quick they might as well have traveled there on Shunpo. Naruto shouted out his message quickly, Taiko, don't worry, I'm almost halfway done, because he wouldn't be able to see his captain until he was able to get away from the overly protective claws of his third seats, which would take him a long time. And I'll get Kiraku, Taiko to go to Yujendo when he arrives. Before his subordinates swept him away, Yukitake could only respond with a grateful but apologetic smile. With a laugh, Naruto turned to go. As his closest officers, Kion, Sentaro, and himself, Naruto questioned whether Yukitake could ever find some quiet time. All divisions in Seireiti had experienced 2 full days of total chaos and tension. Naruto most likely would have prevented Ichigo and his group from entering Seireiti that day and sent them back to the human world if he had known that they could produce so many ruckuses in just 48 hours. The only reason he hadn't done so was because he hoped the group would give him enough distraction to allow him to prepare for the rescue plan, which Yukitake, Taiko finally finalized. They had done a fantastic job on their ignorant assignment. Too well, in fact, that Naruto felt they were going too far in trying to irritate him. Because he hadn't anticipated that he would recoil from all the chaos they created. Naruto cursed under his breath, I'll kill them, while Kion threw another enormous pile of documents onto his desk. The next time I see those bastards, I'll definitely slaughter them all. It was clear that Ichigo and his group were exceeding his expectations, and everything was going smoothly. What was the point of doing so, though, given that it had caused him to spend more time on paperwork than removing all those seals? Naruto was unable to leave his office after sending Kiraku down to Yujendo because his desk was overflowing with paperwork and requests for assistance and support from other divisions. Particularly from the 4th. He had been sending men all over Seireiti for the past 2 days. He had not even had time to go down to Rukongai for his daily walks. They had left their captain in the care and watchful eyes of a number of hand-picked and unranked subordinates, but even Kion and Sentaro were helping out. Naruto even vowed that the paperwork was getting bigger in retaliation. When compared to the entire year, the 13th Division had seen the most of their 4th seat in these 2 days. Slumping over his desk, Naruto groaned, I'm dying, from the sheer volume of documents he had been made to read. Frustrated, he picked up a stack of papers and threw them into the air, scattering them across the wooden floors. After that, he cast a dull glance at the summary report he had prepared for his captain. The 3rd seed of the 11th Division, Madarame Makaku, was defeated and is now being treated in the 4th Division. Requesting help and support from men. Slashed quite severely as well. Serves that baldy well, huh? The other's guts had never appealed to Naruto. Yumachika Ayasagawa, the 11th Division's 5th seat, was defeated and is now being treated in the 4th Division. Requesting help and support from men. The sissy dog boy had apparently exploded on his own. According to reports, he was still in mourning over it, giving his recently acquired afro a lot of attention in the barracks of the 4th Division. As his captain's punishment for losing his battle, Aburai Renji, a lieutenant in the 6th Division, was defeated and reportedly did not receive medical attention despite suffering serious injuries. Naruto flinched. Byakuya, that was really harsh. Asking men for help and support. A lengthy list of Shinigami from all over Seireiti followed those three, and Naruto didn't bother to find out who they were. He simply dispatched a number of men to assist each Taiko in their own way. While all of this was going on, Rukia was moved to Senzai-Q. Naruto couldn't even sneak in if he wanted to because of how strict the security was there. He had no time for this kind of nonsense. He ought to be working on his strategy for Rukia's release, not sitting here in silence completing pointless paperwork. He still needed to remove a few dozen more layers, and the seals wouldn't open themselves. Uzumaki. Dono, it's terrible. A Shinigami without a rank in his office exclaimed. Listen to this, it's. Naruto gave the man a scowl, letting loose some of his repressed annoyance on the unfortunate individual. The other began to tremble in terror as a result. This had better be good, squirt. I'm already up to my neck in paperwork here, and if you disturb my precious time to flood me with random, useless, mundane ramblings, I swear, I'll swipe off your bloody head with Shinko and hang your dead carcass to shrivel up and dry. Aizen. Taiko is dead. The poor Shinigami screeches out, trembling in terror. Naruto was essentially jolted out of his bloodlust by the statement, "What, really? You're not pulling my ass? He's dead. When did it happen? Where's his body now? Who was the attacker? How'd?" "I don't know," the man cried out in terror. Naruto thought the other was going to urinate in his pants because he was trembling so much. No one saw it happen. Everyone is in panic at this. I think Hinamori, Fukutaichu and Keikira. Fukutaichu are duking it out now at the 5th Division's B barracks. Naruto seized his opportunity to breathe fresh air with great glee and gusto. Even better is the fact that Aizen, that bastard, is now dead. He addressed his subordinate, trying to hide his joy to avoid being called a sadist, and said, "I'll go check it out immediately." When he failed, a twisted, deranged smirk emerged, further equating him with a sadist. "In the meantime, you take that stack of papers from my desk and on the floor and give it to Kion and Sentaro." Only one very pale and stuttering Shinigami remained in the disorganized office after he vanished in an instant. Two red-faced and enraged lieutenants trapped in a deadlock by an equally enraged Toshiro were the first thing Naruto saw when he arrived on the scene. With their zanpakutos out and their blades shining brightly in the sunlight, Kira and Hinamori were both ravenous for blood. Despite appearing as though he was prepared to chop someone's head off for forcing him to deal with these difficult situations at the beginning of the day, Toshiro appeared to be handling the situation well. He cocked his head slightly to the left when he sensed Naruto's approach, then went back to scolding the two lieutenants. Naruto looked in the direction the young captain had pointed, and he saw Aizen's bloody corpse on the whitewashed wall, held loosely and painfully pinned by his own Zanpakuto. Indeed. Is it possible? Wait, oh, damn. Naruto rolled his eyes at the absurdity of it all and hurried to take the body off. Naruto examined the corpse carefully as he carefully lowered it back onto the ground and pulled out the projecting sword. Naruto was certain that he would have thought the corpse was real and danced around yelling in delight at Aizen's purported death if Shinko hadn't noticed something strange about it. He assumed that killing that bastard wasn't that simple. Naruto considered declaring the body to be a fake and destroying whatever Aizen had planned to do by killing himself, but that would only force Aizen to take a different course of action and reveal to the man that Naruto was aware of his not-so-goody side. Thus, Naruto concluded that it would be best if he simply cooperated with Aizen's plans until his true intentions were eventually revealed. Naruto was fairly certain that Rukia was involved. Then Rukia's execution date was pushed up, and suddenly everything was chaotic. Perhaps Aizen wanted the property of the Kuchiki family. Naruto would ensure that the other person wouldn't get it, regardless of what it is. Naruto, Toshiro said as he went over to retrieve items from Naruto, accompanied by the relief team. He had already removed the area effectively. The only sign that a fight had occurred recently was the tiny cracks in the tiles. How's the body? Definitely dead, since I couldn't find a pulse, but I'd suggest taking it to Unohana Taiko for further confirmation. Naruto raised his head. The old geezer's not gonna be pleased with this. That's the first captain down, and by internal strife, no less. The idea of having to endure another meeting in which their Sotaichu ranted endlessly about the chaos Seireiti was currently going through made Toshiro groan a little. He muttered bitterly, "I'll catch Jin red-handed one day, you just wait and see." Naruto smiled. feeling a little bad because Toshiro had fallen for his ruse too easily, and quickly excused himself by saying something about the mountains of paperwork. But going back to his seals was all he could ever think about. Aizen had been moving. He needed to move quickly. Furthermore, he felt absolutely no remorse for leaving the paperwork behind. Naruto was furious right now. After setting down his paintbrushes, cleaning the floor, creating a barrier, and joyfully cracking the 5th seal, he was distracted by a burst of Ryotsu. It belonged to Kenpachi and Ichigo. Furthermore, the latter was not at all holding back. Naruto felt sorry for Ichigo. Then he recalled that Ichigo was meant to divert the captains, and his current actions now perfectly meet that requirement. He shrugged and went back to his seals, not really caring how this Ryotsu power battle turned out. For his own benefit, he did, however, pray that Ichigo would not sustain a serious injury that would make him useless in the forthcoming games. Another Ryotsu spike cut him off just past the 6th seal. There was one that was clearly Kyoraku Taiko's. The other, with the shaggy hair and enormous bulk, was faint, but Naruto recognized it as Ichigo's Mexican friend. Naruto flinched. With the outcome of this fight already known, Naruto quickly lost interest and returned to his work. Ouch, he doesn't even stand a chance. Only to have 2 more Ryotsu spikes disturb you once more. This one was so weak that Naruto was positive he wouldn't have sensed it if Shinko hadn't improved his senses. But when he recognized the owners, he was taken aback. Byakuya was engaged in combat. Not less with Ganju. The fact that Ganju was the first Ryoka to reach the Shrine of Penitence struck Naruto as rather pitiful. Naruto paused. There would be no chance for Ganju. Byakuya also had no patience for those who disobeyed the rules. Rukia's extremely early death from a ballistic Ganju is the most urgent of the numerous things that could go wrong in this scenario. Idly, Naruto pondered how Aizen would react to the current situation. Did he not feel pressured to have the Tsukyoku fry Rukia? Furiously, Naruto tangled his hair and swore loud at his own foolishness for letting fools into Seirei and running around like stupid chickens. Suicide matches with captains twice their strength and 4 times their brain capacity were picked up by idiots who were foolish enough. Everything was a complete mess. Furthermore, he had no remorse for sending them to their deaths. Furthermore, he had no regrets about letting them into Seirei that day. Finally, he was not in denial. Naruto jolted to his feet and began running as quickly as he could in the direction of the Senzai-kyu. This must have been the most foolish scheme he had ever devised in his life. He was also Uzumaki Naruto, which was a lot to say. Naruto demanded a refund from Ryoka. Naruto was aware that he would not survive. Ichigo would perish. Only 5 seconds had passed since he had worried about Ganju, which is how long it took Byakuya to put the other into agonizing oblivion. Naruto could only console himself with the fact that he hadn't accidentally killed off Kaien's little brother, however ugly looking the other might be. Speaking of ugly, things were really starting to get gruesome down there. Hell, even his own captain was present, flanked as usual by Sentaro and Kion. However, Naruto wasn't overly concerned about his captain because the 3rd seats were available. A new, unidentified Ryotsu entered the battle, and he hesitated a little. Ichigo had artfully fainted before Naruto realized what was happening, and Byakuya and the unidentified man were attempting to Shunpo one another before the enigmatic stranger and an unconscious Ichigo made their spectacular escape. Without Rukia, Naruto was left feeling very bewildered and frustrated. Naruto turned abruptly and pursued the 2 fugitive Ryoka, knowing that his captain would deal with matters back with Rukia. He was curious as to why in the world that was back there. He then intended to deliver the resignation letters to those unruly Ryoka. For at least 30 minutes, Naruto had been following them without stopping. The majority of it involved the Ryoka traveling to various locations and circling Seirei in an effort to ward off possible assailants. After losing them multiple times before Shinko had to step in to help, Naruto acknowledged that the other was competent at his job. At last, it appears that the 2 were moving in the direction of their destination. However, that didn't stop Naruto from silently referring to the other many names in the back of his mind, which included Cyborg and Guy Reincarnate. Halfway through the journey, Ichigo woke up and, predictably, made a lot of noise before his companion intervened to quiet him. Ichigo had been a good little boy and had kept quiet the rest of the way. When they came to a halt at a clearing at the base of Tsukyoku Hill, Naruto was just relieved to be able to pause and rest his legs, even though he had no idea what the 2 of them were thinking about. Heaving like a madman and landing hard with a thump, it was almost a given that both Ryoka would notice him. Ha, as expected, of Shiwan Yoruichi, my legs feel wobbly, Naruto exclaimed, panting, his face red in anticipation. That was one hell of a chase. I'm never, ever gonna do that, ever again. Yoruichi narrowed his cat. like eyes and said, "You mean you followed us all the way from Senzai-Q?" With a hint of amusement. She was breathing a little too. If nothing else, the faint gleam of perspiration on her face was a sign of exhaustion. She grinned. "Then you're one hell of a kid, boy." Instead of wasting his breath responding to her, Naruto turned to Ichigo. "You, strawberry boy, take your pals and get out of Soul Society this instant. I overestimated your abilities, and I underestimated the old man. This ain't no place for kiddies like you." Ichigo was not amused by the abrupt request to evacuate. "What the hell do you mean by that? You want us to shove off the moment you think we can't make it? After everything we've been through, you think we'd leave so easily?" Ichigo laughed. "Hell no." Anger and frustration that had been bottled up for 70 years began to seep out of Naruto. "I'll get Yukataki Taiko to open up a Senkaimon for you tonight. You just stay here and keep hidden while I go retrieve your pals," he said in a calm voice. Ichigo, who was witnessing Naruto's appearance for the first time, asked, "What the hell is wrong with you? Yukataki Taiko, why are you sounding like one of them?" The most noticeable difference was that he was wearing standard Shinigami Shiakusho, with his amusing black sword tucked into his obi like a Zanpakuto. His hair was a little unkempt, and his whisker marks were still visible. "Don't worry, I'll save Rukia by myself, then I'll send her down to live in Karakura," Naruto said in a toneless manner, ignoring Ichigo's inquiries. "I don't want to live knowing that I've willingly let several innocent living souls died running around Seirei. I shouldn't have let you guys cannonball your way through that day." Ichigo inhaled deeply. Then he went off. Ichigo brought Zangetsu down heavily on Naruto, who abruptly stopped talking and had to remove Shinko from its sheath. There was a loud clang as the two blades collided, but all Naruto could hear was Ichigo's angry tirade. Ichigo shouted, "I've had enough of your bullshit, Zabuza. I've always disliked you and that know-it-all attitude of yours. What's with that crappy speech, proclaiming that you're the mastermind behind our actions and all that shit? Well, let me tell you something. You didn't do shit in anything that we've accomplished. I chose to fight Renji and Kenpachi with my own free will. We willingly put our lives at stake for Rukia. You did not force us to do anything at all, got that?" Naruto hissed in a chilly voice, "Oh yeah? I could have stopped you that day. Then you wouldn't even have managed to place a single foot in Seirei." Ichigo sneered, "I'd like to see you try, you little wimp. Just because you're facing captains tougher than you're chickening out like a coward. If you're so scared, why don't you run back to the real world instead?" Darkly, now completely enraged, Naruto muttered, "Screw this shit. I'll just send you back now whether you like it or not. Then I'll go hunt down your pals and send them back as well." Naruto effortlessly slid his sword out of the deadlock and slashed at the other before Ichigo could react, causing him to reflexively avoid the blade. They slashed and blocked in a series of ferocious parries, each attempting in vain to hit the other. Ichigo should have had the advantage by all rights because of his bigger blade and heavier blows. Zangetsu was frustrated, however, because he couldn't even get a scratch on the other. Naruto was much too quick, constantly outwitting him, avoiding him at the last second, and coming up behind him with Shunpo, taking advantage of Ichigo's surprise to attack him. Ichigo reeled backwards from the force in his own attempt to dodge after one vertical slash went through. Ichigo growled as he steadied himself, "You keep attacking from blind spots. That's cheating." The blonde was preparing his sword for another blow as he examined the other person in front of him. Perhaps faster than Byakuya, Naruto was swift. Ichigo was unable to anticipate the direction of Naruto's next blow because, in contrast to the rigid captain, his attacks lacked form. Last but not least, Ichigo recognized the expression in his eyes. One he had frequently adopted in combat. The typically easygoing and playful blonde was adamant about bringing them back to reality. Naruto responded with a thoughtless shrug, "You know what they say. There are no rules in a death match." Then he launched an assault. The next instant, he was gone, and Ichigo had just time to turn around and dodge the jagged sword that was descending on him. "He's not holding back, is he?" Ichigo gritted his teeth and yelled in his head as he had to concentrate hard to push back his blade. Naruto's eyes were dark, and he was using his absurdly short sword, which couldn't even have been a legitimate katana, to easily hold up against the big Zangetsu. Furthermore, it didn't appear that obnoxious Yoruichi would be offering assistance anytime soon. She was merely standing by the sides, laughing at Ichigo's apparent realization that this battle would not be as simple as it had first appeared to be, and with the match. "Okay," Ichigo complained to himself. The other had always had a good boy look on his face and appeared a little light on his feet, so he did underestimate Zabuza. Zabuza appeared to be an easy opponent, given that he defeated punks like Renji and Kenpachi. Ichigo at last understood what it meant to not judge a book by its cover. Not even Zabuza's sword should be taken lightly, even after harsh clashes with Zangetsu, who was not only heavy but also a full-fledged Zanpakuto. That thin, small slab of metal had not broken or cracked. Ichigo began pumping his Ryotsu into his sword while grunting. He had to leave the little altercation with Zabuza, even though he didn't want to. The other person might not get tired, but he would if this kept happening. Zabuza's eyes widened in shock as if he sensed what Ichigo had planned to do. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he screamed. Ichigo's smile quickly turned to a grimace as he said, "I'm getting us out of this irritating stalemate. This was going to hurt like hell, but if it would take down that fast-moving jerk, it was worth the chance." Ichigo released the Ryotsu he had stored up inside Zangetsu and braced himself. Getsuga Tenshou. Both fighters were sent flying in opposite directions by a loud explosion, colliding with trees that offered little protection before plummeting to the ground, smoking and obviously burned. Ichigo took the brunt of the burns from his self-inflicted attack and was the first to get back up on his feet, nursing his left arm, which had protected him. With a heavy pant, he pondered whether the Getsuga Tenshou he had fired at close range would be sufficient to take down the swift Zabuza. At least Zabuza's injuries from the previous assault would cause him to move more slowly and lessen the force of the upcoming assaults. Since he lacked Ichigo's massive, heavy sword to protect him from the blast, the other's damage should have been higher. Zabuza came out of his blast crater coughing loudly and rough. His shiakusho was slightly tattered, singed, and covered in dirt, and his blonde hair was more unkempt than it had ever been. Zabuza's left cheek and forearms were covered in angry red burns, but he was moving forward menacingly without even stumbling. This suggests that Zabuza had an extraordinary pain threshold. The black hilt of Naruto's Zanpakuto was clenched in his fists as he growled, "That hurt. A lot. You freaking dumbass." He hissed in indignation, his eyes briefly turning red. "You nearly killed yourself back there. You could have died, and your stay in Soul Society would have been permanent." Ichigo calmly responded, bracing himself for another assault, "I told you before. I would risk my life for Rukia. After all, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't even be standing here today." Naruto became even angrier as a result. "Why don't you get it? You're a freaking human. You still have a life to live for in the real world. I said I'll handle Rukia's case and send her back to you nicely, alright? So don't involve yourself in our matters anymore." Ichigo was equally determined as the other, saying, "Sorry Zabuza, but it became my matter the moment I received my Shinigami powers." Blue and brown eyes met, each as relentless as the other, and they circled one another, searching for a gap to attack. Ichigo said, keeping his gaze fixed on the other's sword and tracking and tracing every moment, "I know you mean well, but I can't just leave everything to you. Rukia's current predicament is my responsibility. I'll take care of the mess that I made myself." What a grown-up statement to make. "Funny, I don't remember you being so mature when you decided to blast yourself off together with me a minute ago." Naruto grumbled. "Even if you don't cherish your own life, think about the others you left behind, won't you? Why don't you just wake up already, and realize that there are people back there waiting for you?" That statement caused Ichigo to wince a little, and Naruto slashed out at him without hesitation. Ichigo was unable to fully avoid the swipe. As Ichigo rolled away and staggered back to his feet, clutching a bleeding wound on his left shoulder that extended down to his chest, the metallic smell of blood quickly filled the clearing. Quickly gaining the upper hand, Naruto locked swords with Ichigo again and subdued the orange-haired teenager. He moved quickly, his burns already beginning to heal, and he was as nimble as he had been at the beginning of the battle. His movements were being sharpened by the adrenaline he was pumping, but his primary fuel right now was rage. Naruto pressed down harder on Ichigo, who was gritting his teeth to avoid bending over from the force placed over him, and said, "Since you don't want your life that badly, then I'll end it here for you." Ichigo could feel the air heating up around him and his legs buckling. He had trouble breathing, and his ears were filled with an unearthly murmur. Kyufu ni toke, Shinshihiko. Because of what Zabuza had just said, Ichigo's heart was pounding and his mind was racing. He opened his mouth to ask Zabuza what the other had meant, but his body was not cooperating, so he was unable to say a single word. It was unfathomable. His body went numb in an instant, his heart roared loudly from inside his ribs, and icy sweat ran down his forehead. He had to work hard to inhale each breath, and his eyes could only ever focus on the smoking, dark crimson blade pressing him to the ground. Ichigo understood that he would lose. Don't worry about losing. Since he was certain to pass away very soon, he would not even be eligible for a rematch. His hands were cold and clammy, and his strength was gone. He was already on his knees, and as he had said, Zabuza would cut him in two the instant he lost control of Zangetsu. Ichigo was about to believe that things couldn't get any worse than they were when Zabuza slammed his sword down harder and began cleaving through Zangetsu with the ease of a butter knife, much to Ichigo's horror. Red-hot iron shavings fell to the ground below as Zangetsu melted into two and gave way to the other with a hiss. "God damn it, get moving!" Ichigo shouted in his head, and to his relief, he was able to awkwardly jump out of the tight grip and roll away while gasping for air, just before Zangetsu gave way and melted in two. His chest no longer felt heavy with taunt, and breathing became easier. Ichigo gasped, "What the hell was that? Why do you have a shikai?" Zabuza gazed up at him, his icy, hard blue eyes. The blonde calmly responded, "That's because Shinshihiko is a genuine, authentic Zanpakuto, idiot." His statement uncannily echoed what Urahara had said to him just days earlier. He stepped forward, one foot mockingly resting on the red, stained ground that Ichigo's blood from his open wound had produced. Around him, tiny iron shavings, Zangetsu's iron, were scattered on the floor like silver pearls, some of which were still smoking and red. "But still, I'll have to hand it to you. You managed to regain your senses even though Shinko is in such close range." Zabuza went on. He raised his sword and effortlessly adjusted its angle so that it was simple to cut Ichigo but challenging for the other to block. In addition to being longer, the released Shinshihiko's blade was also much smoother, curvier, and sleeker, almost like an elongated but thin sickle. The most notable alteration, however, was that the blade, which had once been silver, had bled into a deep, dark red. Ichigo exclaimed, You're a Shinigami?" At the realization, "But, I lied. About everything. And you foolishly lapped it up like a bloody dumbass. Hell, my name's not even Zabuza to begin with." Zabuza laughed. "But all that doesn't matter. 'Cause you're probably not gonna live past today. You don't have to worry about anything, Strawberry. I'll be sure to send your pals back to the real world safely, and then I'll rescue Rukia myself without any more hindrances." Not. As Zabuza advanced one more step, Ichigo's internal tension increased once more, tightening his chest and giving him the sensation that his legs were being held down by several kilograms of weights. The blonde told the teen with the orange hair, "That's the first hell circle. Tatsumaki. You can't breathe right, can you? Your body won't obey your instincts to run. You can only look straight ahead, and accept the fact that you're going to die by this blade of mine." He vanished, reappearing a few inches from Ichigo's sweaty face, his blade flashing and gleaming, hungry for more blood to cover its already red surface, his twisted grin revealing extra long canines. Ichigo was completely immobile and unable to raise his arms in self-defense against the blow intended for his bare neck. Ichigo's confused head was suddenly filled with the sound of not Zabuza's voice, "And this is the second circle of hell, Shinoik." Ichigo's eyes widened as he saw the red blade hurtling toward him, but he was helpless to stop it as it sliced through the air, completing its descent while steaming and heating the surrounding air. With no trace of sympathy in his voice, the shinobi remarked, "Too bad, Ichigo, but this match wasn't even a stalemate to begin with. Checkmate. This is game over." Unwilling to give up and acknowledge his loss, Ichigo closed his eyes. He couldn't pass away here without even completing his mission. "No, I didn't wish to pass away." He was unable to pass away. There was a loud snap, and the blade's quick motion came to an abrupt halt. When he opened his eyes, he saw a bundle of orange cloths and tanned hands tightly clasping them. At last, Yoruichi had made the decision to intervene. Despite his fortunate escape from death, Ichigo would have been relieved, but his body remained immobile and paralyzed. With her brows furrowed from the strain of holding down the deep crimson blade, Yoruichi's tone was playful but strained as she said, "All right boys, that's enough playtime for today." Her tanned, toned upper arms were visible through the orange shirt she wore to shield her palms from the hot sword. However, with the burning Zanpakuto at work, the overshirt didn't appear to be thick enough. Angry smoke hissed out from inside the bundle, and black burn marks were already starting to appear on the outer layers of the cloth. The pain of clamping down on the sword that was already overheated and still heating up made Yoruichi wince. "I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to keep your paws off Ichigo-kun for the next 3 days, 4th seed of the 13th Division, Uzumaki Naruto." She let out a purr, "Since as of today, he'll be under my good care." If the other person was taken aback that Yoruichi was aware of his true identity and position, he was skilled at concealing it because neither his shoulders nor his eyes twitched in any way. Slowly, Naruto's attention shifted from Ichigo's motionless body to her face, which was icy and cunning, and his unwavering sword grip. Curiously, he tilted his head to the side. "And what makes you think 3 days would be enough to beat some sense into this useless piece of sack, Shunshin Yoruichi?" Yoruichi, who was perspiring from the heat that Naruto's blade was emitting and from the strain of holding the sword down, answered as steadily as she could, because if he doesn't get his head straight, Rukia will be executed. Besides, as of now, Ganju and Sato are taken out of the field. The only competent players left now are Ishida and Ichigo. Ishida, unlike the others, uses his brains and knows the meaning of sneaking around. And I'm taking Ichigo out with me, so you can be rest assured that the next few days will be very peaceful. Naruto scoffed and said, "Don't fool yourself, Shunsun. That kid can't save anyone. He can't even save his own hide." Yoruichi gave a rough growl and said, "You're too impatient, brat. Ichigo still has large potential within him, waiting to be tapped into. I will get him to Master Bankai in 3 days. Likewise, I don't exactly see the need for you to use this level of Shikai on him. It's overkill." "This level?" Naruto asked again, unable to believe it. He then frowned, understanding that he was partly to blame for losing his temper during the fight. "Didn't you hear me just now, lady? I'm only on level 2, and he's already dropping dead. Besides, somebody needs to learn that he isn't the almighty Superman, and realize that jumping into suicide battles isn't going to remove Rukia's execution sentence." It said, he needed to quickly regain control of himself because he was becoming irritable. Naruto let out a long sigh. "It looks as though Shinko's not going to have any more blood anytime soon, unless I go through you first. So I'll just take my leave now," Naruto said quietly. A huge migraine was already looming over him. With practiced ease, he slid Shinko back into its sheath and sealed it back into its compact form, quickly drawing his blade out from the folds of Yoruichi's torn and burned garments. Yoruichi and Ichigo both appeared to loosen up as the strain from Shinko's first Hell Circle's effect subsided. However, his Shikai's effects were still evident. The air around them was incredibly dry and crisp, and the vile smell of burned flesh, metal, and cloth persisted. As he turned to go, Naruto noticed a deep frown on his face and furrowed his eyebrows in disapproval. Ichigo felt Naruto's eyes on him and hissed, cleaning his wounds from the ground, "What? You have something to say, Shinigami Uzumaki?" Tatsumaki and Chinook are activated by default upon entering Shikai. These two are Shinshihiko's most basic abilities. To think that you'd be overwhelmed by them is too pathetic to the point of being pitiful. The best part? I could have just killed you off without even releasing my Zanpakuto. And I'm just a lowly 4th seat. Naruto grumbled. "You'd better train real hard throughout these 3 days, Ichigo. Cause I can't even imagine you fighting off Byakuya in this state you're in. Forget the 9 other captains and their lackeys." Ichigo's teeth clenched in response to the barrage of taunts Naruto had directed at him, but he glared back with resolute, angry eyes. Eyes that held a resolve that Naruto knew would send Ichigo into 3 days of intense, non-stop training. After all, young male teenagers had pride to maintain. Naruto turned and hurriedly left the area with Shunpo, not even looking back, satisfied that Ichigo was appropriately motivated and would leave his hair until the big day came. Shinko only intended to take a quick shower, finish up some last-minute tasks, and begin his second itinerary, Aizen hunting, because he had mostly recovered from his injuries. The following 2 days went by at a breakneck pace, most likely because so much happened all at once. Ishida, the final capable member of the Ryoka team, was dispatched by Tusen, much to Naruto's relief, but not before he severely injured the eerie Captain Kuretsuchi. By that point, Naruto had managed to crack every seal, leaving his captain to perform the laborious and delicate task of copying the ward's signatures. Naruto had spent the rest of the night attempting to comfort an agitated Toshiro, who was still steaming like a boiling kettle following the brief altercation he had with his fellow captain, Ichimaru Jin, before departing to let his captain occupy himself with the seals. He spent his morning painstakingly examining every crevice and nook of the 5th Division, locating Aizen's Ryotsu, and painstakingly going through every path it had taken. The most fascinating but sickening lead led him all the way to Central 46 Chambers, where the compound was covered in dozens of bloody corpses and surrounded by the vile smell of death and decay. It was one of the most heinous and disgusting massacres Naruto had ever witnessed. Naruto could almost feel his Aizen hate meter going up a few notches as he surveyed the squalid scene that had clearly occurred weeks ago, moving past the "watch out" zone and into the "must eliminate" zone. He was fairly certain that the bulb at the tip was on the verge of blowing up. To his great dismay, however, he found nothing of note, and not a trace of Aizen's presence, and departed as silently as he had arrived. As Shinigamis battled, not the Ryoka but themselves, Seireiti was thrown into utter chaos and rife with Ryotsu fluctuations. It seems that restless lieutenants and captains seized this unique chance to unleash their almost always repressed Ryotsu. Rolling his eyes at the folly of these disinterested Shinigami, Naruto honed his senses even more in order to find another of Aizen's Ryotsu marks and begin a new investigation. since Naruto was neither a captain nor a vice captain, he was unable to attend the execution, and Yukitake was the only person capable of managing the last and final step of releasing the Shiwan shield, so he had little to do left. However, he stopped when he sensed a change in Yukitake's Ryotsu, which meant he was ready. After clearing the sleep from his drooping, exhausted eyes, Naruto began running as hard as he could in the direction of the massive, imposing, and towering Sokyoku Hill. The sheer pressure of the Ryotsu force that had suddenly erupted from above the hill caused Naruto to lose his balance, miss a shunpo, and stumble a little as he was a minute away from the hill. The power that was building up on the hilltop was about to send him and Shinko into a drunken rage, so he stumbled forward, lowering down all of his enhanced senses as quickly as he could. Naruto was vaguely aware that intense fighting had broken out atop the hill as he struggled to restrain the sudden bloodlust that had been inside him for nearly the whole time he had been in Soul Society. The clanging of steel against steel, the bright flashing lights of released Kido spells and awakened Zanpakuto, and numerous Ryotsu build dot-ups. A minute later, Naruto realized that he probably wouldn't have been able to control the caged beast inside of him if he hadn't turned down his ultra perception. It had been far too long since they had experienced the intense tension of a chaotic battlefield for both of them. They desired entry. Now that the time had finally arrived, he and Shinko were both bloodthirsty, specifically, the blood of Aizen. A group of men in black obstructed Naruto's path, causing him to skid to a stop. He swiftly glanced at only 10 of them, each of whom could be recognized as an unranked Shinigami member by the impersonal, unremarkable Zanpakuto by their sides. He scowled. "I don't know who you guys are, but I obviously outrank all of you here. Get out of my way, I'm in a foul mood right now." According to the group's apparent leader, we're acting on orders of the Captain Commander, 4th Seat of the 13th Division, Uzumaki Naruto. We're to immobilize all members of the 13th and 7th seats, for your interference with Kuchiki Rukia's execution. Busted, thought Naruto sourly. So, Yukitake. Taiko, we couldn't really get away from the old man after all. He faced the Shinigami who was in front of him. From what you've said, it sounds like Rukia managed to avoid her execution. I'm going to carry out our plans of sending her away from Seireiti. If you still insist on stopping me, then be rest assured that I'll show you no mercy. The leader withdrew his katana and remarked, even though you are higher ranked than us, Uzumaki. Dono, you won't be able to keep up with this amount of numbers. About 300 men, each with a katana drawn, appeared on each side with strategically placed shunpo, encircling him and preventing him from fleeing. The unexpected surge in population didn't even make Naruto blush. Smirking, Naruto said, amusing. As your superior, Naruto cocked his head to the side and looked coolly at all the tense, seething Shinigami in front of him. But I'll have you know that it'll take much more than a measly 300 of you to stop me. It pains me to be fighting my own kind, so why don't I give you a little advice before we get the fight started? He said. Naruto's smirk quickly turned to a sneer as he said, coordinate your movements. Charge in as a group. And attack me with all yours got. In a split second, he was flashing away, with Shinko pulling away and gripping tightly as he swung down and hungrily bit the blade into the nearest piece of human flesh. Naruto had dropped 5 men to the ground with a single swipe, leaving them motionless and splattering blood on the hard earthen ground. Drops of blood splashed onto his cheeks, which he licked off. There was now a sinister gleam from within them in the grin he wore on his face. Naruto darkly continued, because if you don't, where you had left off, I'm gonna kill you. Currently, Aizen was experiencing pure ecstasy, giddy with happiness and delight. At last, he had completed the task. At long last, he had touched it. The Haugoku, the orb of distortion, the tiny hexagonal object that rested in the middle of his clenched palms, was at last his. His efforts over the last few years, over the last 100 years, had finally paid off. Right now, nothing could ruin Aizen's joy. Not even the resolute but ridiculously weak lieutenant of the 6th Squad. Not even the mortal child who was stupidly overconfident in his non-existent abilities and incredibly weak. Not even the obnoxious ants that were beginning to gather around him, refusing to move despite his ability to squash them with ease. Nothing, not even he, could stop or dampen him because he was unstoppable and absolute. Aizen. The person he was thinking of suddenly materialized, his amusing red sword smoldering as much as its master, and Aizen grinned. At last, his only pest had shown up, panting from his run, his clothes rumpled, ripped, and sloppy, but unharmed. With mocking warmth and outstretched hands, Aizen said, "Good job catching up with us, Uzumaki-kun. I would have expected you to arrive earlier, with your extra fine perceptive abilities, but don't worry, these things do tend to happen once in a while." Uzumaki did not rise to his bait and utterly disregarded his provocation. Rather, His gaze strayed to look around him, taking in the bruised and bloodied bodies of Komamura, Rukia, Byakuya, Ichigo, and Renji. With anger, he muttered, "You did all this. You did all of this. Everything was all you're doing." "Yes," Aizen said, forming a repulsive smile. "I was the one who had planned everything out. It was high time for me to start clearing out the trash." The blonde boy screamed, "I'll kill you," and ran directly at Aizen. The latter remained where he was and didn't even blink. In an instant, Tosen was in front of him, Zanpakuto drawn out, enclosing Naruto in a field of black darkness and halting the other's reckless and blind charge. Bankai. Suzamushi Suishiki. Enma Kurogi. From beneath the black emptiness, the Uzumaki's voice snarled, "Get out of my way, you ugly little piece of turd." The spiritual pressure that accumulated within the enclosing Bankai immediately soared to a full-time high, as if the boy was attempting to prove his point. "I'm only after that bastard's blood. If you still insist on standing in my way, then I'll cut you down along him." Aizen grinned. He was correct. Deep down, the child had a lot of untapped potential that was locked away and unwilling to be released. Aizen had known his child was concealing something since they had first seen one another. Something he fiercely and protectively protected. Something he should have known only to himself. Aizen was certain it was power, too. He was scared to use his raw potential. He had made numerous unsuccessful attempts over the previous 60 or so years to get Uzumaki to break. It was impenetrable, completely hidden, heavily fortified, and unbreakable. The boy had a fiercely acute sense and an almost perfect intuition. He had been suspicious of Aizen from the beginning. He had exposed the majority of Aizen's plots, disrupted a few, and forced him to take detours. Although he lacked the rank and trust necessary to stop Aizen's schemes, he might have been able to stop nearly all of them. Aizen had taken advantage of this, carefully hiding his tax behind the law and his rank. The boy had been nothing but a bother and a fly ever since he entered Seirei. He was innocuous but annoying. However, Aizen had discovered the key today, and he intended to open a can of worms with it. Aizen calmly replied from outside Tosen's Bankai. "Created vacuum, you can try, Uzumaki-kun. But to you, who have held everything back for the past few decades, it'll be a big pity to blow your cover now, wouldn't it?" Uzumaki calmly responded, his voice resonating loudly from inside Tosen's Bankai. "I don't care about that shit anymore. I don't care about what might happen to me later on. Ranks, subordination, rules and laws. I've closed my eyes to those useless things. Right now, I can only see two things. My friends whom you've just slashed, and your dead body. Then we'll just have to see if you can prove this hallucination of yours true," replied Aizen. Konami. If the faint scuffling of feet and the faint smell of blood in the air were any indication, Tosen had started working as soon as the signal was given. "Uzumaki, after all, you rely too much on your senses. How does it feel like to lose all of them in one go?" Aizen began to frown as the Uzumaki's voice became gruff, to the point of being guttural. "Stop screwing around. If you're not going to take me seriously, then I'll force you to." 8th Circle. Shirike Jigoku. Tosen's Bankai vanished instantly, disappearing into a gorge that was incredibly blackened, smoking, and scorched, something that had never been there before, as a result of a powerful spiritual pressure surge and a powerful gust of hot air. As Tosen lay near the edge of the large crater, his body covered in excruciating third-degree burns, it was clear that he had been caught in the rage of the explosion. Naruto said, now that all interference has been gone, from the crater's center. He was comparatively unharmed, with only minor scratches on his forearms, in contrast to the rest of his surroundings. He prepared his sword and cracked his neck. "I'm going to start beating you up real bad." Fascinating indeed. You shielded yourself with Bakudo 39, Enkosen, before you exploded the area around you. From the looks of it, Konami managed to dodge in time, but he underestimated the blast range. If he was just a step closer towards the center, he would undoubtedly have been burnt to death. Aizen said casually. But effective though it may be, that attack of yours had just wasted away all your spiritual power. Uzumaki-kun, it would be futile to fight me in the state that you're in. You won't be able to defeat me. With his canines longer than normal, Naruto sneered back, "Want to test that theory of yours out?" His hard eyes gleamed with unadulterated rage and bloodlust. All they could do was lock onto Aizen's motionless body. With a hand ready on the hilt of his wakizashi, like Zanpakuto, Jin said, "Need me to step in, Aizen?" Taiko? From behind him. The silver-haired man's typical fox-like grin had vanished as he became tense at the unexpected obstacle they had encountered. "No need to worry, Jin. I can handle this boy by myself. Step by the side if you don't wish to get caught up in this fight." Aizen responded with coolness. He looked over at Naruto. I've always been very interested in clashing swords with you. It seems like I'll finally get the chance to do so today. So come at me, Uzumaki-kun. Prove to me that my assumptions about you are correct. Naruto hissed, dampening the air around them and shoving off powerful gusts of wind that sent his hair and robes flying in all directions. Sorry, but I'm not just going to prove them correct, and I have no intentions of meeting your expectations. I'm going to exceed them. Bankai. Ninth Circle. Kinryu Jigoku. Hiro Goka Shinshihiko. For the entire moment, Aizen's vision was encircled by red, but it gradually faded away to reveal a thick circle of condensed scarlet and Ryotsu that was clearly visible. In awe, Aizen watched as the Ryotsu gradually took shape, engulfing its master's body in a sea of deep red hues as it compressed itself tightly around it. Additionally, it had adopted a distinctly fox-like silhouette, complete with pointed ears and a long, languid tail that swished like a brush. He had never seen a Ryotsu this powerful or a Bankai this distinctive. It was liquid, almost molten, and resembled red-hot magma. It was so concentrated and thick that it could no longer have been regarded as spiritual energy. Aizen was vaguely conscious of the momentary paralysis that briefly overtook his body as Naruto took a step forward. Jin was shivering uncontrollably next to him, his eyes focused only on the demonic figure in front of him, cold sweat drops forming on the surfaces of his bare skin. It appeared to be another special ability of the Uzumaki's Zanpakuto. Aizen regained his movement and realized it was fear. The Zanpakuto of the Uzumaki family was capable of instilling fear in its opponents' hearts. What a conceited talent. His blood-red Ryotsu now surrounded Naruto like a shield, protecting his form and tracking his every move. Aizen observed that the coat had acquired the characteristics of its Shikai's blade, destroying everything in its path, including the air around it and the ground beneath it. Aizen could already feel the enormous amount of heat the Bankai was producing just by standing this far away, but the master in the middle appeared to be unharmed. Through the Ryotsu cover, Naruto's unburned, undamaged figure was visible. The ultimate defense was a coat that, until the Bankai was released, completely protected the wearer from all sides and burned down anything that came into close contact with it. The user could not be touched. Naruto hissed and brandished Shinko's final released form, a large double-bladed scythe with a deep red scarlet color and a gleaming metal coating. Don't put me in the same scale as where you put all those small fries you've been fighting with up to now. Since you've made me come this far, I'll show you that I'm on a completely different level from them. That a lowly creature like the Uzumaki could become a Zanpakuto with this much power behind it was inexcusable. Aizen was positive that the blonde's progress this far was solely due to his red coat. He was fortunate enough to have a strong spirit, much like the young captain of the 10th Division. Aizen acknowledged that he was experiencing a slight sense of jealousy, but that was all. He wasn't someone who was subjugated by material possessions like Zanpakuto. Naruto quickly vanished from his position and resurfaced in front of Aizen, slashing down with a huge vertical slash from his large blood-red scythe. Aizen sighed, stepped neatly without blinking, sending the blade crashing to the ground, flinging up big pieces of rubble in the process. For a moment, Aizen's eyes met the blonde's, and he gave him a mocking grin as he realized that the other person genuinely wanted him dead so badly that he was rapidly losing all sense of reason and logic. By the way the Uzumaki's eyes were gleaming fiercely, he could tell that bloodlust was evident. The easiest, but most uninteresting, people to deal with were those of this type. They were no longer even human. They were now beasts that only used instinct and hatred to fight. The angry blonde was, predictably, too easy to read. Then, without pausing or hesitation, he slashed his blade back upwards and then horizontally. Despite this, Naruto continued to swing at him in a series of erratic, yet intricate, and accurate, swings. But Aizen just moved as little as usual to avoid each swipe, his teasing grin never taking his eyes off his face. You say that you're on a level higher than the others, but I don't see much difference between you and your friends who are lying on the ground behind you. Aizen responded with disdain. Certainly, your strikes have more power and precision behind them, but there wasn't even a need for me to take out my Zanpakuto. You disappoint me with your weak feeble attacks, Uzumaki-kun. To his astonishment, Naruto smiled back, his eyes suddenly locking on his face. Aizen's bewilderment gradually gave way to numb surprise when Naruto abruptly raised his right arm, too swiftly for a hand holding a large, heavy weapon. The sudden speed of the swing caused Aizen's eyes to widen, and he quickly pulled Kyoka Suigetsu from its scabbard in an attempt to block, preparing himself for the blow. I didn't realize how strong he was. Normally, it would have been impossible to execute such a quick swing with just one hand. Was he restraining himself all along? The hit did not occur. There was no weapon in the empty hand that swung past his face. What? Naruto's smile continued to widen. Aizen's quick glance down as realization struck revealed that Naruto's left arm was already in a rapid descent, gripping tightly onto his bankai, whose blade was falling. The swing's momentum, the hand's force behind it, and gravity's pull were all contributing to the weapon's increased speed. Since when did he switch his weapon over to his other hand? With the blade just inches from severing him in two, there was no time to consider this. Aizen used Shunpo to avoid the blade's path because he knew he wouldn't be able to block in time. After separating himself from Naruto, Aizen remarked, "It looks like you've resorted to using some petty tricks, but it's useless. You couldn't even lay a scratch on me." After spending a minute or two in such close proximity to the flaming red coat, he was naturally drenched in a light sheen of perspiration. "I won't fall for such foolish, desperate tricks a second time." Naruto arrogantly retorted, "What are you talking about? I made you draw out your Zanpakuto, didn't I?" He gestured to Aizen with his scythe. Naruto charged again, trying to turn this fight into a close combat one, his true strength, and said, "Let me tell you this. Bastards that fight by predicting their opponent's movements won't stand a chance against me. I've kicked each and every one of their asses when they tested their luck out on me. That was a nice appetizer. Shall we get started on the main course now?" Their second encounter was far more difficult than their first. Naruto was correct when he said that the first was a warm-up. Even though the blonde was now a seasoned Shinigami who was sent on high-level missions, it seemed as though his long-forgotten fighting abilities were finally coming back to life. In reality, Aizen had to try to avoid the successive attacks that were coming at him, sometimes dodging, sometimes parrying, but the other never even gave him a chance to attack. Aizen was relishing every moment of this fight. Someone who could hold his attention during a battle for this long didn't come along very often. Naruto's fighting style was so distinct that it could only have been the product of a brilliant mind. Every scythe swing he made was immediately followed by another, but the timings and directions of these follow-ups were remarkably different, as if the blonde was improvising new moves on the spot and using whatever one he felt like. The boy in front of him was doing it flawlessly, even though it was a suicide fighting style. And Aizen acknowledged the effectiveness of that approach, saying that he was always on his toes because he had to keep an eye out in all directions and could never predict where the next attack would come from. For Aizen, however, being on the defensive was sufficient for the time being. Because the blonde's eyes darkened and his Ryotsu flared higher, driven by his rage and frustrations, with every blow he delivered and every time his crimson blade failed to draw blood. Naruto glared up at the other man and growled in annoyance, as if sensing his amusement. "Don't get so cocky, you bloody faggot, I'm not done yet." Aizen grinned as the blonde upped the ante, this time incorporating kicks and punches into his unpredictable swings, making it harder for Aizen to dodge and forcing him to block more frequently with Kyoka Suigetsu. Given that the coded attacks typically come too close to his body, he was perspiring profusely from the heat the cloak was emitting. Naruto continued to push hard without pausing, which was especially unthinkable given that he had been depleting his Bankai's code with Ryotsu. Naruto now alternated his swings with the back of his scythe, which had a wickedly sharp end, raising the stakes even further. Aizen just kept using Shunpo to dodge attacks that he couldn't avoid by hand and easily, barely, blocking the hits away. Then, with a swing always ready, Naruto would counter with Shunpo, never letting go of the close distance between them. He would occasionally appear above him and at other times behind him. The ferocious dance would start over after Aizen dodged the blade, the fists, and the kicks. Between Naruto's rageful slashes, Aizen interrupted to try to divert the other and put some distance between them. "You're proving yourself to be an interesting challenge, Uzumaki-kun. But know that you won't be lasting long if backups don't arrive soon." It was fun to try to beat Naruto as best he could, but it wasn't fair to give the blonde the upper hand the entire time. To Aizen's dismay, Naruto responded without even halting his attack, "I've never been fighting alone. All this while, ever since I graduated, I've never fought alone, not even for a single time. Even now, the only reason why I'm able to stand up against you for so long is because I've got friends who are pushing me from behind." Aizen's eyes narrowed and he frowned in disgust as he said, "I can't say that I concur with that statement of yours, given that they're currently lying helplessly on the ground, with you protecting them from harm. Strong humans only need to fight for themselves, with themselves. Friends, dependency and bonds with others are just earthly attachments that pull you down, suffocate you, making you weak." Naruto grinned almost empathetically and said, "That's pitiful." This greatly irritated Aizen. "Right now, I'm fighting with Shinko behind my back, with the knowledge that I'm protecting my friends with every move I make. Aren't you attacking me together with your Zanpakuto? Don't you lift your sword to protect your comrades, your subordinates?" "That is just foolish thinking on you mortals' part," Aizen replied. You weigh yourself down with idiotic terms, allowing yourself to be led by what you perceive to be bonds. But let me tell you this. Humans will only act out of profit for themselves, nothing more, and nothing less. It is such a shame that we cannot see on equal terms. Uzumaki.kun. Hey. Okay, I'll give up on talking some sense out of your screwed up brain. You should hear yourself talking. Foolish mortals? I don't see a halo appearing over your head. Conceded Naruto. Since words won't enter that muddled skull of yours, I'll beat it into your body instead. Your type will only thoroughly open your ears until after you get the living daylights beaten out of you. The projectile suddenly blasted out at Aizen, who could hardly avoid it. It passed by so quickly that it left a tiny blood trail and lightly scraped his left cheek. Aizen turned his head a little and noticed that it was Naruto's Bankai coattail. Naruto yelled, "You can't afford to be looking elsewhere now," and swiftly slammed his scythe down on him. Naruto was hard on his heels as Aizen Shunpo left, and the back of his Ryotsu coat rippled to create 3 more identical tails, for a total of 4 tails. Even though it was composed of a mass of Ryotsu, the 4 wasted no time in launching themselves hungrily at Aizen, each missing and crashing down onto the ground, solid enough to gouge into the earth and send rocks flying. As if that weren't enough, Naruto was pursuing him as well, using his relentless fighting combo to prevent Aizen from even pausing long enough to remain in one place. Aizen understood what Naruto meant when he said that he was facing not one, but 2 fighters simultaneously, the Uzumaki and his Zanpakuto's spirit, which was in charge of the tail's unpredictable movements. It was one thing to fight with your spirit, but it was another to fight with your spirit together. This was something Aizen had never heard of before. The fact that Naruto could execute something as ridiculous as this and use it flawlessly and perfectly overwhelmed him to the point where he was unable to fully avoid the 5 simultaneous slashes. Aizen backed away while gripping his left shoulder, which had a deep cut on it. Naruto gave him a sneer. 2 more tails appeared as he said, whirling wildly in the air, almost too joyfully. "I have some sad news for you, assbag. You took so long to come at me seriously. Shinko's getting all fired up. I haven't let him out to play for a long time, you know. He's getting claustrophobic being cooped up in that cage. See what I mean? You'd better take this seriously before it gets to 9. They flew at each other once more, this time taking the offensive and neither of them bothering to block. Aizen calmly agreed, saying, "I see. That'll be a hassle for me." Despite his great frustration, Naruto was still unable to hit or burn the other. Aizen, on the other hand, had managed to nick Naruto multiple times, but each time his wounds had healed nearly immediately. For a few more seconds, they engaged in weaponry combat, neither of them giving up to the other. Naruto hissed, finally stopping his attacks to rest. "You're a tough one, aren't you? Is your skin made of tungsten metal or something? 'Cause the last time I checked, Shinko could melt anything weaker than iron." Aizen seized the opportunity to put a significant amount of distance between them right away. "I've been attacking you, with a special style I haven't been using since a long time, without a stop, and with my Bankai activated for the entire time. I'll understand if Tatsumaki doesn't affect you, but why the hell aren't you even scalded? I should be the one saying those words, Uzumaki.kun. Your fighting style involves the usage of your entire body, and you've been holding up your Bankai for this long. A normal person should have been out of energy by now. What exactly are you?" Aizen replied calmly. "Or should I phrase that out differently? How about, where exactly did you come from when you were alive?" In response to Aizen's inquisitive and somewhat intimate query, Naruto said angrily, "If you're thinking that you'll be able to find others like me out there, then don't waste your breath trying." In an attempt to dispel his memories of his previous life, he shook his head. "You could say that I'm one of a kind." Then Aizen said, "I see. That's such a pity." Aizen pointed at Naruto almost languidly and said, "Then that means that you are of no use to me anymore." Hedo 91. Senju Koden Taihao. It happened too quickly for Naruto to process. Naruto's vision was filled with a vivid pink light as Aizen's Kido spell's words escaped his lips. His whole body was inundated with agonizing pain before he realized what had happened. The pain was piercing through him, crushing him up, and avoiding Shinko's heavy cloak as if it were water. Although Naruto had used fire, been caught in explosions, and been burned by Kaden Jutsu numerous times due to his frequent sparring with Uchihas, he had never felt this roasted before, and the subsequent explosion had been even worse. He could almost feel his skin being eaten away by the blast. Naruto heard an unearthly, animalistic howl of pain as he screamed in agony. In an instant, everything was over when Naruto fell to the ground, his entire body covered in third-degree burns. Some of his skin was long since burned away, exposing raw muscles beneath, while other parts were black, roasted, decomposing, and dead. With a loud, solid thud, His former opponent hit the ground, and Aizen looked on in contempt. You got too ahead of yourself. Uzumaki-kun. While I did say that I find you to be an interesting challenge, you are still leagues away from trying to compare yourself to my level. Aizen was making fun of himself for winning, for taking away the Haugoku, and for defeating Naruto for his ineffective attempts to stop him. With a smug smile on his face and eyes relishing each wound he inflicted on the other, he walked slowly in the direction of the fallen blonde. At last he stopped, towering over the charred, motionless corpse. He hesitated. Oh? It looks like you deserve some credit after all, Uzumaki-kun. You escaped from the brunt of the explosion with a nicely executed shunpo. Thanks to your quick reflexes, you still have some life left in you. But it's all going to come over to an end very soon. Why? You bastard. Naruto croaked, too weak to even raise his head to give that man he detested a fierce look. Aizen went on blithely, it's a big pity that Seirei got to you first. You have so much potential. Potential which are being used for the wrong reasons. Which is why I can't let them have you. Aizen drops his sword. I enjoyed what little time we've spent together, Uzumaki Naruto. Goodbye. Kyoka Suigetsu plunged downward, cutting through the air with a swift motion and penetrating deeply into its target. For the second time in his life, Naruto found himself in a world of vast blackness as darkness engulfed his vision and he closed his eyes. Aizen pulled his Zanpakuto out from the collapsed body that lay in front of him and said, in the end, not even you, Uzumaki-kun, could stop me from achieving my ambitions. Aizen flicked the blood away, scattering the droplets on the floor, and then carefully resheathed his sword. It was a major letdown. The only person he had truly cared about turned out to be a huge waste of his time. With a strong Zanpakuto, a sizable Ryotsu reserve, quick reflexes and instincts, and quick thinking, Naruto had all he needed to establish himself as a person deserving of being on par with him. But it was so unfortunate that the boy had let small ideas of trust and friendship hold him back. That potential was all wasted. You were never fit for the role of protector, Uzumaki-kun. Your Zanpakuto was one made to kill, to attack, to destroy life. Which is why you could never grow stronger than you already was. Aizen continued mournfully. You could have been much more than you are now, if only you'd chosen to follow me. You. Uzumaki. Aizen turned his head slightly and saw Kurosaki clawing in their direction, looking very defeated. He asked incredulously, oh? You're still not dead either, Kurosaki Ichigo. He started to walk towards the Ryoka, intending to wipe the brat off the surface of this plane, but was stopped by a loud crash and a deadly, sharp sword aimed at his throat. First trash, now garbage. Not to worry, I think that cleaning you off would be much more easier than Uzumaki-kun here. The fatal voice that said, don't move, was genuinely sentimental. Aizen gazed calmly back into Shiwan Yoruichi's saffron, unblinking eyes. If you move even a muscle. With an equally flat voice, the second squad captain concluded, your head will roll. Despite her diminutive size, the hand that was holding the blade at his neck was steadfastly strong. The fact that those two women had reconciled disappointed Aizen. In fact, he had expected them to exterminate one another. Aizen, you've really screwed those kids up. Yoruichi hissed angrily from beneath him. Her narrowed, feline eyes darted from one fallen Ryoka to another, then to a terrified Rukia, an Ichigo that was on the point of passing out, and finally to Naruto's crippled, charred, and motionless form. I should have guessed that it was you all along. Calmly, Aizen said, don't take it too hard, Shunshin. Only a single person realized my real intentions without me telling. Uzumaki Naruto. Needless to say, see where he'd ended up now. With hard eyes, Soifun said, your punishment won't be light, Aizen. It probably won't. Aizen concurred with that, if you actually manage to capture me, that is. Soifun started to say, what are you? But a loud crash cut him off. Her eyes grew wide as she looked up and saw three enormous, towering figures rushing into view, bringing down buildings that collapsed and folding over their weight. Without doubt, the three of them were identifiable as Seirei's eastern, southern, and northern gatekeepers. And Soifun was certain that they were on Aizen's side based on the menacing way they approached the bloody battlefield. The shocked silence was broken by Aizen's voice, so what will you do now? It was clear from the smirk on his face that the bastard was having fun with this. Not even the two of you can manage to come after me, and fend off all of them at the same time, can you? Soifun started to say, Yoruichi. Sama, I will keep away the interferences. Please handle Aizen. But her mentor interrupted her. Yoruichi said, a smile already spreading across her lips, no need. She cocked her head back to look at the two new signatures that had crashed down on one of the gatekeepers after making their grand entrance, saying, it looks like someone else has beat you to it, isn't that right, Kukaku? When the smoke cleared, Shiba Kukaku could be seen idly lusting on Jidanbo, the last western gatekeeper. Kukaku cast a playful glance down at her old friend. She said casually, "Yo, Yoruichi. I got really bored, so I decided to drop by after taking a walk." Her eyes were shining gravely behind her. No more words were wasted because the one-armed woman started working right away. She quickly executed a Raikuhu to blast a gatekeeper into oblivion. Jidanbu had promptly followed up, using his muscular fists to sock the other two guards. In an instant, the two had knocked out all three guards with ease. Jin said in a sarcastic and, despite his words, impenitent tone, "Oops, sorry, Aizen. Taiko. It looks like she got me." His longtime childhood friend Matsumoto Rangaku was holding him back, and his sneering foxy smile was back on his face. Yoruichi slammed her fists down on Kyoka Suigetsu's hilt, forcing it shut inside its sheath so it could not be withdrawn, and said icily, "Give it up, Aizen. This is the end. You've sensed it by now, didn't you? We have you completely surrounded." Aizen looked up at what was happening in front of him. He, Tusen, and Jin were surrounded by all the captains and their vice-captains, their bodies stiff and their eyes wide with shock and disbelief. There was no need for more words. Seireiti believed that Aizen had committed treason and would receive the appropriate penalty. There was no use in excuses. Despite all of the tension, Aizen couldn't help but smile. Yoruichi growled and tightened her hold on him, crushing any escape plan he might have had. "What's so funny?" she asked. Aizen replied, "Ah, sorry, but it's time." She could no longer ignore the ominous constriction in her chest. She yelled angrily, "Soifun, get away," as she yanked herself free from the former captain. A second after her student mimicked her movements, a beam of yellow light instantly engulfed Aizen, shattering the earth beneath the bespectacled man's feet. With her eyes still wide with shock at what she was seeing, Yoruichi wiped away the perspiration that was streaming down her brow. "We would have been if I hadn't been a second too late." That line of reasoning was too unsettling to even consider further. Above her, Yoruichi scowled at the blue sky. As she had imagined, a broad rip split the sky in two, pushed open by countless pairs of bony, long arms. Disgruntled gasps, mostly from the vice-captains, were made when the white, masked faces of creatures that everyone present knew all too well appeared through the dark hole. Manos Grande. Soifun hissed from next to her, completely unimpressed and repulsed by the notion that Seireiti, the hallowed territory of Shinigami itself, would contain hollows of any kind. Just as shocked, her enormous vice-captain yelled, "Jillian!" from behind her. "Just how many of them are present?" They stared in awe of what their erstwhile comrade, Aizen, had just done, and no one responded. One of the Shinigami had taken the hollow's side. To make matters worse, he had even taken over Manos Grande. Quickly, two more beams of a similar design came down to pick up Tusen's fallen form and Jin. Withdrawing their Zanpakutos and preparing for a charge into the yellow beam, the majority of the vice-captains attempted to stop the trio's slow escape procession, but were stopped by their captain commander's powerful Ryotsu. The elderly man calmly said, "That beam of light is called negation." However, his trembling hands, which gripped his staff, revealed his rage. Once that light is cast, the area inside the light becomes a completely separate dimension, impenetrable from the outside. Aizen is no longer within our grasp. It is futile to chase him down now that it has come to this state. Yukitaki asked, "What are you trying to accomplish with this, Aizen?" The normally kind captain's Ryotsu was flaring up around him, bristling with rage. The other was obviously upset about the horrific death and injuries of his prized fourth seat. Aizen looked at the question nonchalantly and said, "To go higher." Another of the white-haired captain's vexing questions was shot back almost instantly. "Have you fallen in the process, Aizen?" "No one starts at the top of the world." Aizen calmly responded, taking off his glasses too slowly. "You're too arrogant, Yukitaki. Not you, not me. Not even the gods themselves." He broke his glasses easily with one hand, sending the broken pieces to the floor. He swept his fringe away from his face and brushed his hair back with another hand, saying, "But the unbearable vacancy of the throne in the sky is over. From now on, I will be sitting on it." No, everyone looked in the direction of the source of the savage, guttural sound. It originated in the trembling body of the Uzumaki, who was not as dead as Aizen had declared. His Zanpakuto was still lying by his side, sealed up and sheathed, but he was once again covered by his red Ryotsu cloak. The cloak appeared to have lost its viscosity from the time it had been used to fight Aizen, and there were no visible tails. When the blonde Shinigami stumbled to his feet, almost intoxicated, almost unconsciously, it was bubbling, frothing at the edges. To stop the furious Shinigami, nobody dared to move. I won't let it end this way. I won't let you escape from me. Everyone's eyes, including Aizen's own pair, visibly widened at this sight. The Uzumaki staggered unsteadily in the direction Aizen was going, showing no signs of being aware of anything that was going on right now. A gleeful grin broke across Aizen's face. Once again, this boy had shown his preconceptions to be incorrect. All of Aizen's carefully considered plans had been foiled by him. No human had been able to drive Aizen back for as long as he had. Though unsuccessfully, he had escaped one of Aizen's most tiresome Kido spells. And now that Aizen had undoubtedly pierced his heart, he had stood up. When Aizen looked more closely, he saw why. His red cloak was healing him, and everyone who saw the other's wounds could almost see the protracted, difficult process of cellular reconstruction. In seconds, raw red skin replaced the black, charred flesh that had fallen out. His chest had a huge hole that was twisting, filling up with flesh and covering the gap that was no longer visible. With each agonizing step, Naruto seemed to be oblivious to this agonizing process as he moved across the gap between them. The whisker tattoos on his cheeks were more noticeable than ever, and his eyes were glazed over, lifeless and blank, with pupils that flashed between red and blue. Now, the only thing that seemed to propel the blondes ahead was sheer willpower and determination. Everyone could see that the boy was otherwise completely exhausted. The mere shell of Uzumaki, Naruto, hissed out, Ryotsu flaring out wildly, as he growled out in his inhuman voice, Aizen will die. He will pay. I will deliver the rightful punishment he deserves onto him. His anger made most of the vice captains shudder, and his hatred was thick and choking. I won't let you go. I won't let you leave. Not until I shred your miserable body to tiny minuscule pieces and throw them into the 9 fiery pits of hell. And now he was looking up, glaring at the other, just below Aizen's negation. As their gazes locked, Aizen experienced a powerful surge of homicidal intent. Which, since he was now in a totally different plane of existence, was impossible. His eyes were fixed on a scarlet glare that belonged to a demon, not a human. It was one that was practically brimming with pure bloodlust and malevolent hatred. Aizen questioned whether the voice was that of his Zanpakuto's spirit. At last, Yukitake took a few cautious steps in the direction of his subordinate and said, Naruto. Get away from there. Aizen is no longer reachable. You'll just end up injuring yourself further. Enough. Naruto screamed, furious tears streaming down his cheeks from the corners of his eyes. It's not enough. The blood that he spilled isn't enough to make up for the blood that we spilled. Both his anger and his near mental instability caused his eyes to shine maniacally. I want him to bleed. I want him to bleed until a dry carcass is all that's left of him. There's not enough blood coming out from his disgusting hide. Yukitake yelled back, and just what do you think you can do while you're in this state? Look at yourself. You're barely even managing to stand. What do you think you can accomplish when you're barely even thinking straight? Naruto snarled and threw himself straight into the negation, saying, watch me. Shocks rippled through his body as he was flung backwards several feet upon contact, and then he was flung into the air, rolling to a painful stop a moment later. However, that didn't stop him from jumping up and making another pointless tackle. To everyone's surprise, he was able to hold his position for a few more seconds, which was enough time to push through a spike of red Ryotsu that quickly launched itself hungrily at Aizen. Aizen was relieved when it vanished before it could even get to him, wispily dissolved by the negation's force field. How? Aizen gave a headshake. Naruto responded with a series of snarls and curses from below, pushing himself up despite the tremors in his legs and forearm muscles. It doesn't matter. You are no longer in any position to launch another similar attack. Yukitake attempted to reason again, saying, Naruto, Aizen's right. We'll get him another time. It's pointless to lose your life here. Naruto screamed, I don't care, and punched, clawed, and clanged violently at the yellow beam, but to no avail. Even though his hands were steaming, scorched, and hissing, he persisted in his insane attacks. He hurt everyone. I swore that I'll never let my friends get injured ever again. And he took them down like they were houseflies, one after another. I won't forgive him. It's unforgivable. Naruto stopped and took a shaky breath. His chest heaved with heavy, labored breaths, and he screamed in frustration, why the hell can't I even land a scratch on him, before finally collapsing onto his knees. After a pause, Aizen said, it's farewell, Shinigami, and Ryoka. He stared into the unblinking eyes of a certain orange boy. He let the name flow naturally from his mouth. Kurosaki Ichigo. For a human, you certainly are interesting. Ichigo just glared back, clinging to consciousness, bleeding heavily, and too exhausted to even respond appropriately. Nearly encircled by the gloomy darkness of Hueco Mundo, Aizen uttered, we will meet again, Uzumaki Naruto. You are certainly too unique for me to simply ignore. It's such a pity that I didn't manage to discover your true potential sooner. Aizen could hear a howl of blood in response, ringing in his ears, as the thin portal closed itself. Aizen! Naruto screamed until he had a sore throat. His lips peeled off and his voice cracked as he screamed. It had been a long time since he had felt so worthless. He was shocked to learn that, in spite of all his boasting and the energy and effort he had invested in this fight, he had failed to even inflict a serious wound on Aizen. It was embarrassing. Horrifying. And it was just unthinkable that he had allowed something so vital to slip through his fingers. Hadn't he spent the last 60 years or so getting ready for this? He was too arrogant. He had misjudged Aizen's actual power. He was supposed to take that bastard down today and put an end to everything else. At the last minute, his plans had collapsed, directly before his eyes. Uncertain of what to do with him, the other Shinigami hovered around him anxiously. They were unable to advance due to the heat his cloak was producing, and those who did not want to face his wrath were driven away by the bestial snarls and growls of rage. They viewed him as lethal, illogical, and unbalanced, akin to a raging wild animal. It was over. He would be imprisoned, tortured, and probably subjected to experiments. His mind flickered to the grim picture of the maggot's nest, the Ujimushi no Su, and he shuddered. Naruto hissed, his eyes wide. No, he would have to deal with it once more. Those eyes. Refusal. Fear. Fear. No, 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 no. His captain said softly, without flinching despite being in such close proximity to Naruto. Naruto. Don't worry so much about it. You'll have your chance to go up against him again real soon enough. And when that time comes, you won't be the only one fighting him. It's not over yet. With a hint of sadness in the back of his eyes, he smiled softly. Rest up now. Thanks for your hard work. You've done much more than I could have ever asked of you. At those words, Naruto turned his red, flickering eyes to his captain and fell to the ground, his cloak dissolving, like a marionette with all its strings severed. Without any delay, the relief team took over and began caring for the weary boy. Naruto awoke to a constricted, suffocating sensation. As his vision cleared and he looked beneath the sheets, he saw that his head, palms, and upper arms were all securely encased in pristine bandages, as was his entire chest. Groaning loudly at the pain that had suddenly assaulted him, Naruto immediately made to push himself out of bed and shunpo his way out of his current imprisonment, most probably a cell in the maggot's nest. After seeing what he was capable of, Seirei would not take him lightly, and there would be many guards along the route. Even though the room he was in was not a hospital room like the ones back from Konoha, it still had the same eerie, sterile vibe. The whiteness and cleanliness of everything, including the white walls, white floors, white beds, white cabinets, white curtains, and white hair, were too much for Naruto to handle. But wait, what? Seeing his captain frowning down at him, Naruto blinked, nonplussed, and fervently shook his head. The person seated in front of him said sternly, Naruto, I think you know Hana. Taiko will be after your head if you undid all her hard work by trying to use your Riryoku at the state you're in now. With wide eyes, Naruto said, Oh god, my hallucinations are reprimanding me. I must be in deep shit, aren't I? Yukatake scowled more deeply. Naruto, if you're trying to be funny, I'm not laughing. Your heart had stopped 2 times before you know Hana. Taiko got her wits together, and you fractured bones all over your body, with dislocated joints to boot. Even if you're hypothetically dead, you shouldn't be pushing your luck this far. Naruto interrupted his captain to say, I stand corrected. Yukatake said, Excuse me, without understanding Naruto's meaning. With a moan, Naruto thumped his head back onto his pillows and said, It's not a hallucination. It's the real thing. That makes it 100 times worse. But then, if Taiko is here, then I must not be in much shit as I thought I would have been in. With curiosity, his captain asked, What makes you say that? I thought, for sure, that I would have been thrown into the maggot's nest, or worse, after what I did that day. Naruto was grumbling. Gomen, Taiko, I couldn't control myself. Shinko was screaming for blood, and I was so angry, I allowed him to take control of my senses, and before I knew what was happening, I was on a bloodthirsty rampage. Yukatake cut through Naruto's feeble babble to say, Fortunately for you, the Sutaichu has decided to let that matter slide. Without hesitation, Naruto stopped and turned abruptly to look at his captain in confusion. A faint smile spread across the white-haired man's features. In fact, he wanted you to take up a captain position within our ranks. We have 3 empty spots now, you know. He paused to let the words sink in, continuing as Naruto started spluttering with disbelief. But of course, I turned him down. Kira, Hinamori, and Hisagi have yet to recover fully from their captain's sudden betrayal. Giving them another superior almost immediately will not be healthy for them. Naruto choked weakly, unable to come up with a single, cohesive sentence. Taiko, why? Aizen got away, and I wasn't able to. You held him down long enough for reinforcements to arrive, and displayed yourself to be more than proficient with your Bankai. Yukitake replied quietly. If not for the fact that I need you as my vice captain, I would have relented to Genryusai Sensei's suggestions. Dumbly, Naruto repeated, vice captain? But I don't want. No more buts. At this point, he had to choose between taking on the dreaded role of vice captain or captaining a team with an overly sentimental lieutenant. Yukitake grinned triumphantly at the accomplishment he had at last made after many long years. I suppose you know what's best for you. Dully, Naruto declared, I'm not worthy of that position. If it was Kaien. Naruto interrupted himself in the middle of his sentence and shook his head, attempting to sort out his confused thoughts. I knew that bastard Aizen would come up with something like this one day. I didn't know exactly what, but still, I shouldn't have let him slip through so easily. You underrate yourself. Kaien wouldn't even have lasted that long, considering he didn't have a Bankai, nor was he as particularly prejudiced against Aizen as you were. Yukitake laughed. Speaking of which, as your captain, why didn't I even knew that you had achieved Bankai? And for quite a long time too. Seeing how you managed to wield it efficiently for more than 5 minutes. When did you manage to complete it? Naruto shirked away from his captain as far as he could go. Not very far, with a shrug that bordered on despair. To answer your first question, Taiko, it was because I didn't want to get promoted. To answer the second, well, it was the day you started badgering me to take Kaien's seat. He looked up to observe Yukitake spluttering. When he saw his captain's pale face, he half panicked and screamed, don't you go collapsing on me now. It's all in the past. I'm already in the friggin' seat now. Yukitake moaned as he massaged his temple, so that Ryotsu change that day was because you obtained Bankai, and not Shikai. I feel that I'm a failure of a captain, not even knowing that much. At least Kuchiki. Taiko's in the same boat as me. Naruto looked out the window and absently scratched at the bandages covering his left cheek, saying, hey, yeah, it took that redhead long enough alright. Actually, with all the booms and crashes in the 6th Division backyard, I'd expected Byakuya to figure it out sooner. So how's the rest When I arrived at Tsukyoku Hill, I could still faintly sense everyone's Ryotsu, so I wasn't too worried about them. All I could see was that smug bastard with that pug like smirk on his face. Naruto smiled. Yukitake told his subordinate, who let out a gentle sigh of relief, they're all patched up and just as good as new, as they'd only suffered from external injuries. He returned the gentle smile. Well, it's been a week since all that happened, so that much amount of recovery is to be expected. A week, huh? Naruto repeated in a daze while gazing out. He could make out the distant, faint outline of the Tsukyoku Hill if he squinted. I guessed I really did outdo myself, because normally, it'd only take me 2 days to achieve a full recovery. In fact, the Ryoka are leaving today. I'm going to open a Senkaimon and send them off in a while. Do you want to accompany me? You were interested in that kid, Kurosaki Ichigo, weren't you? Yukitake asked. Naruto gave a headshake. He admitted rather blandly, no, I'd only thought that he'd be useful as a distraction. Let's just say that he and his gang have exceeded my expectations of them. We weren't on good terms from the start, so there's nothing to say to them. With one thin eyebrow raised inquiringly, Yukitake nudged his subordinate. Really nothing at all? I heard from Yoruichi that the last time you two met, you left of really bad terms. Though it did give Kurosaki a motivational boost. Naruto rolled his eyes and said, that was the entire point of it, Taiko. He hesitated a little and stopped in the middle of waving his captain away. After a brief pause, he reluctantly said, but you can tell him that he did better than I'd expected him to. And also, I'll get out of his hair from today onwards. I won't be seeing him ever again. More like, I don't even want to anyway. After nodding, Yukitake said, I'll pass that on, and turned to leave the extremely sterile room. At the doorway, he stopped. Though I do wish you can be more open to people sometimes, Naruto. Not all attachments are painful. Yukitake's nearly expressionless gaze sent shivers down the other's spine. Taiko, since I'm going to be your vice captain from this day onward, let me just tell you this once. My loyalties lie only to you, and to my friends. That's already more than enough for me. I won't let anything else chain me down. Not even the old man. Not even Seirei. Naruto took a breath. Not even the Spirit King himself. The platinum-haired captain was momentarily stunned by that audacious statement, but he eventually realized what his subordinate had said. He didn't think of himself as one of them. Yes, he played along with the notion, but ultimately, Uzumaki Naruto did not consider himself a Shinigami. Naruto, Yukitake finally said, uncertain of how to respond to the young blonde. He did not find it as easy to speak as he usually did. His response to the question, "I had always wondered, what exactly made you so protective over your friends?" was incredibly evasive. In a low, remorseful whisper, Naruto answered, "I abandoned them." Although his face was expressionless, his eyes conveyed his sorrow, and his trembling hands demonstrated his annoyance. Silently, Yukitake departed, leaving his recently appointed vice captain to ponder his own depressing thoughts. For a certain vice captain, October 10th had never been a particularly good day. It was a day of devastation, loss, grief, and retaliation. It was an unfathomably hateful day. It was the day Uzumaki Naruto, the demon fox of Konoha, was born. That bad curse had followed him to the afterlife today. For the last 2 months or so, Seireiti had been in disarray. The effects of Aizen's impending storm were sufficiently noticeable in Soul Society as well as the real world. It had all begun when 2 Arankars appeared. Naruto just looked on indifferently as the day's events took a turn for the worse. Soon after, the bald bastard, his gay partner, Matsumoto, Renji, Toshiro, and his vice captain were sent to the real world to help someone named Kurosaki Ichigo. However, Aizen was unfazed and just sent more Arankars over for both sides to slaughter at will. Naruto was cooped up in his office, sourly trying his hardest to reduce the towers of paperwork on his desk, which had doubled in size because his kind captain had offered to help with the 10th Division's work as well. Toshiro and his small group had a great time exacting their pent-up anger and petty retaliation on Aizen's minions. For working diligently for a whole week, before things in Karakura had subsided, he didn't even receive free ramen. Naruto discovered that the more senior he was, the less time he would have to witness action. After all, since their own captain was too ill to do much work, he had to fill the positions of both lieutenant and captain in the 13th Division as vice captain. For about a month, Naruto watched with some relief, entertainment, even, as his superiors tried to come up with strategies to crush and flatten the rapidly expanding threat that is Aizen. Every time he saw his lieutenant sitting on the rooftops, plainly listening in on the captain's meeting with a smug, "I told you so," smile, Yukitake just sighed. Genryusai Sensei made no comment at all, if he saw the blonde. Since Naruto was the primary proponent of the anti-Aizen theory, Yukitake did assume that he should have every right to be updated. That damned day ruined Naruto's honeymoon month. There was a great wailing and mourning, and he woke up groggily. He recognized the damsel in distress as Rukia, who had learned that Arankars had taken her somewhat best friend Orihime to Hueco Mundo. Rukia was half stumbling around in only his sleepwear, a dull orange jinbei. It seems that the foolish Shinigami substitute and their captain commander had a small argument over the rejected petition, which involved foolishly storming into Hueco Mundo for an emergency Orihime rescue. From the sidelines, Naruto merely listened to his subordinate's heartbreaking tale, idly observing that Ichigo would still carry out his charge through a certain Urahara Kazuki. There was no improvement in the afternoon. To Naruto's immense annoyance, Rukia was still hung over the recent betrayal, and was moping around in his office, occasionally stopping to let out a loud sigh or wipe away a few tears while sniffling. It was clear that she was still deeply offended by being forced to return to Soul Society against her will. With a hint of annoyance in his voice, Naruto finally said, "If you're trying to make me feel bad, Rukia, it's not working really well. This isn't even any of my business anyway. I barely even talked to that girl. So go sulk somewhere else and leave me in peace. You won't be able to achieve anything in here." Rukia groaned heartily. Orihime was such a sweet, kind young lady. I can't bear to imagine what that two-faced traitor would be doing to her at this instant. Don't you feel the least bit shameful that she's in a predicament and you're not even the least bit bothered? After all, didn't you borrow her to carry out your great Soul Society distraction plan? Doesn't this mean that you owe her a great favor, and now would be an opportune time to repay it back? Humorlessly, Naruto returned the smile. Nice try, but no cigar. Too bad for you. I can be a heartless, uncaring bastard when I want to be. Open a Senkaimon for me to pass through. You don't even need to do much, Rukia cried in frustration. You'll even get brownie points for tagging along. Aizen killing. I'm not stupid to take down Aizen in his own territory, baka. Naruto murmured. Much less without any backups from any of the Taicho, and with that clueless log-headed dunce Kurosaki to boot. In case you didn't quite notice, Rukia, that guy has a superhero complex that tends to put everyone in near-death situations. It's suicidal, and I still need my life, thank you very much. Rukia rolled her eyes and said, Ichigo is strong, you don't have to fight with him. Just skirt around him. Oh my poor friend. At the exceptionally slow rate Uzumaki. San's heart is thawing. I'll have to wait till the next decade to see you again. You'll be skin and bones by then, and who knows if you'll even be able to recognize me at all. Enough with your theatrics. You don't have to wait for a decade. Give me another year or so. I'll squash Aizen by then. Naruto grumbled. But don't fret about it too much. It isn't that bad actually. That girl was confirmed to be alive and breathing, so that means that Aizen has certain uses for her. And I'm quite sure that he has enough gentlemanly decency to provide for her own private cell and food. Naruto attempted to console the girl from Kuchiki. To Naruto's confusion, Rukia sobbed more intensely at those words, burying her face in her hands, and ran outside screaming about heartless commanders without even the slightest sense of shame or masculine pride. As soon as Rukia's Ryotsu started to wane, Naruto dismissed it and went to try her luck in what was likely the 6th division. When dusk finally arrived, the ominous constriction in his chest became more intense, at the same moment that the ground's shadows lengthened and shrouded Soul Society in a murky gloom. Like all Shinigami, Naruto was restless, and he had now resorted to stalking the deserted hallways of the barracks of the 13th division, his back stiff, Shinko at his side, and his eyes piercing the moonlight. It didn't take him long to stumble upon his nighttime target. Naruto abruptly said, I guess there's no stopping you too, huh? From the shadows, shocking the two Shinigami. I won't tell on you, but make sure to come back safely in one piece. I don't want an angry Byakuya after my head. Lieutenant Abarai Renji of the 6th division approached the blonde half, mockingly and said, Hey. I'd never thought that you'd willingly give up on the chance for a direct confrontation with Aizen, Uzumaki. I'll take him down when I see fit, and now's just not the right time. It'll be a waste of effort and it's too troublesome. Naruto responded with coolness. Your current aim for this trip is simply to get Orihime Inoue out of Aizen's clutches, nothing more, nothing less. Don't get all high and mighty and start taking on Aizen yourself. You should tell that to Strawberry Boy as well. Renji sneered back, you talk big for someone who's not even coming along. You're not our captain, you can't boss me Aru. Ouch. As Rukia punched him shut, Renji screamed in momentary agony. The Kuchiki girl's face instantly changed from a menacing glare to an apologetic frown as she turned to face Naruto. We'll return safely, Fukutaichu. I'll leave you to handle things here with Ni, Sama and Yukitaki. Taiko. While Renji opened a Senkaimon with practiced ease, Naruto silently stepped up and gave Rukia a quick but firm embrace. Rukia gave him a comforting pat on the back in return. Rukia turned to join an impatient Renji and said, I won't do anything foolish. I'll give you my word, Fukutaichu. Her eyes were bright with resolve. With abrupt head nods, Naruto observed the other two Shinigami dash into the gate with no hesitation at all, fully determined to pursue Ichigo and his group through Urahara. Naruto whispered to the vanishing portal, good luck, you're going to need it. Ichigo's eyes acclimatized to the sudden brightness of the light, and his brow furrowed. His vision swiftly cleared to reveal a simple, inflexible room with just 5 doors, not counting the exit from which they had come. This was going to be a pain in the ass, that much was clear. From next to him, Ishida spoke out loud what he was thinking. This is troublesome. I guess we'll have no choice but to start on one end and make your way through. Calmly, Rukia said, not quite. She crossed her arms and met his gaze as if to challenge him to disagree with her suggestion. The 5 of us will simply have to pick a path each. That's the most logical route we should be taking if we want to rescue Orihime as quickly as possible. Ichigo, however, found himself objecting quickly enough. Are you crazy? We're going up against the Espada here. The most obvious route would be to stick with each other. They wouldn't come at us one for one. If we all go alone, then. Enough. Renji interrupted him sharply. Everyone in the party could see what Ichigo had meant to say. Renji held Ichigo tightly by the front of his robes and said, if we all go alone, some of us might not be able to survive through the very end. Ichigo, worrying about a warrior's life on the battlefield is only an insult. Rukia decided to go into further detail about her childhood friend's direct statement. She fixed her violet eyes on his hesitant face and said, there's no doubt that you're worried about me, to suggest that we should be moving together. That's not like you, Ichigo. She hardened her voice and glared more intensely, saying, you shouldn't be wasting your care on me, just as I've told you this before. I didn't come here to be protected by you. Her audacious declaration echoed loudly throughout the confined space, and everyone could clearly hear the strength of her determination and declaration. However, Ichigo continued to appear to be engaged in an internal conflict between her demand for independence and his own strong morals. Clapping broke the silence of his silent war. With tension high, everyone in the group searched for the source, but all they could see was the vast expanse of the surrounding walls. There was a male voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere in the room. The girl is right. You won't achieve anything with that half-assed resolution of yours, Kurosaki Ichigo. Rukia and Ichigo both recognized something in his words. One that was brought up to them by a certain blonde lieutenant. Ichigo tightened his jaw. Fine resolution you have if all you can do is hide in the shadows. Why don't you show us your cowardly hide first, before judging if my worth is half-assed or not? There was a round of amused laughter in response to his statement. The voice that came through this time was unmistakably female. Heated guy, aren't you? Well, why don't you all look up instead of turning your heads around like an idiot? Her words caused everyone's heads to quickly snap up toward the ceiling. Two Arankars, a male and a female, were seated in the middle of the long ceiling, their feet affixed to the ceiling as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The only strikingly obvious difference between them and the other Arankars Ichigo had previously encountered was that, in contrast to their usual counterparts, they wore the basic monochrome robes of Aizen's White Army. Their outfits were primarily dyed inky jet black with white trimmings at the hems. Both of their hollow masks, though distinct from one another, had concealed the upper portion of their faces from view, and none of their numbers were visible on the skin that their clothing did not cover. With a hint of mockery in her voice, the woman said, "A pleasure to finally meet the human who has intrigued Aizen-sama during his long stay at Soul Society." At the same time, the Arankars were not there. Their presence in the room was so muted that it was difficult to tell them apart from humans, and they did not exhibit any ryotsu. Observing the tense shapes of those beneath her, the female Arankar raised her hands to appease them. "Don't worry, we have no intention of getting into a fight with you. We do not have any orders from Aizen-sama to eliminate you, yet." None of them felt reassured by those words. Ichigo continued to hold onto Zangetsu's hilt. Rukia said sharply, "Then why have you come to make contact with us? You are obviously on Aizen's side of the fence." The man Arankar said, "No reason in particular." In contrast to his companion's sandy blonde hair, his spiky hair was as black as the robes he wore. "We just wanted to gauge with our own eyes how much of an adversary you all are going to be to us. Nothing more, nothing less." Ishida gave them a narrowed glare. "By us, you mean?" Nell interrupted from behind, swallowing hard. "Domination. Why? Aizen. Fathomatudant hath managed to complete you." The male Arankar stated bluntly, "Fortunately for him, Aizen-sama has managed to find himself a supply source in the living world. Unluckily for you, you'll have us domination to deal with. But as we stated earlier, we won't interfere with your business in Las Noches unless orders are received." Arankar, the female, inclined her head sideways. Her lips tightened into a tight smile as she said, "On a side note, we've never met, but welcome back to Las Noches, Dondachaka, Pesci, and Neliel. Aizen-sama has been eagerly awaiting your return. And your courteous visit as well, Ichigo and friends." Ichigo deadpanned, "I'm sure we all feel extremely welcomed at the moment. So Aizen knows of our arrival. Big deal. Well, I have one message to give to him. Tell him to wash his neck, and wait for my blade to cleave it into half." The male domination turned around dismissively and said, "Tell that to him yourself. If you can even do so, that is. We are not going to make any contact with him unless necessary." His fellow domination followed suit. "We won't keep you from sidetracking any longer. Aizen-sama is aware of your presence here. It would be best if you all get moving to quickly achieve your motives." Rukia made the astute observation, "You sound as though you dislike serving Aizen. In fact, you sound like you're interested in helping us defeat him." They both stopped stiffly in their tracks, looking at one another as if they were silently deciding whether or not to respond to Rukia's statement. At last, the woman slowly turned to look at Rukia. She said enigmatically, her smile turning into a grimace. Who knows?" she asked. "Either way, one thing is clear. You're too presumptuous to assume that we will help you in this foolish game of cat and mouse you're playing with Aizen-sama. Know your worth in this place, Shinigami. Especially in this palace of eternal darkness that is Las Noches. You're only dancing like marionettes in the palm of his hands, inevitably playing to the tune of his music." They started to walk away again, but Ichigo yelled at them. "Wait, isn't it unfair that you know almost all our names, and we don't get to know yours? I see no need to give out my name to someone who is not going to be my opponent. For now, just the name Domination would suffice for identification." The man replied quietly. "Sayonara. Let's hope that we shall never meet ever again." There was no ryotsu burst, no gushing wind, no pattering of feet. A quick glance was all that was required for the two people's presence to vanish from the room. Even so, they could all clearly hear the faint but unsettling echo of the Arankar's voices. If we ever do meet again, it'll be on the battlefield, when we'll have to cut you down without mercy. The Espadas were aware that their existence was now at stake and that their value was being assessed. Aizen Sosuke, the man who created them, was the only one threatening their lives. Survival of the fittest had always been the rule in Hueco Mundo, and Las Noches in particular. And by far the elite of the elite were the Espadas of today. Whether they were Arankars like themselves or simple hollows, they had defeated all of their kind. However, it was insufficient. They weren't on the same level as the new predators that Aizen had just introduced. The gloomy expressions on everyone's faces and the tightly pursed lips of everyone in the current meeting were not surprising. With dull interest, Grimjow observed that even the frown on the current Primera, Coyote Stark, was more sullen than usual. Grimjow was now enthralled with the hologram that was projecting that human brat. Its name was Kurosaki Ichigo, as well as a couple of his other human friends racing blindly through the deserted hallways of Hueco Mundo. He scowled. For the benefit of a mere mortal, all this courage and effort is required. Complete stupidity. He was startled out of his gloomy reverie when the boss man walked in, his face as composed as it had been the day before. Grimjow pondered whether the smug smile on that man's face was a permanent feature. As he sat at the head of the table, Aizen said, "Oh, if I'd known otherwise, I thought that all of you seemed to be in low spirits today. Do you all really feel that threatened with the invasion of a few foolish people? Some of them mere mortals, no less." The Segunda, Baragan, growled, "Let's get right to the point, Aizen. Do you finally see the need for us to intercept them? They have already taken down most of the useless Priver and Espada. It would not be long before they breach this place. The Palace of the Espadas." Aizen's smirk widened even more at that question and the irritation that accompanied the next statements. "You all know me so well. Well then, please do so. Ants should be taught to know their place. I am bored of watching them scuttling about blindly." Aizen glanced at the Quattro. "On a side note, Ulquiorra, bring that human girl to me later. There is something I wish to speak to her about." The aforementioned Espada lowered his head in agreement. "Understood. I will see to it that she is prepared for the meeting." "Very well." With a sigh, Aizen waved his hand dismissively, signaling them to go. "Then this meeting is adjourned." There was silence as the Espadas shifted uneasily in their chairs, not even trying to get to their feet. With a mental sigh, Grimjow settled back in his chair and settled into the contentious discussion that was about to begin. Aizen sat waiting, grinning, watching his cherished creations struggle to resist his choices. Neutra finally hissed, assuming the role of the one who ignited the flame, "I don't like this. Aizen. Sama, we have eyes. We know what's going on in that head of yours. So I don't get this. Why did you choose us for this task? Why don't you ask them?" Aizen closed his eyes and said, them. Let's just say for now that they are too unstable, volatile, and much too unforgiving to be dispatched to deal with insignificant bugs. That's all there is to it. Is there anything you'd like to say, Neutra?" Aizen fixed the Quinto with a chuckle. At the moment, however, the perilous gleam behind it was anything but forgiving. Aizen looked around the room sternly. "Are you challenging my orders, my dearest Espadas? Are you so presumptuous to assume that you can read through my thoughts? Don't forget your loyalties lie. And what happens if you choose to break them?" His words were met with a thick silence. Neutra crossed his arms in defiance and looked away right away, but he remained silent. They were all aware that Aizen had lost his erratic interest in them. They were no longer his army or his tools. They were just his play. Tools as they were. Toys with which to engross himself. Haribel calmly said, "Our loyalties lie with you alone, Aizen. Sama." The Tres Espada's voice cut through the quiet with ease. "We will eliminate these hindrances immediately, as you have ordered." Aizen got up and left the room after saying, "I'll be expecting the good news from you soon." As he spoke, he stopped at the doorway, not even bothering to look back at the doors. "You all should be well aware of what happens should you fail in this menial task." All Espadas were startled into action as the doors snapped shut behind him. Some, if not all of them, just got up and stalked out of the room, each intent on proving their value to Aizen while lost in their own ponderous thoughts. The blades of Aizen's new tools, the Seven Domination, the Unbridled, the Powerful, would end their own lives if they didn't. They were anything but berserk and in control when they were under his orders, Aizen had said, making fun of them. Grimjow was well served by these new players. In Hueco Mundo, dominance and selfishness were the norm. The chessboards wouldn't change much if new queens were added. He would simply need to outperform them all. And then usurp his throne from a fool. On the evening of October 10th, Yamamoto Genryusai, the Soteochao of Seirei, was interrupted in the middle of his paperwork by none other than Uzumaki Naruto, the agitated lieutenant of the 13th Division. That was unexpected in and of itself because the boy had previously broken into his office in the middle of the night after learning of Kaion's passing while returning from his mission. Something inside the boy had been triggered by the death of his older brother figure, forcing him to project a more mature and composed appearance. It was extremely uncommon to witness him lose his cool and enter his frenzied state. Yama. Gigi, Gia, Giraffe, you, Scram. I need to speak to the old man. He was expressing more about the other person's distress by returning to his previous moniker. By the way, the blonde had started yelling for attention once more. Yama. Gigi. Hey, call these bozos off. I need to speak to you about something really important here. Look, Yukitaki. Taiko's with me. I won't break anything, I promise. Yama. Gigi. He let out a sigh to his guards, who were fighting to keep the blonde from coming in and upsetting him. Experience had taught him that ignoring the boy was pointless, so he said, let him in. When he is in that mood, the headache you will get from ignoring him will be worse than the headache you would get from amusing him. In any case, the Sotaichu were in for a long night. With wide eyes and a constant chatter, the cause of the migraine hurried in. Yukitaki Jushiro, a former cherished pupil, trailed behind, grinning pityingly at his subordinate's actions. Yama. Gigi. Listen to this. You won't believe what that ugly fag Kuretsuchi managed to dig up. The newly branded, ugly fag, yelled, excuse me, as the captain strode into the office with little opposition. When Yamamoto looked more closely, he saw that his security had been rendered unconscious on the ground. On several parts of their bodies, suspicious and not .so. Hidden syringes were protruding. He began to rub his temples. Kuretsuchi went on, completely unaware of the predicament facing the Sotaichu. Is that what thanks I get when I helped you with all your stalking? The other's melodrama made Naruto roll his eyes, but he decided to concentrate on the captain commander instead. Ignore that barmy person beside me. Anyway, I need permission to enter Soul Society and defeat one Aizen Sosuke, as well as retrieving 2 Shinigami, 1 Shinigami substitute, and a handful of mortals. The Uzumaki looked at him intently. I need clearance as soon as possible. I need to leave for Hueco Mundo immediately. Without giving it any thought, Yamamoto said, denied. The other was about to object, so he went ahead. For a couple of reasons. Those groups of misfits know exactly what they are getting into when they stepped foot into the Dongai. I am prepared to never see them again. You on the other hand, are not allowed to be missed, since right now you're one of our trump cards against our fight with Aizen. Aizen might launch an attack on the human world at any moment, and without you at our core to fight. I know, Naruto interrupted him with a shout. I know all of that, but first, you gotta know. Aizen has been playing around with something dangerous, and I need to go over there and stop him before it gets any worse. For both himself and us. Each and every second we spend ignoring him, waiting for him to make the first move, would be a crucial mistake for everyone. Kuretsuchi flashed his teeth and grinned broadly, saying, why don't I show you what Uzumaki has meant? His fingers snapped. Yamamoto had to congratulate himself for not passing out in shock when his left wall exploded. Bring in the monitors. A large screen television that was bed-sized wide and ceiling tall was wheeled in through the crumbles. The 1st Division's residential estate had gone black as a result of plugging it into a nearby electrical source. As the lights went out and the heaters died to make way for a stream of freezing cold water, distant screams and curses could be heard. As he watched the events on the screen, the Sotecho swore in his mind, Kuretsuchi Mayuri, you will die a very horrible death. It showed a live feed of a person sprinting through a large, gray hallway. It's almost like. Yukitaki looked at the screen and said out loud, Naruto, are you stalking someone? It seems that the white-haired captain was also unaware of the news. Specifically, are you stalking Kuchiki Rukia? Angry, Naruto snarled, no, Kami. Why does everyone think so? Okay, so maybe I bugged her when she left for Hueco Mundo earlier today. Who cares? It's for mental safety and reassurance purposes. Everyone bugs each other. I'd bet Byakuya places bugs on her daily. All 3 of the captains appeared to be thinking the same things, but none of them dared to speak out. Naruto tinkered with the remote control, putting it in playback mode and navigating the video to locate the desired clip. Anyway, what Kuretsuchi and I had discovered when we looked through the happenings were these. Domination. Aizen's new army. At that point, Kuretsuchi made the decision to lead the explanations. A clip of 2 black-clad Arankars sitting on the ceilings had now caused the screen to pause. There are in all sense Arankars in any shape and form. However, their souls have been forcibly halted from entering Soul Society. Aizen has personally handpicked a number of mortals, snatched their souls upon their immediate death, and by tweaking their memories to constantly expose the more horrible ones, changed them into hollows. Yukatake interrupted, and let me guess. He bred them into Vasto Lord and turned the successful ones into Arankars upon their instant evolution. There are in all sense, thoroughly bred, pedigree Arankars, loyal only to the ones who'd fed them, and raised them from day one. Aizen. With a smile, Kuretsuchi said, correct. You catch on to things quickly, Yukatake Taiko. Sadly, the same thing cannot be said for your lieutenant. He only had enough brain cells left to perform a goldfish imitation when I had finished my first explanation. It appeared that the animosity between the two was reciprocal. The domination had been a new addition to Aizen's army. They had only been allowed into his Arankar ranks a month ago. Not to mention that he still has his collection of espadas, as well as their own Fraxium. The war to be fought will be a tough one indeed. But one thing I don't get, is why? Why did Aizen choose to wait, to patiently cultivate them into perfect Arankars now? He could have done this experiment ages back. Yukatake thought about it. Find a potential human soul, convert it, and the domination could have been his leading force of today. Surprisingly, Naruto was the one who spoke up, because he didn't manage to find it. He didn't manage to find a source of humans that all have a large cradle of Ryotsu within them. When given to a hollow of Vasto Lord quality, the results will be terrifying. As everyone in the room processed the terrifying information Naruto had given them, silence fell. In a low voice, Naruto went on steadily. The domination was created for the sole purpose of defeating me alone. He knows that if I'd had to fight him one, I'd win if I could pull it into a battle of endurance. Perhaps a single domination may not be able to tire me out completely, but if he sends a group of them at a single time. Naruto didn't have to complete his statement. All of the captains were too aware of what was going to occur. If Naruto couldn't survive them, then none of them would. How did he even manage to find a source of humans with high Ryotsu power? Did he choose to harvest the souls of dead priests or something? Yukate said aloud. Naruto scoffed and said, PFF'd, as if. He wouldn't have much bad trigger memories on priests to turn them into hollows. Besides, priests make bad combatants. Anyway, I'll have to go to Las Noches to deal with this problem immediately. I can use Ichigo's group's confusion to take out one or two of them. Yukatake laughed and shook his head, muttering, again. When will you learn that nothing good is ever going to come out of using Kurosaki-kun as a distraction, Naruto? Hey, the story about the boy who called Wolf, remember? Aizen won't think that I'll be stupid enough to risk the same trick twice. Naruto was furious. His eyes turned to the Sotaichu in desperation. So how about it, old man? I'll just sneak in there, reduce the numbers, and then come back with the brats. Quick, painless, and efficient. At last, Yamamoto said, you have 24 hours. 24 hours to hunt those domination down, and return regardless of your success. The safety of the other brats will take second priority. They have the numbers to look after themselves. Am I understood, Uzumaki Naruto? Surprisingly, Naruto's smile was one of guilt and resolution rather than excitement as he saluted. Crystal. As the teenager started to walk away, Yukatake abruptly spoke up. Naruto, you have an ulterior motive for going, don't you? Regarding those domination in particular? Naruto stopped in his tracks to consider his response to his captain's question, but he did not turn back to face him. After a brief pause, he finally said, because at long last, I've finally found them. As Naruto sped through the Dongai, his heart was pounding loudly inside his rib cage and his veins were rushing with adrenaline. He still had to run for another minute or so to get to Hueco Mundo, the empty abyss. Furthermore, he still had a long way to go before he could reunite with Kurosaki Ichigo and his rescue crew. However, that was not the cause of Naruto's jitters at the time. If Ichigo's group of mortals could withstand resisting against the entire cohort of Not.So sane Shinigami captains, Naruto didn't see why they couldn't stand up against a few more insane hollows. Sure, the Arankars Aizen had in his arsenal might be powerful. No, the domination, Aizen's new pets, were the source of his stress. Naruto was prepared to wager that Aizen had at least 5 of them on hand, and that they had all been hypnotized to show unwavering devotion to the man. It didn't help that they were also incredibly intelligent and strong. As he accelerated, Naruto clenched his jaw. The truth is that the idea of killing Aizen on this trip, once and for all, made him irate and impatient. This time, fairness was damned. It was tooth for tooth and eye for eye. If Aizen decided to be dishonest, Naruto would follow suit. The odds, however, were not in Naruto's favor at the moment. Naruto was aware that the crafty bastard had some kind of power against the domination, regardless of what the insane scientist Miyuri claimed about innate loyalty. They knew they were being used, so it was clear they didn't like the man. Naruto found it painful to realize that no one, not even himself, could stop it. Yatsutora Sato was engaged in the most difficult battle of his life. To date, he had only learned two things. The first was that entities of higher authority had usurped Las Noches. Was this the domination? And the second was that the current Espadas were feeling tippy and itchy to prove their value to Aizen due to the abrupt transfer of power. That much was evident when, 5 minutes into the battle, Noitora Gilga, the Quinto Espada, slaughtered his fellow brethren due to his impatience. Gantenbane Mosqueda, the 107th Arrancar, had fought hard. However, it was evident that Chad had the upper hand in terms of sheer strength and agility. Even though they both knew that the former had little to no chance of winning, they still gave it their all. Chad wanted to end their fight with the respect it deserved because he could admire that brave side of his opponent. When the onlooker Noitora decided he could stand no more and cleave the heavy, built Priverin neatly in two, that particular thought had been crushed flat. At the moment, Chad was battling for his life against a tall, brawny Espada who had no intention of holding back. The other was unlike any opponent Chad had ever faced. He wasn't enjoying the fight, but he was determined and totally focused on it. Noitora's eyes had a crazy gleam in them, and his brows were knitted in concentration, as if. After a string of quick blows, they separated, and Chad questioned, "Who's forcing you to fight?" The Quinto hissed, "None of our business. Don't talk to me like you care, human filth." He guessed, "It's Aizen." He realized his guess was right when he saw the other clenching his teeth in anger and frustration. Chad concluded that he could take the chance of trying to find out information again. "And the reason you're panicking now is because of them. Those domination." Noitora yelled, "Don't say that name in front of my face," quite loudly. In a sudden fit of annoyance, he lowered his blade and slashed against the air. With a hint of madness buried deep within them, he was also panting heavily, his one exposed eye shining eerily in the room's darkness. With a salvage war cry, Noitora charged at Chad, shifting his excessively large scythe so that it would be easy to cut a raging bull in two. Chad ducked just in time to let a stream of sunlight in as the other's blade sank into the opposite wall, blowing it up into tiny pieces of rubble. Given that it had sent even the Quinto Espada into such a frenzied attempt to prove their value to their creator, the situation must have been worse than he had anticipated. He asked out loud, "These domination, just how strong are they?" In response, Noitora sneered, "They're worth nothing." Without missing a beat, the Quinto slashed haphazardly at Chad and then quickly released a Acero from his tongue. "I don't see what Aizen Sama sees in him, but they aren't worthy of his attention, much less praise. You, however, ain't even worthy of mine." The human would not have been able to avoid both of the quickly executed attacks. Chad was hurled into the white sands that encircle Las Noches after being blown through the walls of Tres Cifras. Ignoring his muscles' protests, Chad picked himself painfully off the uneven ground while coughing up blood and dirt. For another La Muerte on the Quinto Espada, he unsteadily propped himself on one knee and directed Ryotsu into his left arm, his brazo izquierda del diablo. Before he could blink, a huge crescent blade was hovering against his neck, preventing him from even letting go. All Chad could see when he looked up was Noitora Gilga's ear. Splitting smile, with his ridiculously long tongue already out and about to fire another of his distinctive golden yellow Acero. Noitora sneered and bared his teeth at the other, saying, "It's too late for regrets now, brat. Serves you right to try and take on more than you're worth. Trash like you should know your place and keep to it quietly. Maybe you would have lasted longer that way." Before he realized it, it was over. In this battle, Chad was outmatched in every way, including strength, speed, and sheer power. It would be pointless for him to try to dodge and evade. He lacked the agility and speed to do so. As a result, he did the only thing he could do in this situation. He winced and prepared for the shock and agony that would soon strike him, but it never did. Chad opened his eyes just in time to see a black Acero fly in between him and the Quinto with an inkjet. This caused the Quinto to lose his balance, backpedal a few steps, and misfire his own Acero. Clouds of dust and debris were thrown up as the golden Acero struck one of the nearby cylindrical pillars, causing it to topple and smash heavily to the ground. Noitora's eyes narrowed as she felt for any nearby spiritual presences and looked around for the cause of the disturbance. There weren't any, but Noitoria's eyes snapped to the slender figure standing motionless atop one of the taller pillars. Noitora was easily identified by the other's billowing black robes. His eyes went wide with surprise. "You." Impassively, the silhouetted figure said, "Noitora Gilga. Your time of repentance has ran out. Now, you only have punishment left to face." Araniero Ururueri, the Noveno Espada, was yelling in excruciating pain and agony back on the outskirts of Las Noches. Rukia was lying on the ground next to it, barely paying attention to what the other person was saying. It was something like, Aizen. Sama, help me, she remarked dimly. As she carefully lifted herself off the cold, hard floor, she grunted with conscious effort and used her Zanpakuto, Soda no Shirayuki, to freeze the open wounds on her body, numbing them and halting the heavy bleeding. Rukia sneered at herself as she leaned heavily on the closest wall to keep herself upright, saying, TCH. How pathetic. To think that I wind up in this state only after facing the 9th Espada. Her entire body was in excruciating pain, but she couldn't let herself go into unconsciousness just yet. Rukia had to force herself to continue until her mission was accomplished because Orihime was still imprisoned in some godforsaken room in this enormous palace, and the other was in safe hands. Determined, she began to move slowly in small steps in the direction of the exit, where sunlight was mercilessly streaming in and calling for her to come. Then, with an unsteady jerk, she stopped moving as she heard movement behind her. It's impossible. I felt absolutely no presence. You. Araniero's thoughts were interrupted when one of his heads screamed in relief upon recognizing the newcomer. Aizen. Sama must have sent you over. Kill that brat and save us. Hurry. Stop the pain. It's quick, high-pitched tirade was interrupted when their presumed savior stabbed it in the middle with his blade, instantly putting an end to all noise in the pitch-black, deserted rooms. With the death of its other life partner, the other head gasped for air and choked out, Why, aren't you on our side? The Arankars? The newcomer responded with ease, I only take orders from Aizen. Sama alone. And his orders this time are indisputable. Araniero Ururueri, your time of repentance has ran out, and your punishment is henceforth absolute death. Uryu Ishida and Aburai Renji didn't like each other. There was some inaccuracy in that statement alone. Pleased was only a mild description of the circumstances. Ishida was furious that, in order to save his own skin, he had to be paired with a thick-skulled lieutenant who was incapable of performing a proper Hido. Ever since the battle began, the pencil-shaped Quincy had been bossing Renji around like a giant tree branch was shoved up his ass, and Renji was equally indignant about it. The situation wasn't made any better by the two annoyances, Peshi Guadiche and Dondachaka Burstan, either. Renji hadn't bothered to listen to the other's self-evaluative explanation, and it was only a one-time thing anyway, just when things were finally turning around in the Shinigami's favor because of the strange, Sprenger thing that the Quincy had managed to pull off. Their joy was short-lived, for the Espada's whole was devoured by the monster, allowing the former to fully recover. Renji and Ishida were on the verge of abandoning this whole mess, but the Octava Espada was desperate for retribution, or, in this case, test subjects. As a result, the pink-haired Urankar's Resurrección, Fornicars was directed at the two of them. Both of them didn't find it particularly exciting or lovely to watch, and they weren't exactly winning from it either. At the moment, they were both unsuccessfully avoiding attacks from their Zale's Resurrección created clones. No matter how many they had defeated, the Espada would just summon 5 more to replace the one they had taken out. Both of them were rapidly becoming exhausted. As the pink-haired scientist began to laugh hysterically at their expense, Renji became enraged and watched languidly in amusement as the 4 of them engaged in combat with their duplicates. Renji would be happy to give the game to that damn scientist if that's how he wants to play it. Noting dutifully that the rest of his clones also raised their swords, he did so. Hey, wait, Aburai.kun. Do you know what you're doing? Renji let his repressed rage out by channeling it into Ryatsu and passing it through his blade, ignoring Ishida's stuttering protests. Bankai. Hihio Zabumeru. Half a dozen explosions that resembled his own erupted all around the building, shattering the dome-shaped ceiling and launching rocks and concrete fragments into the air. Soon after, his unsealed Zanpakuto's large form made it easy to explode out of the rubble pile. Renji turned to face the noise, which was Ishida's grunting as he attempted to push away rocks that were only a few centimeters away from burying the stick-thin teen alive. All. 2. Cheerfully, Renji exclaimed, Yo, I'm still alive, and looked down with delight to see the Quincy's typically primly laundered robes turned black and battered with grime. With a hint of pride at discovering a loophole in handling those annoying clones, he asked, So then, how is my intellect? Ishida snapped back angrily, I failed to see any, as he dusted himself off, his glasses gleaming reflectively in the open sunlight. No matter what you say, you're just as moronic as Ichigo. Renji scowled and turned away in mock disgust, saying, Shay, now that you've mentioned Ichigo's name, I can't take anything that you've mentioned about me as praise. Ishida became furious at the other's lack of intelligence and exclaimed, that's because I was putting you down in the first place. Renji quickly became sober as he considered the circumstances. Anyway, those two idiots Pesci and Dondachaka should be alright. They're fairly strong after all. The only problem we have on hand now is Zale. It seems like he's finally gotten serious, and he's approaching us fast. The Octava Espada made his spectacular appearance from the ruins in the shape of a huge ball, and before Ishida could respond, he and Renji were backpedaling a few meters behind. As he unfurled his wings, which had been shielding him from falling debris just moments before, Zale remarked absently, it looks like you've damaged Las Noches. And quite badly too, if I must say so myself. He looked at the fallen ruin all around him. The person who has to report this to Aizen Sama isn't going to be too happy about it. He laughed. That shouldn't have to be me, I hope. He let out a sigh and threw away the clones that had somehow survived the blast. Zale began to explain, observing the astonished expressions on the faces of his two opponents. As if he were going to divulge a big secret, Zale leaned forward with excitement and smiled maniacally. The fight up until now was just plain boring. Like hell I'd let it continue as it is. Why don't I show it to you myself? The true power of Fornicaras. Everyone in the clearing, including Zale, was startled when a bored voice abruptly drew out, you could. If you had a little more time, that is. Two figures in black appeared in the sky, positioned just behind the Octava Espada. Zale took a cautious step back. He was completely unaware of their presence and was only informed of their arrival after they had made their presence known. How long have they stood there, exactly? The first figure continued his sentence in the same monotonous, bored voice, oblivious to Zale's bewildered and confused expression. Unfortunately, time is something which you no longer have the luxury of possessing. The other figure said clearly, Zale Aporo grants. Your time of repentance is up. As per Aizen Sama's orders, we are to eliminate you immediately. Kurosaki Ichigo, the Shinigami substitute, gasped as he carefully lowered Grimmjow's vanquished form to the ground, deliberating whether or not to let Inoue tend to his opponent's severe injuries. He had no justification at all because the other had harmed Ichigo's allies too many times and had not expressed regret when they had faced off in combat. Ichigo, however, was a little guilty about abandoning his opponent to bleed himself to death on the ground. Ichigo didn't have to decide on his own, it turns out. He spun around and used Zanjetsu's black blade to block the sharp, clawed fingernails that were only centimeters away from slashing at his body. Grimmjow Jägerjacques didn't even bat an eyelid when he used his bare hands to block the Sexta Espada, a full-fledged Zanpakuto, from countering him. He focused only on his opponent in front of him because he knew that his hierro was thick enough to prevent him from stealing blood. Grimmjow gave those eyes, which were glaring back at him, his fiercest glare. Those eyes were filled with self-centered pride and sympathy. They were the eyes that told him to quit because he wasn't good enough. The fact that his Resurrection had abandoned him didn't concern him. The fact that the blasted Shinigami's Ryotsu explosions had left his entire torso covered in third-degree burns was irrelevant. Furthermore, his hatred for the person in front of him would not be affected by the fact that he was barely able to stand and was perilously close to passing out. Ichigo said, Grimmjow, with a hint of mockery, pity, suppressed his voice after realizing that the Espada lacked the resources to continue the fight. The blue-haired Espada was extremely annoyed by whatever it was. How dare that fool feel sorry for him, the unbeaten, the one who was meant to win this battle. Like I'd lose. Grimmjow growled angrily, his chest heaving with every gasped breath. Furiously, Grimmjow roared, There's no way. There's no way I'd lose to someone like you. He was determined to tear the other limb from limb as he charged Ichigo. Ichigo had positioned himself defensively, preparing for the blow. Grimmjow laughed. The teenager had not bothered to take this attack seriously, and it was going to be his own fault. Regardless of what Aizen Sama said, Grimmjow was going to beat the other to pieces and then do the same thing with the other's girlfriend in the back. But before Grimmjow had even approached the human Shinigami, a jet of jet black Sero pierced his right thigh, immobilizing him and causing him to stop in his tracks while spitting blood. He fell to the ground, furiously yelling obscenities at his new injury. As he scanned his surroundings for the source from which the Sero had emerged, Ichigo was equally as taken aback by the unexpected hostile attack from a third party. He didn't have to spend much time looking around. Before he realized what was happening, a figure in black had reappeared in front of the Sexta's prone body, his sword outstretched, poised to strike his opponent one last time. Wait! What the hell do you think you're doing? Ichigo yelled angrily, his eyes wide as he took in the abrupt change in circumstances. His timing couldn't have been better. A second later, Grimjow's exposed throat would have been cleanly and completely pierced by the other's blade. The sword was, as it was, motionless, millimeters from severing flesh. Ichigo was in the line of sight of the black figure. Because of the hollow mask that obscured the top portion of his face, he was unable to see the other's expression clearly, but his reading left him completely perplexed as to how the other was feeling. Despite the newcomer's casual demeanor, Ichigo could tell by the tightened jaw that the other person disliked what he was doing as much as Ichigo did. The figure dressed in black said scathingly, "Nothing much. I'm just finishing up what you failed to do, Kurosaki Ichigo. Don't take it personally. I'm just following Aizen-sama's orders." "Why? You lie." The newcomer looked curiously at the shattered form at Ichigo's feet, diverting his focus from him. A fanged grin twisted up the corner of his lips. "Oh, and what makes you say that, Grimjow Jägerjackass?" Grimjow returned the scowl to the black figure that loomed over him. "Aizen-sama would never have a Espada killed by reckless monsters like you." Sneering in contempt, the other slid in. "Aizen-sama has been growing displeased at your performance as of late. It didn't surprise me one bit when the orders came in." Ichigo blasted into the subject, saying, "It doesn't matter if Aizen ordered you or not. Remove yourself from Grimjow this instant, domination." In exchange for his meddling, he got 2 glares, but he just gave them back. Ignorant of his current predicament, Grimjow spat wildly onto the ground, saying, "Like I said earlier, I don't need yourself. Loathing pity, Ichigo." His actions were so intense that the sword held at his throat did not falter in the slightest. The domination became enraged and said, "I don't care how you managed to hear that name, but don't butt into our affairs like you own this place, Shinigami. Besides, you should be thanking me for cleaning up the mess you made after your sorry fight with this loser here." Ichigo proceeded to reason with the domination in front of him, disregarding Grimjow's outraged protests. Given that this one appeared more compassionate, or at the very least, less prone to rage, than the other two he had previously encountered, he was placing a wager that negotiations might be feasible. Grimjow is already unable to continue battle. It wouldn't serve any of us any good to carry on what we're doing. The domination said, naive. Then, as if he realized Ichigo was attempting to haggle with him for the Espada's life, he smiled. "What you are doing and what I am doing are two completely different matters altogether. You are simply eliminating any obstacles that stand in your way. Your objective has been accomplished the moment Grimjow is unable to continue battle. On the other hand, my objective is to fulfill Aizen-sama's orders to the best of my ability. And this time, his orders are absolute." He paused, then spoke louder and more authoritatively. He steadied his sword, raised it, and lowered it quickly, intending to cleave the Sexta's throat in two. "Grimjow Jägerjackass, your time of repentance is up. As per Aizen-sama's orders, you will be obviated immediately." His footing shook with the powerful Ryotsu that was suddenly exploding through the ground, causing tiny tremors from below, and he paused a second time. When he saw who had done it, the domination looked up and suppressed a sigh. Ichigo gritted his teeth and said, "Not if I can help it." He refused to see his opponent perish for a pitiful reason like assassination. With an outstretched sword, he challenged the domination to engage him. Realizing the value of the challenge, his new opponent sternly warned, "Kurosaki Ichigo, you have interfered one time too many in Aizen-sama's plans. Give it up or I will have to force you to." The other person must have realized that Ichigo would not make his job as simple as it appeared while he was present. Getting Ichigo himself out of the picture was the quickest and most effective method. Ichigo also didn't intend to give the other person so much leeway. Ichigo said, "Bring it." With all the confidence he could muster. "I always make it a personal chore to not let Aizen get what he wants. Although I'm not sure about what he's thinking this time around by letting his Arankars fight by themselves, but whatever." Grimjow angrily yelled, "Ichigo, you fool," at the other's folly. "That's not someone you can take on so easily." Ichigo sneered as he verbally enticed the domination to attack him first, saying, "Espadas, dominations, paw. It doesn't matter what you call yourselves. In the end, you're just Arankars made from Aizen's stupid little Haugyoku." His subliminal threats appeared to be effective. If I'm gonna defeat Aizen in his mad schemes, I don't see any harm in finishing one or two of his lackeys as it is now. The other's Ryotsu surged to a ridiculously high level, nearly matching his own. With a low growl, the domination dropped his katana to the ground and picked up a pair of his more preferred teko kage from his back. "You talk big, human." In an experiment, he ran the longer than normal hand claws through the air. "I'm going to show you just how wrong you are to mess with us." Ichigo smiled and said, "Like I said earlier, bring it." The weapons clashed in a clang of steel as the two fighters charged at one another. Everyone in its path was blasted outward by the powerful gust of hot air from the explosion that had exploded upon impact, impairing their vision in the process. Running for his life and panting, Noitora screamed curse after curse at the domination that was right behind him. As the latter calmly and methodically pushed the Quinto Espada into a corner, Chad's eyes widened in shock. Chad reevaluated the expression on the black-clad Arrancar's face and decided that cool was not the right word. Bored would be his word of choice. With his chest heaving, Noitora spat angrily, "I'll get you back for this betrayal, Ira," as he fought in vain against the creatures that were always lunging at him. "Don't think that you'll get off this easily. Aizen. Sama will avenge my death." He interrupted himself in the middle of his sentence after a dog-like creature bit his thigh, causing him to gurgle. Ira's face twitched with the faintest of smiles. "How will your death be avenged when it was Aizen Sama himself who called for it?" he asked sarcastically. "It is a fact that you are no longer useful to Aizen Sama, as is it a fact that you will not live to see tomorrow when it comes." Simply witnessing the gory slaughter taking place in front of his eyes made Chad feel nauseous. As he waved a reckless hand forward, summoning more animalistic creatures from the sand and instructing them to rip and kill his fellow Arrancar, that domination, Ira, barely batted an eyelid. His ears stung like poison as Noitora's cries of pain rang through the atmosphere. He took a step forward, trying to clear his mind of the ringing of those agonized screams, and whispered, "Stop it." Before he could move forward another step, two huge, ungainly humanoid sand creatures suddenly arose, blocking his way with ominous crackling between their knuckles. The cries were agonizing. "Stop it!" Without even turning his head to acknowledge, the domination's scratchy voice called out, "Patience, Yasutora Sato. After I am done disposing of my brethren, I will do the same to you as well." It would not take long before that idiot succumbed to the pain and die. Chad found himself saying, "Stop that. Orders or not, you shouldn't torture him so." "Oh," the other seemed interested in that defiance. It was a mocking voice that said, "But that method of death befits such a monster like him greatly." The other person was being made fun of for not fighting much. Chad wasn't prepared for the Arrancar to make such a juvenile return. He yelled angrily, "Then you're no better a monster than he is." Teal eyes, glowing eerily through the gaps in his hollow mask, finally met Chad's and he snapped his mouth shut, asking, "Am I?" The pair that examined his face were emotionless and blank, unlike those of the 10th Division. Noitora has slaughtered more than 5,100 humans just because he was bored. He ate over 20,800 hollows in their places simply because they stood in his way. Ira approached Chad cautiously, pausing just in front of the two sand golems that loomed guard over the slender body of the domination. Apart from that, he is charged with 734 cases of disobedience and 399 cases of unwarranted assault. Do you still think that the punishment I am delivering to him is unjust, human? Even so. Chad nodded, though he stammered because of the intense stare that was fixed on him. He doesn't deserve that pain. No one deserves that much amount pain. Very well. I shall indulge your foolish whims just this once, human. To Chad's surprise, the domination snapped his fingers, and a sand vortex formed the shape of a dragon, complete with viciously sharp talons and a wide jaw full of razor teeth, roaring up into the fictitious skies. In one swift motion, it fell upon the bloodied Quinto, and when the other obviously exhaled his last breath, it dissolved into a formless pile of sand. Ira focused entirely on the wide-eyed Mexican who was kneeling on one knee a few meters away from him and said, "Now then. With the disturbance removed, I shall fulfill Aizen Sama's second command." A sinking sensation in Chad's stomach. He was already aware of what was going to happen next. Even though the other showed unexpected mercy, he was also an Arrancar who did as Aizen said. Teal eyes mercilessly squinted at the defenseless creature in front of him. "Furia, Rabia. Leave not a single bone untouched after you're done with him." Anger and rage. Chad thought it was appropriate for someone who was the embodiment of a madman's wrath as he prepared his fullbring and dodged the two large golems that had just a few milliseconds before smashed into him. He could still clearly recall the screams of the now dead Quinto and those emotionless teal eyes. Rukia scowled at the area where the other's eyes should have been on the mask, but because of the room's shade and the thickness of the hollow mask lining the other person's face, eye contact was impossible. She continued to examine the other, though, despite this. With a start, she said, "You're that Arrancar that gave me that warning before. Those domination." The harsh statement was, "You were quite observant." When the black-clad domination snapped his fingers, artificial light instantly filled the room, bringing to Rukia's attention details that had previously been obscured. The domination gave a disapproving cluck of his tongue. "It seems as though I might not have much left to do." You're barely a threat to Aizen Sama's existence as it is. Rukia grinned wryly, acknowledging that she must be in worse shape following her altercation with the Noveno Espada. Each fold of his robes was neatly pressed down and held in place with a white obi, and the other's black hair, matching his robes, neatly framed his masked face. I can't say the same for you. He reminded her of her knee. Sama, Byakuya, with his very dignified yet arrogant demeanor. With a Zanpakuto that resembled Ichigo's Tensei in its jet black double edged blade, the domination declared, "You already know what's going to happen next. I won't waste time on explanations then." He moved forward a step, then another, and vanished out of Rukia's view in an instant. Rukia turned to face a pair of black obsidian eyes that were ruthlessly staring down at her, her eyes widening in shock at the other's sheer speed. "Farewell, Kuchiki Rukia. Your death will be mourned." As soon as he said that, he slashed his sword through her upper torso, causing blood to instantly pour from the freshly made wound. Remarkably, Rukia experienced no pain. With a thud, she fell heavily to the ground, her already waning vision instantly obscured by patches of black. It was done. Actually, she could feel her body being drained of life. "I apologize, Orihime. I apologize, Ichigo." She closed her eyes, anticipating the last blow. She was shocked when it didn't arrive. She opened one eye and saw that the domination had not attempted to attack her again, but had just stood over her, scrubbing the blood from his sword indifferently. Rukia knitted her brows in perplexity. Was he being lenient toward her? No, she suddenly realized. That wicked jerk intends to abandon her in her current state. The slowest, most vexing way to bleed to death. She was okay with that. The victor had the right to decide how the loser would die, and he had won her handily in a match. "What is your name?" She could feel the other look at her with disinterest as he considered her query. After giving it some thought, he concluded that since she was going to die shortly, it was innocuous to tell her that information. Without emotion, he said, "You may call me Superbia. I am the domination of pride, Superbia." Suddenly, Rukia discovered that the idea of falling into a deep sleep was simply seductive right now. One final, uneasy thought crossed her mind as she passed out. She persevered to this day because of her pride. Her sense of pride in her skills, her friends, and Ichigo had been pierced through her body by its embodiment. The whole thing is ironic. It hurt like hell. As soon as the dust cloud disappeared from Ishida's vision, he had to suppress a cry of horror. Beside him, he could hear Renji doing the same. It only took a single, fleeting instant, and now they saw the sudden death of the Octava Espada. Zale gasped, "H. How?" as blood gathered around his feet and trickled down his chin. With many jet black spikes piercing through them, his body was held rigidly in place while his sharply clawed hands dangled uselessly down his side. "To think there was this much a difference in power between us." With a hint of resentment in his voice, the domination said, "It's precisely because of this difference that Aizen has decided that you're no longer useful." Zale coughed up more blood and sneered, "And that's supposed to be my fault? Don't jest yourself, Acedia. Once Aizen Sama finds himself a replacement for you, then you'll soon be finding yourself in my position today." Acedia interrupted me sharply, "That time won't come." He made a swishing motion with his arms, as if ordering his attack to kill Zale right then and there. Aizen Sama is already contented with the power he currently holds. There isn't any need for him to find more. But he was stopped in his tracks by the sounds of approaching footsteps. One new voice said sarcastically, "Oh, I won't be too sure about that. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so desperately trying to create the king's key as we speak." Acedia's eyes narrowed and he locked onto a figure that was heavily clothed. He recalled Ulquiorra's reports of Soul Society, with its clown-like features and flamboyant fashion sense. He sighed when he saw that the old fart in charge of his Shinigami team had finally taken action. It's about time. Idly observing that his conversation with Zale was coming to an end, he quickly withdrew his attacks from the other, causing the pink-haired Espada to gasp in agony. Zale spat out his final words with venom, his yellow eyes gleaming with rage and madness from within. "We'll meet in hell, Acedia. And I'll make sure that you suffer through 5 times the amount of every single pain I did." Acedia just waved his hand idly in his direction and clucked his tongue impatiently, which infuriated Zale more than ever. A moment later he was engulfed in black, and every part of his body was in pain. Then nothing was there. The recently arrived Shinigami captain shifted, angry at the Domasian's disregard, saying, "It seems as though Aizen had failed to install manners into you, boy. Never matter, I will note to do so once I have captured you for experimentation. I must say, I am extremely interested in your kind." Without even looking at the Shinigami captain in front of him, Acedia drew lead blandly, sadly, I can't say the same for you. There are too many of your kind running around to consider you a novelty. Anyways, we have been expecting you. Kuretsuchi Mayuri. Taiko. Allow us to give you a warm welcome on Aizen Sama's behalf. Mayuri smiled broadly down at the black-clad Arankar in front of him and said, I feel honored that you'd be my escort. Especially if you're as slothful as your name implies, Acedia. A frown replaced the smile on the young face of the Arankar in front of him, and the captain of the 12th Division felt a chill run down his spine. He heard muffled voices and looked down to see Kuchiki's lieutenant and the retarded Quincy gagged and bound by an unknown black substance. Acedia drew lead lazily. Oh, I won't be the one escorting you, Taiko. He had snapped his fingers and thrown both hostages into nearby rubble fragments behind him, knocking them out. The black material tightened its grip on both bodies with another snap of fingers, and with a sickening twist and a number of menacing popping sounds, it dislocated multiple joints, leaving the two limply on the ground. Even though it was an impolite way to make your opponent immobile, Mayuri reluctantly acknowledged that it worked. The barbarians, all of them. With an army of indifferent barbarians who catered to his every need, Aizen intended to overthrow the Soul King. Mayuri's instincts told him to move now as two dark, narrowed pupils finally locked into his own yellow ones. He attempted to shunpo a considerable distance from his possible test subject but discovered that his lower body was immobile. He looked down to see the black stuff already covering his lower torso in the other. How did he bind me without me noticing? Mayuri's thought was interrupted when he noticed a patch of ground that was glowing oddly in the sunlight. I see now. Bloody camouflage is a possibility for those eerie substances. He wanted to slap himself for not even thinking about it, because who would, really? Mayuri had to crack his neck as far back as he could to see the newcomer, and there was a swish of clothing behind him. He couldn't even tell that there was another of them nearby because there was no Ryotsu signature, no scent, and no shadow. How much time has she been waiting here? If he found Acedia's straight dot-cut black drapery interesting, the domination before him must be the total opposite. First of all, it was a woman. Additionally, she was wearing the most bizarre black outfit that clung tightly to her athletic body, revealing legs, stomach abs, and well-toned biceps. Finally, while her hollow mask, like most of the domination he had seen so far, concealed the top part of her head, it was unable to conceal the pink hair that spread out across her back. With a smirk that was hardly different from his typical monotonous drawl, Acedia said, Meet your escort, Avarisha. I wouldn't recommend playing around with her too much. She tends to get quite possessive if she thinks you're not treating her seriously enough. Avarisha chirped too happily. Let's get along well, shall we, Taiko? Before slamming her fist deep into the captain's abdomen at the same moment the black substance let go of him, sending the Shinigami flying 50 feet down into a huge crater made by the force of the single blow. Mayuri had no idea what had hit him. To get Aizen Sama's orders over with, Avarisha appeared all too eager to dive into the crater she had made and beat the captain to death. But before she could, she stopped, scowling and jerking her head to the side as if she were hearing a whispered message. Rubbing her temples in frustration, she whispered to her fellow domination, It seems as though Aizen Sama is finally getting serious. We need to leave. Now. Before he gets too impatient. Acedia flattened his robes and clucked his tongue once more before remembering his assault on the Quincy and Shinigami pair. Having heard the message as well, he muttered impatiently, Even with Sonito, it will take us at least 15 minutes to get there. Troublesome. Avarisha's amused emerald eyes greeted him, and then the two of them blinked out of the room, hurrying to their designated spot before their leader lost his temper with them. Ichigo swallowed a curse and quickly backpedaled out of the way, but just a moment later, a pair of jagged metal claws swung down on his location. After some time, Ichigo came to the conclusion that the domination in front of him must be a cyborg. The tanned Arankar in front of him appeared to be fighting hard despite the fact that fatigue was beginning to wear him down. They had been engaged in combat for more than 20 minutes, if not more powerful. It was not surprising that he soon found himself on the defensive, hardly able to escape the relentless barrage of attacks. His motivation was not greatly increased by Grimmjow mocking his weak attempts to avoid the other's claws from behind Orihime's Soden Kishin. Nothing he did appeared to disturb the Arankar, who was dressed in black. Not even his Bankai, which he was unable to adequately maintain due to a lack of Ryotsu. Ichigo grimaced, realizing that he could hardly fight the other any longer as it was. His opponent appeared to have read his defeatist thoughts because he stopped dead in his tracks, allowing Ichigo enough time to shunpo away and create enough space for him to either run away or keep fighting. The Arankar appeared to sulk, saying, Boring. You're as boring as hell, Kurosaki Ichigo. Fighting with you really doesn't pump me up one single bit. Are you even putting any goddamn effort into this fight? Ichigo was insulted. While many of his opponents have called him by a variety of names, boring was a new term for him. Boring? Me? I'll show you what's boring, you sonova. From beneath that hollow mask, he could almost feel the other rolling his eyes at him. The Arrancar spat out, your name is the only thing that's interesting here. Now if you're gonna continue wasting my time like this, I'll just get straight down to the main show and slaughter that blue-haired idiot and that woman. Ichigo yelled angrily, leave Orihime out of this. I won't let you lay a single finger on her. His opponent scoffed back, saying, you're just full of bark and no bite. Fine, I wanted to see what's so special about you, but it seems as though you're not as big shot as what others made you up to be. The other was in front of Ichigo's face and had already stabbed him in the stomach before he could even strike back. The Arrancar roughly withdrew his claws from the other, pushing him face first into the burning sand below, while Ichigo's mind reeled at the other's display of speed. Ignoring the orange-haired woman's cries of horror and dismay, he complained, stupid brat, I should have just done this from the start. As instructed by Aizen-sama, he moved forward to kill the other two, but he was stopped by a hand gripping his ankle. Leave. Orihime. Out of this, Ichigo exclaimed, clenching his jaw as he felt the pain. Something snapped inside the Arrancar. Perhaps it was the drama of it all, or the foolishness of both orange-haired people. In any case, he stomped one foot on the other's windpipe and kicked the teenage boy to lie face forward on his back, suffocating the idiot who had wasted his time. For heaven's sake, he needed to keep his agenda. From behind him, an angry voice hissed, what are you doing, Gyula? Whoa. It appeared that his enjoyment had been interrupted. Gyula did not stop what he was doing, but he casually threw his head back to give the other person a fixed look. Fulfilling orders, Luxuria. Luxuria interrupted, you mean you still haven't? As she saw Grimjow's stooped figure glaring back at her from beneath the protected shelter of the cliff. Oh, never mind. Forget that, we have to leave now. You received the message, haven't you? Gyula sarcastically exclaimed, screw that message. I won't have a peace of mind until I get rid of this eyesore. Before throwing his Teko Kage into the air for one last swing. That idiot can wait. With an impatient tugging motion with her hands, Luxuria yelled down at her fellow domination, don't be stupid, this takes first priority. Immediately thrown away from the gasping teenager, Gyula landed heavily behind her and steadied himself. She turned to glare at his disobedience and said, you know what'll happen if we disobey orders. Gyula sighed and stood up, making a calming gesture with his hands out in front of him. Alright, I got you. You lead the way then, cause I have absolutely no idea on how to get there. Then Luxuria snorted, figures. She reached up and grabbed one of the 6 hairpieces that held her hair back in place neatly, saying, but let's clean up the mess you failed to fix first. It was sleek, bone white, and razor sharp, and it slid out with ease. With a flick of her wrist, she tossed it recklessly to the base of the cliff where Grimjow, Ichigo, and Orihime were, and it broke up into tiny, microscopic particles. With another flick, the particles started to disperse, encircling the 3 in a hardly perceptible barrier. She responded to the 3 perplexed looks aimed at her by saying, you won't find yourself able to breathe anytime soon. I've set up a barrier that will prohibit all oxygen molecules from entering from it. Soon, there won't be any left for you to survive on. Ichigo regained enough breath to choke out. Why are you doing this? If it happens soon enough, forget about the fact that he will run out. Didn't you say that you wanted to rebel against Aizen at that time? Luxuria boldly said, don't misunderstand us, Kurosaki Ichigo. Aizen-sama is the sole reason that we're alive to this day. Without him, our existence would be meaningless. Naturally, anything that is a threat to him will be considered as a threat to us, and we'll deal with it accordingly. Even if your precious Aizen-sama will toss you away himself in the end, Ichigo replied. Because trust me, he will. Look at what he's ordering you to do to the Espada. Luxuria answered without missing a beat, even then, we will willingly die for him, as it meant that we have served our purpose for living. We also mentioned that the next time we meet, you'd be breathing your last. Goodbye, Grimjow, Ichigo. Luxuria quickly turned around and disappeared, followed a moment later by Gyula, who followed her. He blew a thank you whistle behind her. That was a bull load of crap. As expected from Her Majesty. I couldn't have done it any better myself. He never heard back from anyone. Superbia's flat voice echoed through the closed room, 10 minutes and 20.2 seconds. That's the amount of time you have to defeat me before the girl dies, Captain of the 6th Division, Kuchiki Byakuya. Byakuya quickly responded, standing guard over his step. Sister's fallen and bleeding body, it won't even take me 5 But he didn't hesitate to order Senbon Sakura to switch into Shikai mode, and a moment later, all of the glowing blades were charging at the domination with ravenous hunger, ready to extract blood. Superbia sternly cautioned, "Don't be too full of yourself." With ease, he ducked out Sonido after Sonido to avoid the Zanpakuto's path as he fought off the approaching blades. "If there's one thing I hate most in the world, that's losing. You have already lost the moment you allow Aizen to gain control over your very being." Byakuya replied with coolness. "Your very existence is a failure. A proof of a madman's broken belief that he is a being superior to gods. A belief that could never come true." Superbia smiled amusingly and said, "Oh, but it will." The Kuchiki frowned, not understanding what the other was saying. "There is no such thing as a god in this world. That makes Aizen Sama's ascension to one a lot easier, seeing as there isn't any competition to begin with in the first place. With us by his side, such a goal is easily attainable." As Byakuya interpreted the other's words, his eyes visibly widened. As the domination has said, that goal was actually very close to being accomplished if that was the wayward captain's true intention. Aizen may very well become a god when the time is right, especially with the 7 natural freaks at his side. The harsh, icy voice of Superbia pierced his mind, a bit too near for comfort, and said, "You're spacing out." Byakuya was only able to dodge a black blade that was slicing at his position a moment ago with a shunpo. He had escaped with a long, diagonal gash on his left forearm as it was. Byakuya narrowed his eyes and focused all of his Ryatsu on a single blade, saying, "Bankai. Senbon Sakura Kageyoshi." Senbon Sakura hardly had time to cover its master with a shield of pure white light before the thin black sword crashed upon it a few seconds later, barely obscured by the newly formed bird. Like aura. Shuki. Hakutaiken. The force behind the double-bladed sword was as slender as it was. Both fighters were flung backwards by the Ryatsu explosion, which put distance between them and allowed them time to launch another barrage of inevitable attacks. Idiotically, Superbia retreated a few paces away and said, "It looks like you've finally decided to get serious." He experimentally threw his melted sword out, as if to see if it was still functional. "Very well. Such willpower deserves a similar one in return." Superbia held out his battered blade in front of him, his eyes appearing to light up with Ryatsu beneath. "You shall now bear witness as to why we are Aizen Sama's strongest. Torikakomu, Dios de la Guerra." The sheer force of the Ryatsu the domination was feeding into his resurrection seemed to shake the entire room. The grand chandeliers dangled precariously from the lofty ceilings, and the floors shook, scattering loose debris onto the fighting men below. Rukia was quickly snatched under Byakuya's arm and hurled to safety at the far end of the pricey room. The Ryatsu surrounding Superbia appeared to condense into a massive skeleton that towered over the Irankar's thin body in protectiveness as the light faded. However, the domination himself hardly appeared to have changed in form, in contrast to the resurrection of many other Irankar. Purely humanoid, he remained in the middle of the power vortex. The only noticeable alteration was the slight shrinkage of the other's hollow mask, which revealed blood-red pupils that gleamed cruelly. This was made worse by the white estigma that ran in a straight horizontal line across his eyes. Byakuya's mind was racing. Superbia was emitting a Ryatsu that was too familiar to be comfortable. Byakuya felt dead pooling deep inside his stomach, especially since the domination had hardly displayed any resemblance to a hollow like appendage, despite the fact that a resurrection was meant to do just that, almost like. With a smirk in his arrogant voice, Superbia said, "It's almost like what your kind would call Bankai." With a final flick of his wrist, the skeleton that loomed over the Irankar erupted into blue flames, a fiendish hellfire that melted the stone. Hard floors and pillars all around him. This just means that Aizen Sama is just a step closer at perfecting the perfect being. As he readied his own Bankai for the arduous battle that lay ahead, Byakuya hardened his eyes. He sensed that Senbon Sakura was thriving on his will to triumph, spreading his white wings wide and curling up against him for protection. With all of his Ryatsu focused on that blade tip, his Hakutaiken extended as far as it could. A huge pillar of burning Ryatsu smashed behind him, forcing him to dodge forwards. It spread quickly, consuming everything within 20 feet. He looked up to see Superbia pointing at him with his index finger while pulling back his other hand as if to draw an invisible bow. As soon as the domination released his grip, Byakuya leapt quickly into the air, and the enormous skeleton threw another flaming arrow that flew past his feet. Byakuya began to dive towards Superbia, knowing that if he wanted to take down the other as quickly as possible, they would have to engage in close combat. However, the other was one step ahead of the captain. Superbia seemed to be able to read the other person's mind. The captain had to dodge again because Byakuya was always firing another Sero. laced arrow after a dodge. Superbia would carefully maintain the distance Byakuya was so determined to break by taking a step back with each step forward. His red eyes followed every minute of his movements and never left his form. Byakuya was quick to seize the opportunity when he finally noticed Superbia halting momentarily in his barrage of arrows. The captain dodged the marginally misdirected arrow in midair and quickly swung his focused Ryotsu sword deep into the skeleton's skull. A loud cracking sound shattered the room for a brief, terrifying moment. The skull's surface developed cracks, but his Hikutaiken was unable to pierce it any further. Superbia's piercing red eyes remained fixed on his person as he swung his left arm outwards and hissed in pain. When Byakuya saw that the blue flames were consuming everything in their path and swiftly approaching human flesh like a plague, he bit back a curse. Gokei. Byakuya commanded his Zanpakuto, which promptly obeyed by dissolving and dispersing in a loose circle throughout the domination. Byakuya made sure he was well out of the blast range with a well-executed shunpo, then closed an outreached palm. Senbon Sakura quickly complied with his order and squeezed down on the Arankar, who was dressed in black. The looming explosion never materialized. As Senbon Sakura was hurled outward, its tiny, sharp blades digging into the closest concrete slabs, Byakuya's eyes widened visibly. Your attacks are futile. To Byakuya's dismay, the smoke cleared to reveal Superbia in prim condition. You'll have to try harder than that if you wish to break my perfect defense. Superbia had set all of his small blades on fire with a single snap of his fingers, turning them into nothing more than charred metal fragments. Superbia walked languidly towards the captain's tense figure, which stood motionless in front of Rukia's unconscious body, his red eyes never leaving his face. Their destructive battle had destroyed the artificial lighting, leaving only the eerie blue flames that licked the grounds it stood on as a source of illumination. And Superbia, who was standing in the middle of the flaming wreckage, looked like a demon from hell. It will be satisfying to kill someone of your pedigree, Kuchiki Byakuya. Superbia sneered, his voice containing a hint of glee. To reduce someone as proud as you into something so defenseless and helpless. You've fallen to a new low the last time I saw you. Superbia's gaze instantly shifted to a location behind Byakuya's figure. The captain turned around and saw an unidentifiable figure separating from the shadows at the wall's edge. The other's unique features, a set of whiskered marked cheeks and a stalk of startlingly yellow hair, were quickly brought to light by the blue light from the flames. Byakuya said stoically, Lieutenant of the 13th Division, you're late. For a brief moment, blue pupils devoid of their typical glee and mischievousness locked onto his own in confirmation before swiftly returning their focus to the Arankar. After a brief moment of intent killing, deep red Ryotsu frothed into view, enveloping its owner in a red cloak of highly condensed, potent magma. Sorry, I was busy getting the playing field into shape. Byakuya concluded that he had truly taken his opponent too lightly if the domination could get the newcomer to elicit such a strong response from the latter. The blonde cut through the captain's thoughts, saying, take Rukia and go. You know Hana, Taiko and Kenpachi. Taiko seemed to need in dealing with a certain Zero Espada. I'll handle things here. As he lifted Rukia from under his arms, Byakuya reluctantly agreed, saying, come back alive. Seirei still have uses for you. He was aware that he was no longer capable of fighting. He would need some time to restore his Zanpakuto to its former state because Senbon Sakura had been completely destroyed and reduced to melted rubble. We'll see. Byakuya's stoic composure was broken by the other person's hesitant smile. He was shocked to learn that the other person had indeed traveled to Hueco Mundo with the goal of settling there for good. Byakuya had no desire to stop the blonde Shinigami, but the old man would not be happy. Byakuya sighed and turned, racing into the wide desert from the crumbling burning building. He was the only person in the world who truly deserved to pursue his happiness. As he imagined what the other Godai 13 captains would say in response, the corners of his mouth quirked up. I thought you would intercept sooner than this, Uzumaki Naruto. Despite Superbia's expressionless face, Naruto's lips curled into a tiny smile at the bewilderment in his words. What can I say? This is a new place for me. A man can't help but stop to sightsee, can he? Superbia gave the other's slack response a disapproving frown. They did say curiosity killed the cat. Naruto fixed his eyes on the figure in front of him and hardened his gaze, saying, Bah, the cat has 9 lives, it won't be killed off so easily. As if looking for an answer he couldn't find, his gaze moved from top to bottom across the black-clad Arankar. Apparently, you won't either. He never heard back from anyone. He wasn't expecting one in return, so it was okay. Naruto repositioned his grip on the scythe to better fit his hand and brandished it warily against his body. He gave the other a sour smile. It's been a while, Sasuke,
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.